A wooden stall stood at the center of the crowd, barely holding its ground as customers waved their hands and leaned in, desperate to be noticed. Behind the counter, a young clerk anxiously asked his assistant to give him 3 of the small ones and 2 of the big ones. She said she understood, but before complying, she quickly handed an order to another customer. Not long after, the frenzy was finally over because they sold out. The assistant told the clerk, Shiro, that they did it. Shiro remarked that the sale went so well, and he also praised the assistant for being helpful. Just then, he decided to look at their profit for the day. He found that they earned 51 silver coins and 10,900 bronze coins, and if they converted that into Japanese yen, that would be over 1,600,000. Their capital was 127,550 yen, so their profit was incredibly huge. Shiro couldn't believe it, as he struggled to believe that the calculations were correct. As they stared at their earnings, the assistant said that she had no idea they could make that much. She thought it was awesome, especially since Shiro could sell so easily. To her, he was like a magician. Embarrassed, Shiro claimed that it was nothing like that, and he said she was exaggerating. Back in modern Japan, Shiro couldn't believe that the place in front of him even existed. At that moment, he was standing in a forest. Behind him was a town in the distance, and it looked like something from a fantasy world. Looking at the sky, there were 2 moons. However, in front of him, there was a Japanese-style room where his grandma's altar was placed. Shiro tried to assess the situation before him. His full name was Amata Shiro, and he had just moved into the house his grandmother had left him. When he opened the altar room closet, he found something peculiar. It was a channel to another world. He thought there was no way this strange phenomenon could have happened. He even convinced himself that he was just exhausted. He had just resigned from a black company the previous month, so he assumed he was overthinking. Bro had some serious PTSD. He laughed it off, thinking it was just a hallucination. However, when he took a closer look, he realized that it wasn't. He suddenly thought of his grandma, wondering if it was the secret she had mentioned. His grandma went missing 7 years ago and was finally proclaimed dead by the government the previous month. Back when he was a boy, he impatiently asked her to tell him her secret already. His grandma only laughed, playfully saying that it wouldn't be a secret if she told him. Annoyed, he slapped her hand away, saying that he hated her. Still, his grandma kept a smile on her face, promising that she would tell him once he got older. In the end, Shiro's grandma passed away without telling him, and he could still remember her doing the double peace pose back when she promised to reveal the secret. Her past photo was of her hitting a double peace pose, even though Shiro told her not to. She took the secret to the grave like a champ. Just then, he noticed a letter placed behind his grandma's picture frame. It was for him. He was surprised, and he wondered if it could be her will. In the letter, his grandma apologized for not telling him the truth about a magician who came to Japan 80 years ago from a different world named Rufartio. Essentially, there were 6 main points in the letter. First, the closet was connected to a world named Rufartio. Second, in Rufartio, magic, skills, and other strange powers existed. Third, there were also dangerous monsters. Fourth, there were other races besides humans. Fifth, his grandma had put a ring in the envelope that would help Shiro understand the language of another world. Sixth, he should put on the ring and read the book behind the altar. His grandma reassured him that he would understand once he got there. Shiro was stunned after reading the letter, and he felt like it was too much information. That's not a letter, that's onboarding. He immediately checked for the ring, and sure enough, it really was there. There were also 2 books, but he couldn't make out the language used in them. Just then, he recalled his grandma's words, telling him to put the ring on and read the book. When he wore the ring, he was shocked to see how cool its ability was. He wondered how he could suddenly read the book's contents. Still, he couldn't understand it at all. Suddenly, he heard a notification informing him that he had received a skill called equivalent exchange. Frightened, he accidentally dropped the books, wondering who that was. He frantically looked around, but there was no one there. He wondered if this meant he got a skill, just like in light novels or games. Suddenly, another notification popped up, telling him that he acquired the skill called inventory. Shiro noticed that he heard a voice every time he got a skill. Suddenly, he shut the book closed, claiming that he was done. He then stared at the ceiling, thinking of what he should do next. Just then, an idea came to mind. He wanted to go to another world with his new power. Decision-making powered by vibes. He was reminded of his grandma's letter, where she told him not to worry because he would understand once he got there. Shiro asked himself if he should go or not. Just then, he remembered how his grandma always said that she wanted him to go out and travel. However, it was already late, and he still needed to buy some food at the home center the next day. The very next morning, Shiro prayed at his grandma's altar, and he told her that he would go. Right after that, he packed his bag and prepared to go on an adventure. Shiro stepped into a different world, and he followed the path right before him. Not long after, he found quiet homes scattered across the land, but he kept right on walking. Soon, he walked into a bustling town. filled with festive banners and travelers of different races roaming the streets. Stalls also lined the paths, their displays overflowing with fresh produce and goods. All of this impressed Shiro, and he remarked that the town was quite nice. However, he noticed that walking made him hungry. Suddenly, one of the vendors called out to him, wondering if he wanted a skewer. The vendor said he'd give it at a discount, which made Shiro's mouth water. Shiro asked what meat it was, and the vendor proudly said that it was horned rabbit meat. He could get that much for just 3 bronze coins. Though it sounded like a good deal, Shiro had to apologize to the vendor because he didn't have any money with him. The vendor was confused because it seemed like Shiro was simply asking. Bro was window shopping meat. As Shiro kept walking, he couldn't stop thinking about the horned rabbit meat because it looked so delicious. Just then, he checked his pockets and found that he had 4,200 yen. It was his change after buying from the convenience store before coming to this world. He groaned, wishing he could buy that skewer with Japanese yen. Then, as if the gods themselves heard him, his money evaporated from his right palm, and on his left a couple of coins fell out of nowhere. Shocked, Shiro wondered what this was. His money had just been magically converted, and he thought there was no way it could happen. Exchange rates fear him. Without wasting time, he ran back to the stall that sold the skewers. He held the coin by his face and asked the vendor if this was what he meant by bronze coin. Confused, the vendor confirmed what was definitely obvious. Shiro awkwardly laughed while the vendor assumed that he was a traveler from another country. He could tell by the look of his clothes, which was visibly different. Shiro immediately lied that his guess was right, which made the vendor glad. He happily told Shiro that the bronze coin was what he was talking about. Just then, Shiro smirked, realizing that this was the equivalent exchange skill at work. Suddenly, Shiro asked the vendor to give him not just 2, but 3 skewers. To make it even better, the vendor informed him that it would be 8 bronze coins because he had come all that way. Right away, Shiro received his order. He immediately thanked the vendor for his kindness, and without wasting time, he opened his mouth wide. However, as soon as he took a bite, he noticed something peculiar. This was his first meal from another world, but it was so plain. There was no seasoning at all. Bro ate medieval sadness. As he kept eating, he thought about the equivalent exchange skill and what it could do. The problem was whether he could return it to Japanese yen. He sighed, knowing that the skill was unconsciously activated earlier. Just then, Shiro expressed his wish to exchange the bronze coins for Japanese yen. To his surprise, it actually turned back. This meant that using equivalent exchange, he could convert currencies to either world's currency. In other words, if he earned a lot of money there, he would be rich in Japan too. He was stunned as he only then realized how great this skill was. Next, he wanted to try using 10,000 yen with the equivalent exchange skill. The skill did its magic, and to Shiro's surprise, the color was different from earlier. He wondered if it was a silver coin, but to make sure, he asked the vendor if he could use it. The vendor felt uneasy, and he asked if he had run out of bronze coins. He revealed that he didn't have enough change for Shiro's silver coin. At that moment, Shiro realized that 1 silver coin was equivalent to 10,000 yen, and 1 bronze coin was about 100 yen. Currently, he had 2 silver coins and 34 bronze coins. He couldn't use 50 or 1 yen because the lowest currency in this world was bronze, meaning the minimum requirement to use the skill was 100 yen. His brain suddenly went accountant mode. With his new knowledge, Shiro tossed the silver coin in the air with joy. From the vendor's reaction, the money he brought should be enough to explore the entire town. With that, he planned to explore some more. As he wandered deeper, he started to wonder what this place was because it was so lively. His eyes widened with curiosity, knowing that this was the world's marketplace. He wanted to talk to the people around him, especially the girl with cat ears. Suddenly, Shiro noticed that everyone was staring at him. This made him believe that his clothes were truly that strange. Their gaze was starting to hurt him, so he decided to buy some clothes. However, just as he was about to leave, a little girl approached him, nervously wondering if he wanted a flower. Shiro was surprised to see that it was a kid, so he politely asked how much she was selling the flowers for. The girl's face lit up with hope, and she quickly told Shiro that it was 3 bronze coins. She immediately changed her mind and decided it was only worth 2 coins. Shiro pondered the price, which made the girl anxious. She asked if it was too expensive, so she decided to change the price to 1 coin instead, price dropping faster than crypto. Just then, Shiro pointed at the yellow flower and he gave the girl his payment. To her shock, he gave her 3 bronze coins. Shiro nonchalantly mentioned the girl's first price, but she still asked if it was really okay. Shiro confirmed it, but in return he wanted her to tell him something. Before saying anything more, Shiro asked the girl for her name and she replied that it was Aina. Shiro introduced himself in return, and he said it was nice to meet her. He held his hand out to Aina, telling her to simply call him Shiro. Aina shook his hand, and she said it was nice to meet him too. Just then, Shiro moved on to the next question. He asked what the name of the town was, which immediately puzzled Aina. Shiro explained that he was a traveler, so Aina ended up explaining everything to him. Thanks to her, he got a lot of information. This town was a district of Gilawam's kingdom named Ninarich. There were 3 kinds of currency there. 100 bronze coins were equal to 1 silver coin, and 100 silver coins were equal to 1 gold coin. 1 gold coin was also equal to 1 million yen. The average income there was up to 8 silver coins a month, and it seemed like only a few people had gold coins in that town. On top of that, no one was allowed to do business without arrangements with the local government, even for a kid like Aina. Shiro smiled because he heard something good. Just then, Shiro asked Aina if she could sell him 10 more flowers. Shocked, Aina asked if he was serious. Shiro handed her his coins, claiming that he was serious. If he bought just one, he couldn't use it for decoration and it would be too plain. Without hesitating, he gave her 30 bronze coins. Aina stuttered, then she broke down in tears while thanking him. This is wholesome damage. Shiro smiled at her, knowing his grandma would be happy with the flowers. Aina was curious about his grandma, but Shiro said it was nothing and thanked her for the flowers instead. Just then, Aina laughed through her tears because he said the flowers were beautiful. Suddenly, Shiro asked Aina to show him where the government office was. Aina was more than happy to do it, and she promised to take him there. She showed him the way and urged him to follow her. Not long after, Aina and Shiro finally arrived at the government office building. Aina proudly showcased the building, which left Shiro in awe. Just then, he asked if it was okay because he was a foreigner. He was worried they might arrest him, but Aina reassured him that it was fine and that everyone there was kind. However, Aina's words weren't so accurate when Shiro had to face a strange grandma who stared at him with an angry look. She demanded to know if he was from another country. Immigration anxiety speedrun. Shiro froze because the woman scared him so much. He quickly replied that he was a foreigner, more or less. Just then, the grandma told him to write his name and business hours, then indicate how he would be selling his wares. He could be a hawker type, one who sells wares by carrying them through the streets and earns about 10 bronze coins per day. He could be a peddler type, who also earns 10 bronze coins per day, or a shop owner type who could earn 3 silver coins per day. He could choose any of the 3. They literally said, choose your poverty level. For a shop type, the contract would be a minimum of 10 days. For now, Shiro wanted to try the second type for 5 days starting tomorrow. He could write in the language of another world because of the ring's effects, which stunned Aina. After that, Shiro handed the form to the grandma. When she read his name, she remarked that it was strange. As the woman checked the form, Shiro thought about the 1,000 yen per day payment. Now that he thought about it, opening a shop in a flea market around Tokyo costs around 3,000 yen. Shiro smiled, gladly saying that it was so cheap. He realized that he had just said that out loud, and he even forgot that he didn't know the prices in this world. That confidence was premature. Just then, the grandma mentioned how cheap it was. The mayor was the one who regulated the prices. For the sake of the town, she hoped his business would prosper. Shiro agreed with her and he thanked her. The whole thing only took 15 minutes, and he was surprised that everything went smoothly. After that, Shiro planned to go back to the market. He thanked Aina for her help, and she hesitantly said goodbye to him. Shiro slowly walked away, but before he could go far, Aina frantically told him that the market wasn't that way. She redirected him to the right path, and she walked alongside him. As they went through the market, Aina asked Shiro if he had already decided what to sell tomorrow. Shiro proudly started talking about his merchandise, but then he realized that he hadn't thought about it yet. He now wondered what he could sell in the market. Aina suggested selling goods for adventurers, as there were many of them in town. Shiro thought she was right since he saw that a lot of people in the market were dressed like adventurers. Aina explained that it was because many monsters spawned in the nearby forest, and adventurers came to the town to aim for the drop items. Shiro shivered in fear, realizing that it was the same forest that he had gone through. It turned out that there were many monsters there, and he was lucky that he was still alive. Ignorance really was bliss. While Shiro thought about the concept of selling goods for adventurers, Aina shared that it was the exact reason why her flowers didn't sell that well. Shiro was surprised to hear it, but Aina reassured him that she was happy because he bought so many flowers from her. She twirled around in joy, saying that she was so happy to have met him. Shiro felt shy, and he told her that she was making him blush. Suddenly, Aina asked if he wanted her to guide him around the market. Shiro was surprised by the offer, but he didn't dare to decline. After that, Aina showed him the lantern and flint shop, the cape and sleeping bag shop, the knife and whetstone shop, and the rope shop. Shiro noticed that there were many shops that sold adventurer goods, and Aina agreed, noting that it was exactly as she said. Shiro found her comment funny, so he playfully hit her back. However, it turned out that he hit her too hard, causing her to cough. Aina got friendly fired. Not long after, Aina dragged him all around town. She showed him the preserved food shop and more. At that moment, Shiro realized that Aina was such a good kid, and he predicted that she would become a good wife someday. Jesus Christ, she's 8, bro. As Aina talked about the shops that sold lantern oil and stew, Shiro's mind was elsewhere. He thought about wanting a beautiful wife and daughter as soon as possible. Suddenly, Aina noticed that he wasn't listening, so she asked if he had heard her. Shiro asked what she said, so Aina asked him if he had already decided what to sell. He said that he did, causing Aina to demand that he tell her what it was. Shiro revealed his answer through a whisper, which confused Aina. Clueless, she asked what that was. He said it like contraband. The next day, Shiro started his day by stretching his muscles. It was now time to prepare his goods. Aina suddenly approached him, greeting him with a good morning. Shiro asked if she was going to sell flowers again that day, and she confirmed that she would. She woke up early to harvest them. Shiro remarked that the flowers were beautiful and that she would surely sell many that day, which made Aina chuckle. She was determined to sell many flowers and buy medicine for her mother. Aina didn't stay for long, and she bid Shiro goodbye. She asked passers-by if they wanted a flower, but she accidentally got bumped into and knocked down. Despite falling to the ground, Aina remained optimistic and still asked random people if they wanted to buy from her. Hustle culture final boss. Shiro, who was watching her from afar, hoped that she could do it. He also promised to do his best. Just then, an adventurer approached Shiro, asking him what he was selling. The adventurer picked up one of the products, guessing that it was a box made from paper. He asked if it was a handicraft, but Shiro explained to him that it was a thing called matches. Inside the box, there was a small piece of wood that could produce fire. The adventurer was puzzled, as he had never heard of it before. Curious, he asked how the small piece of wood could produce fire. Shiro simply demonstrated the whole thing to the adventurer, showing him that by holding the wood and striking it on the side, he could create fire. Shiro thought it was easy, but the adventurer remained quiet. While he was demonstrating the way to use the matches, the adventurer suddenly freaked out, asking what the hell it was. He screamed as if he had witnessed witchcraft, proving just how shocked he was. That match broke his worldview. The adventurer, who was now sitting on the ground because of how startled he was, asked Shiro how he did such a thing. The crowd started gathering around Shiro, making him wonder just what the commotion was all about. He guessed that this was their first time seeing something like that. To simply answer the adventurer's question, he decided to show him again one more time. He lit the match, and as its flames started to glow, Shiro saw the same flabbergasted look the adventurer had flashed earlier. The crowd was baffled while Shiro raised the lit match as if he were performing a miracle. Bro is living for this moment. The crowd wondered what on earth this was, as they couldn't believe that just by striking the stick on the paper one could create fire. They wondered if this was a magical tool, but some thought it was impossible because they had never seen anything like it. Shiro struck while the iron was hot, and he immediately asked who wanted to try it. He promised it was easy and that anyone could do it. He lit a stick and became the Elon Musk of arson. Overcome by curiosity, some of the people volunteered to see for themselves. They lit up the matches and they were beyond amazed. As Shiro watched everything unfold, he told himself that things seemed to be coming together. When perusing through the market the previous day, he recognized something. This world, well, at least this city, turned out to have never heard of matches. So the previous day, he went back to his side and bought some matches to bring back to this world. A dwarf from the crowd remarked that he had lived for over 250 years, yet he had never once in his long life seen something quite like it. The adventurer from earlier agreed, noting that it was an amazing creation. He added that flint and steel worked, but it took an unbelievably long amount of time to get it to light. Additionally, carrying heavy magic tools with him wherever he went was also extremely troublesome. But alas, it was the burden of not having any witches in his party that meant he had to spend ages getting a fire started. Shiro talked as if he had experienced it himself, and he agreed with the man. He then went on to say that they no longer had to be shackled to such troublesome and costly options. He brought them freedom, and he brought them fire. Shiro spoke confidently as if he were pitching a project. Just then he raised a box of matches, making the crowd erupt in awe. "Sir, this ain't Shark Tank." He suggested that everyone buy one for themselves, and they immediately agreed to the idea. However, the adventurer suddenly asked Shiro to wait a second. He agreed that it was an amazing creation, but he wanted to know how much the matches cost. The crowd agreed with the adventurer's point, and they now guessed that the product was expensive. Meanwhile, Shiro smiled as the question had finally crossed everyone's minds. He's plotting this like a cult leader. He asked if they wanted to know how much it was, and the adventurer guessed that something around 80 bronze coins would be fair. Shiro listened closely while analyzing in his mind that one bronze coin would be equal to 100 yen, 75 British pence, or 95 American cents. He was starting to make sense of everything. He then began to go over the basics. To put it simply, he had two choices in how to sell the matches. He could sell them as a high-end good at a high-end price, or he could sell them for a lower price but make up for it by selling more. In the first method, the money in each transaction would be large. However, because the price was higher, fewer people could afford it, and therefore the number of buyers would be limited. The second method opposed this, in which everyone could afford the product, but this would mean that the profit made per item would be considerably smaller. With this in mind, he could only go with one method. Just then, Shiro firmly slammed the matches on the table, announcing to everyone that they contained 40 matches. For that day only, as a special price for the opening of his store, they could have it for only 5 bronze coins. The crowd was speechless. Then they expressed how amazing it was. One wanted to buy 10 matches, while another desperately wanted 20. Before Shiro could hand out any of the matches, he told them that the product wouldn't work when exposed to water and humidity, so they should be careful where they took them. That day, Shiro's matches sold well, but that sounded a bit like an understatement. He sold matches to around 100 people. As the day ended, Shiro told an old geezer that all the matches were sold, but he promised to give him a queue number for the next day. The old man asked what that even was, and he corrected Shiro, saying that he was only 120 years old. Shiro was stunned, not knowing how to respond. Shiro accidentally age-shamed a fossil. Later on, he lay down on his mat, exhausted from dealing with so many people. If this continued the next day, even more people would show up. Just then, he noticed that the sky had gotten cloudy. His mind then wandered elsewhere, and he wondered if he could handle it all by himself the next day. He shrugged this thought aside and convinced himself that he should be all right. He shouldn't need any flowers tomorrow, though. Elsewhere, Ina kept on selling flowers on the streets. She enthusiastically asked if anyone wanted to buy some flowers, and she noted that they were cheap. Suddenly, Shiro's voice broke through the air calling for her. Ina turned around and asked what he needed, and she was quite surprised to see Shiro. She worriedly asked about his store, so Shiro told her that he had sold all his matches and had to close the store for the day. Ina was shocked, and she thought it was incredible. Shiro asked how her business was doing, but she instinctively hid her flowers behind her. She felt embarrassed because it wasn't going well. Meanwhile, Shiro is printing money with sticks. Suddenly her eyes began to water and she wondered why her flowers weren't selling. Worried, Shiro asked if she was all right. Ina quickly turned around to wipe her tears and she told him not to mind her. Suddenly, she dashed off and told Shiro not to worry. She excused herself to sell some flowers, though Shiro asked her to wait. Before she could disappear, Shiro held her hand, pleading with her to listen to his words for just a moment. Ina was surprised, so she stayed to hear him out. Soon after, Ina let out a sound of pure confusion. She asked what he had just said, so Shiro repeated himself. He was wondering if she wanted to help him at his shop. He solved her problems with minimum wage. Ina wondered if he was really okay with her helping, but Shiro told her not to be like that. It was precisely because she was Ina that he specifically wanted her help, and of course she would get paid for doing so. Ina was stunned into silence, but she mustered the courage to say that she would do it. She wanted to work at Shiro's shop, and there was no way that she wouldn't. Shiro thanked Ina, but she argued that he didn't have to say that. She awkwardly held his hand, telling him that she was no good at selling, and none of her flowers had even gotten sold. Because of that, she really had to thank him. Shiro heard so many humble thanks coming out of Ina's mouth, and his heart was so moved that he swore to work hard. He knew he had to work at full force at the store tomorrow. Shiro asked Ina if he would be seeing her tomorrow, and she confirmed it. Not long after, they bid each other goodbye, and they soon parted ways. When he was finally alone, Shiro quickly hid in an alley. He was relieved that the coast was clear as he didn't want to get caught. Suddenly, he muttered the words, "Open Sesame," and the portal to his grandma's home in Japan opened before him. Bro could have thought of a better password. Apparently, this portal was connected to his closet, and it could be summoned anywhere just by thinking about it. He could only hope that no one would start making any innuendos about it. Finally, it was time for him to go home. Shiro simply jumped into the portal, and he soon found himself back in his grandma's house. As soon as he got settled, he took out the silver and copper coins that he earned that day. He used the equivalent exchange skills, and like clockwork, the coins turned into Japanese yen. He calculated his earnings for the day, and the total shocked him. He couldn't believe it, and it even scared him. Compared to his monthly salary back in that dead-end job, the sale of the matches came close, and he was only open for an hour. If this all went well, living as a NEET for the rest of his life could be an actual possibility. Bro's thinking of retirement after receiving his first paycheck. However, instead of talking about idle dreams, he decided to start making his preparations for the next day. Shortly after, Shiro headed to the grocery store. As he strolled around with a shopping cart, he tried to locate the matches, which were usually kept in a certain part of the store. Finally, he found the product, and to his surprise, it was a variety called Survival Match, and it was wind and water resistant. He wondered what on earth this was because he didn't even know that they existed. He thought he must have been blind not to have seen them before. He found premium loot in aisle 3. He immediately hoarded a bunch of the survival matches, knowing he was going to make an absolute stinking profit out of those adventurers. He filled up his cart, and he hoped it was enough. After that, Shiro headed to the counter to pay for the matches. The cashier felt alarmed by everything that Shiro bought, and he wondered what kind of arsonist he was serving. At that moment, Shiro thought it was safe to say that he didn't think this through. There was no way that he could carry all of those home. Suddenly he remembered something. He might just use the equivalent exchange skill. After that, Shiro took the carts and bags filled with matches, and he headed to a secluded part of the parking lot. There he closed his eyes and muttered the words spatial storage. To his surprise, an eye-shaped portal appeared out of thin air. Biblically accurate storage unit. Shiro was stunned by the sight of it, but he couldn't stop there. One by one, he started tossing the matches into the eye-shaped portal. Soon after, he tossed entire carts into it to finish his task faster. Shiro screamed in victory, overjoyed that he had his very own pocket dimension. He had to lug around all those matches in his bag yesterday, and thanks to his old job, his back was in a real sorry state. However, there was no way on earth that he could have used the same bag for the amount of matches he had just bought. Suddenly, numbers started showing on his screen, making him wonder what it was about. He could see all the information about the items he stored in the spatial storage. If Shiro was being honest, those abilities were getting scarily powerful. He was now starting to wonder what his grandma was doing to get those. Just then, Shiro grinned because he never had to carry anything ever again. He looked at his hand, knowing this power wasn't natural at all. However, he chose to ignore that. He planned to sell matches at the market for the next 4 days, and after that, he would decide his next step. With his powers, he declared that he would be a very rich man. Suddenly, a little girl and her mother happened to pass by Shiro. The girl pointed at him, telling her mother that the strange man from the store was talking to himself again. However, the girl's mother told her not to point her fingers at strangers because she didn't know where they had been. Shiro froze, and he decided to quickly shut up and return home to prepare for the next day. Talking to yourself is fine until witnesses spawn. The next day, Aina informed her mother that she would now be leaving. Her sickly mother hoped that she would have a nice day, but then she asked if Aina wasn't taking the flowers with her. Aina smiled and said no. Then she shared that she would be helping Shiro. Meanwhile, Shiro spoke to his grandma's picture on the altar, letting her know that he would now be heading out. Afterward, he turned to face the portal before him and stepped forward without hesitation. The moment he entered the other world, he felt eager to finally get started. Shortly after, Shiro saw Aina from afar, and he called out to her. She greeted him with a good morning, and he returned the favor. He hoped he didn't make her wait long, but Aina reassured him that she had just gotten there. Shiro playfully asked if that was really the truth, so Aina admitted that she had waited for a little while. After all, the customers were already there. To Shiro's surprise, the entire alley where his store was located was filled with desperate customers. Nobody said it was Black Friday. He was shocked, wondering how there were so many already. Aina was excited and said that they should do their best, while Shiro anxiously asked her to wait. He hurriedly opened his bag because he still had to set everything up. Suddenly, he caught sight of just how many customers there were, and he started to worry. They were even blocking the nearby street shops. Shiro thought this was bad, and he knew it well because he was once a former corporate slave. He predicted that this could lead to trouble. Suddenly, someone told Shiro that he had a great line, so he immediately apologized and promised to organize it right away. Just then, he recognized the person talking to him. It was the Lord of the Rotisserie. The rotisserie man heard rumors about this new item called a match, and he couldn't believe it was Shiro all along. Suddenly, the rotisserie man asked if something had gone wrong because he seemed rather swamped with customers. Overwhelmed, Shiro explained everything to the man. After hearing Shiro's story, the rotisserie man agreed that it truly was an issue. The woman accompanying him remarked that if that was the case, then they had their stall on the outskirts of the town, and they could let Shiro use it free of charge for that day. It also meant he could stop bothering the other stalls. Shiro asked if she was sure, and the woman confirmed it and told him not to sweat it because it was their day off anyway. Shiro stuttered, and he thanked the woman and the rotisserie man. Just then, he asked the rotisserie man if the woman was his wife, but it turned out that she was his sister. Shiro was stunned as he saw no resemblance at all. Brother got nerfed in the womb, and so Shiro and Aina followed the rotisserie siblings to the location of the stall. Not long after, they finally saw it with their own eyes. Shiro and Aina felt hyped, and they immediately got started. Shiro began by orienting Aina, and he reminded her one more time that when he would say S, she should pass him the little one, and if he said B, she should pass him the big one. He reminded her not to forget that they also had the survival matches. Though Aina seemed out of it, she reassured Shiro that he could leave it to her. Concerned, Shiro asked if she was okay because she seemed a little nervous. After that, they finally opened their store. Shiro apologized to the long line of eager customers for the delay, but he reassured them that they would now be opening for the day. To start off, he called those who had priority tickets to come to the front of the line. Shortly after, he told Aina to give him 3S and 2B. Before she could even get to that, he gave her another order for 5S and 1B. Aina was so startled that she ended up dropping the matches. Additionally, she was too tiny to reach the stall, so she always ended up apologizing for the delay. Dude, this is literally child labor. Suddenly, Shiro told her to fetch 4 survival matches, and he also checked on her to see if she was good. Despite being anxious, Aina apologized and said that she was okay. In the middle of the chaos, Aina paused for a moment, realizing how amazing this was. The matches sold out in the blink of an eye. Shiro tended to customers left and right, proving just how the matches were selling at a crazy speed. Aina's eyes lit up with excitement, and she wondered if this was the hidden joy of trading. Not long after, they were once again sold out. Aina asked if they seriously sold everything, and he confirmed it and thanked her for her help. Shiro also thanked the rotisserie siblings, and they happily said no problem. After that, he calculated all their sales, and he couldn't believe the results. He thought there was no way it was possible. Yesterday, he thought he could earn 200,000 per hour, but after only 3 hours, he got around 1.5 million. That was almost 490,000 yen an hour. Shiro felt dazed at the thought of it, and he now wondered if this was what millionaires earned. Knowing the amount he had, he decided that he had to get a move on before someone could have any bright ideas. He packed the coins in his backpack, but he failed to realize that it would all be too heavy for his back. The weight of the coins almost caused him to break his spine. Capitalism weighed him down literally. He thought about using his pocket dimension, but he believed that using it in front of other people was a bad idea. With his head planted upside down on the ground, he admitted that this wasn't going to work. Just then, Shiro handed a pouch of coins to Aina, telling her that it was her pay for the day. Aina bowed with humility, thanking Shiro. Shiro suggested using the money to buy something nice for her mother, and he commended her for being a great help that day. However, Aina argued that she should be the one to thank him for letting her work. She wanted to express her gratitude further, but Shiro interjected and told her to stop saying this thank you nonsense. He insisted that she was the one who helped him. This annoyed Aina, and she complained about wanting to thank him. Her reaction amused Shiro, and he ended up laughing. Aina had no choice but to yield, so she let out an exasperated sigh. Just then, Shiro remembered that they hadn't taken a break all day, so he suggested having a quick bite to eat. He rummaged through his bag and presented Aina with sandwiches from Japan, which immediately bewitched her. She curiously asked if it was bread, and Shiro replied that it was a sandwich to be precise. Aina's mouth watered, as it was her first time seeing bread so white. Without wasting time, she took a big bite of the sandwich, and she raved about how amazingly good it was. She tasted mayo and ascended. Shiro asked if it really was, but he was glad she thought so. As they ate beside the stall, a woman suddenly approached them, asking if they minded if she took a minute of their time. Shiro asked if she was talking to him, and she confirmed it. The woman heard that someone was selling some new items called matches in the town, and she assumed Shiro was the seller. Shiro confirmed that he was, but he was sorry to tell her that the item she was looking for had been sold out for the day. Suddenly, the woman revealed that she didn't come to buy matches. She came to see Shiro. The woman introduced herself as Karen Sankareka, the mayor of the town. He accidentally summoned the government. Shiro couldn't believe that a woman was the mayor of Ninorich. He thought there was no way that such a young and beautiful woman would have such a title, as he was expecting someone like a buff guy with a mustache. Turns out leadership doesn't require facial hair. Shiro anxiously asked what the mayor wanted with him, so Karen started by expressing her gratitude. For a merchant of his caliber, she was thankful that he was doing business in her town. She bowed to express her sincerity, which quickly made Shiro embarrassed. He argued that he should be the one thanking her for letting him do business. This reaction confused Karen, as he seemed to have a pretty low self-esteem. Most merchants in her town were stubborn, which was a fact that surprised Shiro. Suddenly, Karen raised her voice asking if he would help her. And so for the rest of the afternoon, Karen ended up voicing her dilemma to Shiro. While Aina slept with her belly full, Karen told Shiro that the town was in the middle of nowhere. The merchants all had the attitude of "I'm just carrying a load," and the goods the town needed were sold at high prices. Their products were sold at very low prices, and because of that, their finances were not getting any better. It was a mess, and Karen hoped that somebody would do something about this inexcusable situation. Karen continued her loud monologue, declaring that she wanted to break through this situation. In this town, they needed a market. She's been holding this in for years. Suddenly, Karen realized that she was getting too absorbed in her character, so she quickly changed her tone. She moved on to her next point with a refreshing voice, making Shiro wonder if she was kidding. Just then, she presented a key, and she told Shiro that he could have it if he wanted. Shiro was puzzled, and he could only hope that it wasn't a duplicate of her house keys. However, he knew this was far from a romantic drama. Then, as if she read his mind, Karen revealed that it was a key to her house. "Ma'am, this is not a dating sim. Shiro was so baffled that he ended up choking on his own saliva. Karen asked what was wrong, so Shiro immediately said that it was nothing. Aina, on the other hand, had a look of disbelief plastered on her face. Suddenly, she revealed her realization. The mayor wanted to live with Shiro. Shiro frantically asked what she was saying, so Aina explained that it was that thing. The mayor wanted to marry him. She skipped 10 plot chapters. Karen was taken aback, and she clarified that Aina was wrong. It was not like she was single and searching for a marriage candidate. She got defensive and argued that it wasn't what she was thinking at all, and she even swore on it. Just then, she cleared her throat and calmed down. She went back to her topic and revealed that she came to ask Shiro a favor. Suddenly, Shiro asked if she was married, and she quickly denied it. I swear Shiro has 2 brain cells and they're fighting each other. Karen then pointed to the horizon, saying that there was an empty house over there that he could enter with the key. Starting tomorrow, she wanted him to do business in the store on the 1st floor. Shiro asked why, so Karen explained that the previous day, she received complaints from other merchants. They couldn't sell anything if people lined up in the middle of the market like that. Hearing this, Shiro suddenly felt guilty. Karen thought that he must have noticed. So Shiro confessed the truth. He admitted that it was tough to continue doing business like that. Karen smiled, then she offered to show him around if he liked. He could then make a decision afterward, and so Karen took him to the building where she wanted Shiro to start selling. Shiro and Aina were stunned after seeing the place, and they weren't even sure what to do with such an amazing space. Suddenly, Shiro rambled out of nowhere and revealed that he didn't have a girlfriend. "Why would you say that?" Karen responded with the same weird energy and said that it wasn't what she wanted to hear. Shiro chuckled and said he was kidding, which made Karen pout in annoyance. She warned that he shouldn't make fun of the mayor like that. Just then, she asked why a good merchant like him wanted to do business in her town. It was a small town of about 500 people, though it was a shameful thing for a mayor to say. She knew Shiro could make more money doing business in other towns and cities. Shiro agreed that she was right, then he paused to ponder. Curious, Aina waited for what he was going to say next. Just then, Shiro guessed that it was simply because he liked it there. He'd only been in Ninorik for 3 days, but Aina put a lot of effort into working for him. There was also a mayor who was kind to him, even though he wasn't from there. It was simply because he loved the whole town. Karen was speechless, so she let Shiro continue. He was from another world and he didn't know other towns, but he was sure there weren't many towns that were as warm as this one. He unlocked the found family route. Suddenly, Karen's eyes started to water as she thanked him for telling her that he loved the town. Shiro was worried about her reaction, but to make matters worse, Karen started crying. Aina panicked and she called out Shiro for making a girl cry. He immediately apologized to the mayor and he explained that he didn't mean to. Suddenly, Karen held out her hand, insisting that he call her just Karen. Shiro took her hand and said that she could also call him Shiro. Aina also joined in and introduced herself to Karen. As Karen and Shiro shook hands, Aina also slapped her hand over theirs. This is legally binding in anime law. This was how this young man from selling matches got his own store within 3 days of arrival in the other world. He was sure that his grandma was making a victory pose in heaven. The next day, Shiro signed a contract for a month's store at the town hall, and he started his business immediately. 5 days later, Shiro and Aina apologized to their customers for running out of matches, just like they always did. Later that night, Shiro realized that he had sold enough matches for everyone in the town, and it was a mystery why they were still selling out. He broke supply and demand. Suddenly, Aina approached him, informing him that she was done cleaning up. Shiro told her goodnight and he urged her to go rest on the 2nd floor first. Aina asked if she should help him, but he reassured her that it was all good. Aina felt a bit dismayed, but she respected Shiro's wishes. After a few hours, Shiro finally finished his work and decided to bring some food up to Aina. However, he found her sleeping on the couch and he guessed that she must have fallen asleep. No shit, Sherlock. It was no wonder, as she was only 8 years old. He slowly placed the food on the table, which caused Aina to slowly open her eyes. He asked if he woke her up, but she still seemed to be in a daze. She said it was her daddy's fault, so Shiro tried telling her that he wasn't her dad. Still, Aina didn't budge. She held out her arms to Shiro, asking him to lift her up. Though he was hesitant, Shiro yielded and he took her in his arms. He wasn't sure if he was doing it right, but Aina seemed happy enough that he was finally hugging her. In her mind, he was her daddy, and she also recalled how her mom used to carry her in the same manner. Suddenly, Aina fell asleep again, surprising Shiro. As he tucked her in, he wondered if he was a father now. He then put a blanket over Aina, softly whispering to her that if there was anything she wanted, she should just say so. At that time, he would do his best to help her. The blanket tuck-in sealed it. On the 6th day of store sales, Shiro decided to give Aina a day off, despite her still wanting to work. Like always, he had to apologize to the customers because he sold out of matches. As the day ended, he slumped on his table, whining that it was hard working alone. Hustle culture finally punched him in the spine. Suddenly, someone entered the door, and it was none other than Karen. He told her that they had been sold out again, but Karen had already expected that from a skilled merchant. Shiro argued that it was different, as he was selling 5 times the number of townspeople. Just then, Karen shared that she heard a rumor that somebody resold the matches in another town, and it was a big success. The rumor would have spread and people must have started copying it. Congrats, you invented dropshipping. Hearing that, Shiro suggested setting a limit on the number of pieces one could buy. However, Karen suddenly shifted the topic and she revealed the reason for her going there. She wanted to ask Shiro a favor. It sounded important, so she wanted to go upstairs and talk about it. Later on, Shiro served her a warm cup of tea and asked what the request was. Before that, Karen asked him if he knew there was an adventurers guild in their town. Shiro confirmed that he did, and he recalled that it was called Silver Moon. Karen was surprised since she didn't realize that he already knew the name of the guild. They had a lot of adventurers as customers. The Adventurers Guild worked like an intermediate firm, and they took orders from clients and assigned them to adventurers. They were an organization that awarded success. Tasks included killing monsters that attacked livestock and people, gathering herbs and mushrooms in order to prepare medicines, and more. If Shiro already knew that, Karen thought it should be quick. Silver Moon was the only adventurers guild in their town. Just then, Karen started talking about the Guildmaster, which piqued Shiro's interest. The Guildmaster, or Gilmus, was the leader of an adventurers guild. It was a word that tickled the heart of every teenage boy. Shiro asked what was wrong with the Gilmas, which seemed to confuse Karen. Just then, she revealed that he ran away last night. Shiro was already blown away by this news, but Karen wasn't done. They also didn't have the money to run the guild. The guild said bankruptcy arc. The adventurers who belonged to the guild were about to leave the town, and there was also the issue of the guild's management funds. Hearing all that, Shiro remarked that it was a big problem. Just then, Karen revealed that she had a plan. Shiro was curious about it, so Karen went on to explain that she always had one. The Adventurers Guild in the capital wanted to set up a branch in their town. Until now, she refused out of consideration for Silver Moon, but in these circumstances, she was thinking of accepting the offer. Shiro thought they were on the brink of losing a very important asset, the adventurers. Knowing that, he thought it was the right decision. Karen smiled and she thanked him because it made her feel better to hear him say that. Just then, Shiro noticed that her breast jiggled when she turned around to face him, so he anxiously looked away. This scene is sponsored by Accidental Fan Service. After that, Karen told him that if he accepted her offer, there would be a visit from the guild in the capital soon. They were going to decide if they would formally establish a branch. With that, she told Shiro that she wanted to show those matches of his to the people coming from the capital. Shiro didn't mind, but he wondered what the point was. Karen mentioned that there was a point. She had never seen anything like those matches in her life, not even in the capital, let alone any other city. This made her wonder where the hell Shiro even got the product. Shiro struggled to answer, so Karen quickly clarified that she wasn't trying to pry. It was just that if he was the only one who could deal with it, it might be of interest to the inspectors. Shiro let out an exasperated sigh, saying that he understood her. In short, she wanted him to use the matches to attract the inspectors' attention. Bro accepted his fate as bait. Shiro could already imagine them saying that the town had unique items and that it had a special charm in comparison to other ones. It would definitely be successful. Karen was touched by his kindness, and she promised to repay this favor. The next afternoon, Shiro and Aina sold out of matches again. Aina, who was now back to work, noticed that there was something wrong with Shiro. He seemed to be absorbed in his thoughts, wondering what could be the one thing that could pique the inspector's interest. Just then, he sprang up from his seat, saying that he had finally decided. He headed for the door, and he told Aina that he would be heading to Karen's for a bit. After that, he told Karen his plan, but she nervously asked if he was serious. Shiro smiled, confirming that he was. He wanted to be an adventurer, and he wanted Karen to let him accompany the adventurers. This is what we call a career pivot. Karen clarified with Shiro if he truly wanted to accompany adventurers on quests, and if he was serious about it. Without a doubt, Shiro said yes, thinking that it was the best way for him to find out what adventurers needed. Man chose exposure therapy instead of Google. Karen asked if he knew the risks, then she mentioned that the only place an adventurer in this town would go to was the Eastern Forest. There was no place apart from that. Shiro envisioned the dangers lurking in the forest's shadows, and each of them had the potential to kill him. Despite that, he told Karen that he knew. However, he meant for it to be adventurers who gathered herbs and minerals. Karen understood now, and she was relieved because it sounded less dangerous. She wanted to introduce him to some adventurers, but if she was being honest, the relationship between her and Silver Moon was currently horrible. Last night, Silver Moon's substitute guildmaster came and they told her this. "Money, please lend us some money somehow." The substitute guildmaster kneeled on all fours while saying that, and they even cried desperately. Shiro commented that it was quite a straightforward request. Just then, he asked how much they needed, and Karen said 10. Shiro asked if it was 10 copper coins, but Karen shook her head. He again asked if she meant 10 silver coins, but still, Karen said no. To Shiro's shock, he realized that the guild wanted 10 gold coins, which was the equivalent of 10 million yen. The audacity is actually S rank. However, Shiro was being too loud, so Karen called him out for it. She knew that there wasn't even that much money in a remote town like hers. If it were a tenth of that amount, she could have at least thought about it. Shiro understood, and he saw that it would be hard to ask for help after turning down their request. Karen simply nodded in response, then she took out her quill to write a letter. However, she told Shiro not to expect anything. After that, Shiro headed toward the Adventurers Guild, Silver Moon, in the eastern part of town. As he stood outside the building, he realized that it was his first time visiting a guild, which made him a bit nervous. As soon as he opened the doors, the smell of drunk adventurers immediately greeted him. To make matters worse, someone purposely placed their foot in front of Shiro to make him trip. Unfortunately, he fell flat on his face. Suddenly, a buff adventurer named Aniki pulled Shiro by the hair, happily saying that there was new blood. He then asked where his greeting was for his seniors. Meanwhile, another adventurer laughed at Shiro, and he told Aniki to chill a little. Shiro, on the other hand, said that he wasn't a new adventurer but a merchant. This infuriated Aniki even more, and he menacingly teased Shiro for being a fancy merchant. The other adventurer got excited over this scene as he was witnessing Aniki's Kabadon moment. Just then, Aniki told Shiro that he would put a price on his punch that could crush stone. However, it turned out that this was all in Shiro's imagination. Man pre-traumatized himself. In reality, he hadn't even entered the guild yet. He convinced himself that there was no way that something like that was going to happen. With that, he placed his hand on the door and anxiously slammed it open. He frantically excused himself as he entered, but to his shock, nobody was there. Even the NPCs called in sick. Suddenly, he noticed that someone was behind the counter, and he asked who it was. The person didn't answer and instead kept on crying. Shiro slowly approached the counter and he awkwardly said that he came with a referral from the mayor. Despite trying to reach out, the person didn't respond, and they cried even harder. Seeing that, Shiro admitted that this wasn't going to work. Just then, he slightly shook the person's shoulder, telling them that he only needed a little bit of their time. Suddenly, the person looked back at Shiro, revealing herself to be a demi-human girl. Just then, it dawned on her that someone had noticed her whole meltdown, so she anxiously asked how long he had been there. Shiro, on the other hand, wondered if she was a guild staff member because she was wearing a uniform. Suddenly, the girl asked why he was touching her, so Shiro quickly took his hand away. Frantic, the girl asked if he liked her. Then she warned him that with one word from her, the poster girl of Silver Moon, she could summon 1,000 muscular men. Though it might sound rude, Shiro broke it to her that there was no one in the building. This guild is held together by delusion. The girl retorted that once in a while there was, but even then she alone was enough to beat him up. She clenched her fist, angrily saying that her punch could crush stone. She desperately didn't want Shiro to look down on her. Shiro sighed, knowing this girl was about to be a real pain in the ass. Just then, he asked where he could find the substitute guildmaster. That was what was important. He requested the girl to call them for him. The girl said that she could, but she was hesitant to continue. Shiro urged her to speak, so she admitted that she was the substitute guildmaster. She's the manager, staff, and janitor. Shiro was so blown away by this news that his confusion could be heard from outside. The reason why the girl called Emile the substitute guildmaster for the guild Silver Moon was rather simple. There was no guild staff apart from her. Actually, there was one other young girl, but the day after the guildmaster ran away, she disappeared for some reason. Later that night, Emile drank a bottle of booze while sharing with Shiro that those bastards were having an affair. She claimed that they didn't know that she was aware of it. Being drunk, Emile demonstrated how they were kissing here and there. She even revealed that they were doing something intimate in the guildmaster's room. She shared everything in complete detail and wondered how one could tolerate that. Girl turned into a live-streamed exposé. Saying all this infuriated her, and she hoped they got caught by bandits, stripped of all they owned, beaten to a pulp, and sold to slave merchants for 5 coppers or something. The two of them as a set, that is. She pressed on, sharing that the guildmaster stank like a horny goblin. This roast was personal. Just then, Shiro interjected, saying that she really did her best. However, he had enough of all the venting, so he asked if she was done yet. Suddenly, Emile remarked that he listened to her grumbling for a whole 5 hours. She complimented him for his kindness, all while she was slowly unbuttoning her blouse. This made Shiro panic, so he asked why she was doing that. Emile quickly apologized, then she asked if he had something to do. Just then, Shiro handed her a letter from the mayor, which somehow struck Emile's nerve. She angrily asked if it was the same stupid big-breasted bitch mayor. Hearing that, Shiro wondered if his grandma's ring had malfunctioned. Not the Duolingo error. He claimed that he didn't know what she was talking about, and he clarified that he was referring to the mayor of Ninorik, Karen. Just then, Emile asked if he was talking about the one where all the nutrition for her brain went straight to her tits. Once again, she asked if it was that Karen, the most cruel woman. If that was the letter of that woman, then she thought tearing it up was fine. Diplomacy failed instantly. She thought stuff like affairs and adultery were just the worst. As Emile tore the letter without mercy, Shiro could do nothing but freak out. Emile continued complaining about that shitty woman Karen. She discarded Silver Moon and invited some other adventurer guild. She believed Karen was an extremely immoral mayor bitch, and she asked Shiro if he agreed. Meanwhile, Karen, who had no idea Emile was trash-talking her, suddenly sneezed out of nowhere. Karen catching generational slander. Emile whined that Karen wouldn't lend her a measly 10 coins, though she did a dojiza. However, Shiro mentioned that 10 gold coins were a lot of money, and Karen also had her own share of worries. Furious, Emile called him out for having that stupid woman's back. She asked Shiro if he liked her or something, then she started crying, wanting to confess something. With tears in her eyes, she screamed that she still loved Karen and she thought they were still best friends. Plot twist just slapped us. Suddenly, Shiro told her that she shouldn't insult other people, especially her best friends. Emile broke down, saying that the guild was doomed without money. She didn't know what to do at that point. Shiro understood Emile's relationship with the mayor now, but he asked to let the matter about the letter slide. Just then, he grabbed something from his wallet and handed a handkerchief to Emile. Emotional intelligence unlocked. He told her that he had a commission for the Silver Moon Adventurer Guild. Emile collected herself, then put on her hat, asking how she could help him. Later that night, she learned that Shiro wished to accompany an adventurer. If that was what he wanted, then she would make it an escort request. But there wasn't really a precedent for it. Shiro asked if it was difficult to do, and Emile said that she could only really think of one qualified party. It was a high-rank party consisting of 4 members, so the fee would be quite expensive. The name of the party was Azure Flash. Aina asked if he was really going to close the store for a while, and he confirmed it. He thought it would be about 3 days, and during that time he would go play Pretend Adventurer for a bit. Aina got it, and she shared that there was also stuff that she wanted to do. She was a little relieved that the store was closed for a bit. This made Shiro curious, but Aina said it was nothing important. He didn't pry any further, and instead he tied his shoelaces and bid her goodbye. But before he could leave, Aina told him to take care. And with that, Shiro went off to start a new adventure. After that, he headed to the Silver Moon Guild. He excused himself as he opened the door, but before he could enter, Emile greeted him. She said she had been waiting for him, and she told him to hurry up and come inside. Shiro awkwardly muttered her name, but he was still traumatized from their previous encounter. Shiro's PTSD activated instantly. Emile asked what he was scared of. Then she reassured him that she wasn't going to eat him up or anything. With that, Emile gestured for him to enter because she wanted to introduce him immediately to Silver Moon's Pride, the silver-ranked party. They would accompany Shiro on his mission to collect high-class herbs this time. As soon as Shiro caught sight of the party members of Azure Flash, he couldn't help but be amazed. Emile was about to introduce the leader, but he stood up and said it was him. The leader called out to Shiro, saying that it had been a while. Shiro stared at him, wondering where he had seen him before. Just then, he realized that it was the first guy who bought matches from him. The leader was relieved, realizing that Shiro seemed to remember him now. This man was the leader, Liar, and he wanted to introduce him to his companions. Their resident priest was a big guy named Rolf, and he was pleased to meet Shiro. He may be a priest, but he was a war priest who swung his mace around. Faith-powered violence. He was normally like that, but Liar warned Shiro not to make him angry. Next was their magician, Neska. She only stared at Shiro, but when Liar urged her to greet him, she hesitantly mumbled in response. Neska barely spoke, but she was good with magic. Liar playfully teased that her chanting was a bit slow, so Neska bonked his head with her staff and told him to mind his own business. Liar said that he would if she chanted faster, but Neska only turned away and said she'd think about it. Liar was about to introduce their next member, but she disappeared when he was about to gesture to her. Suddenly, she appeared in front of Shiro, enthusiastically saying that her name was Kilfa. That entrance had flair. Shiro was stunned upon seeing her ears, and he asked if she was from the cat race. Kilfa thought it was a weird response, as a lot of awful people out there disliked the cat race. This also included other missioners. Shiro wondered how they could hate cats or such a cute race, which instantly made Kilfa blush. Just then, Liar told him that Kilfa was their ranger and she scouts and finds traps and the like. Kilfa was proud of it and even boasted that she fought with a dagger and a bow. Shiro remarked that it was amazing, which only made Kilfa laugh because he hadn't seen anything yet. Liar suddenly revealed that what she was best at was running away, so Kilfa told him not to say that. After introducing the members, Liar suggested that they depart immediately. He asked Shiro if he was prepared and resolved for it, and he confirmed that he was. Liar thought it was a good answer, so with that they set off for the eastern forest. Elsewhere, Aina walked through town until she reached a mysterious pub. She awkwardly announced her arrival, which quickly got the attention of the man at the bar. He noticed that it was the little Missy from the other day. Just then he slowly reached out for her face like promised. Sis was doing underage side quests. As the Azure Flash party entered the eastern forest, Lyre told Shiro to relax because they would be avoiding monsters as much as possible. Shiro was a bit nervous, but he thanked Lyre. Just then, Lyre remarked that the herbs weren't easy to find. Kilfa proudly shared that if it were herbs, then she had found a ton. However, Rolf told her that they weren't after the regular herbs but the high-class ones. When they found those, their request from the guild would certainly be completed. However, it couldn't be denied that they were far from that reality. Nesca agreed with that, and to make matters worse, it was about to get dark soon. Lyre hummed to relax himself, then he said that it couldn't be helped. He told the group to stop there for the day, which surprised Shiro because it was too soon. Because of that, Lyre told him the long-standing rule: if you have leeway, rest your body. Shiro teared up at what he said because he wanted to hear those words from his previous boss. His old boss catching strays from another dimension. Meanwhile, Lyre told the others to prepare to make camp. Later that night, Kilfa announced that she had gathered firewood along with Shiro. With that, they lit up a fire using the matches. As they sat down to enjoy the warmth, Lyre remarked that the matches were really nice. Rolf was thankful to Shiro, and he thanked him for his patronage. Suddenly, Lyre playfully suggested that he would make a killing if he sold them in the royal capital. Rolf agreed, but if the infamous merchant association in the capital got word of it, he would be in for trouble. Just then, Lyre teased that Rolf was always right, including his predictions. Kilfa nodded in agreement while Shiro asked if it was really true. Suddenly, Nesca's stomach rumbled, and she told Lyre that she was hungry. Lyre admitted that they had been walking the whole day, so he decided to get to eating. Shortly after, Shiro observed Nesca eating a huge loaf of bread. That bread definitely fights back. That night he noticed that the party had eaten dried meat and that hard-looking bread. Even adventurers who mainly spent their time in the wild lived off rather simple meals. Just then, Kilfa asked Shiro if he didn't have any food. He seemed confused, so she tore up some of her food and handed it to him. However, Shiro told her he was fine because he brought something with him. As soon as he took out the contents of his bag, the entire party was blown away by what they saw. They asked what in the world those state-of-the-art containers were that he pulled out. They stuttered, unable to believe that it was food. Unbeknownst to them, these were non-perishable goods that Shiro brought from Japan. The forest was not ready for globalization. Lyre hesitantly asked if he could eat it all by himself, but Shiro said no, he brought enough for everybody. The party seemed confused, so he explained that the items were all contenders for new products at his store. He thought they could all give him their impressions. After hearing that, the group suddenly fell silent. Just then, they erupted in cheers, realizing that Shiro wanted a food sampling party. The group wasted no time slurping and munching away. Lyre asked what this food was because it was so good, while Kilfa screamed that it was so tasty. Even a priest like Rolf couldn't resist. Nesca, on the other hand, drooled over the taste of sweet and tasty chocolate. And thus, the sudden food sampling party ended with all 4 people giving feedback. So tasty. Shortly after, Kilfa lay on the ground with her round belly, saying that she was so full. Kilfa unlocked Food Coma speedrun. Kilfa was feeling a bit dazed, sharing that she had committed the taste of chocolate to her memory. Rolf, on the other hand, was crying because he believed this must be God's plan. God works through packaging. The entire group was lost in their own worlds, unable to process the aftermath of eating such good food. Just then, Lyre approached Shiro, telling him that he should sleep. He reminded him that they would take care of the watch. Shiro chuckled and said that he wasn't used to going to bed that early, so Lyre decided to accompany him. He suggested talking instead. As the night went on, Shiro learned that adventurers didn't use sleeping bags because they made it hard to move. However, it was cold in the winter and they could freeze to death with just a blanket. And if they brought more blankets, it would also increase their luggage. Lyre sighed, realizing that in moments like that, he wished he had a spatial storage skill. Shiro was sipping tea while he said that, and he accidentally spat it out. Shiro encouraged him to share more, and Lyre thought that he should know what it felt like because he was a merchant. It was said that between 1 and 10,000 or 100,000 had that skill. They also said that in some dungeon of an ancient civilization there was supposed to be a spatial storage skill book. As Lyre spoke about it, Shiro wanted to say that he had it. Just then he asked how much it would be worth if it were found. This surprised Lyre because Shiro was a merchant himself, but he was asking him. Still, he made a rough guess. If it could hold a horse cart's amount, it would be enough to buy a noble's mansion. Shiro was stunned, realizing that it would be that much. It was probably worth more than one could earn in a lifetime. At that moment, Shiro was glad that he kept it a secret. He wanted to test how much it could hold later. Shiro's poker face fighting for its life. Just then, Shiro told Lyre that he finally felt sleepy, so he excused himself. Lyre understood, and he told him he'd wake him up in the morning. Then out of nowhere, Lyre took out his sword and pointed it behind him. Shiro wondered why he did that, but Liar shushed him. Liar called for Kilfa and Rolf to wake up while he told Shiro to wake up Nesca. There was a presence approaching and he alerted the group to prepare for an attack. It was a monster. The monster's timing is diabolical. Shiro tried to wake Nesca, but she was too deep in her sleep, dreaming of chocolates. Worried, he told her to stop dreaming of chocolates because there was an emergency. She said 5 more minutes to death. Meanwhile, Kilfa focused on sniffing out the threat. Liar asked if she knew what it was, but she said it was no use. It seemed to come from downwind and she couldn't pick up a scent at all. In that case, Rolf thought they might be dealing with a rather intelligent monster. Just then, Liar told Nesca to hurry and prepare a magic attack. However, before Nesca could even gain full consciousness, something appeared before them. Liar was stunned, seeing the massive beast. He cursed under his breath because they were dealing with this of all things. It had to be a murder grizzly. Silver rank adventurers like them couldn't win against it, so he wanted to just turn and run. Silver rank? More like silver platter. Rolf thought it was impossible because only Kilfa, who was from the cat race, could get away. Kilfa promised that she wouldn't leave them there, but Rolf told her that they couldn't win, even if they fought. Just then, the murder grizzly stomped its massive foot, ready to attack the group. Liar wondered what they should do, so Rolf recommended that someone had to be made the bait. Liar was stunned, realizing that it was the case. Meanwhile, the rest of the group remained silent, waiting for his decision. Shiro, on the other hand, gave himself a hypothetical quiz. Of the following options, who was the most suitable to be made the bait? A. Him, Amata Shiro, B. Him, who only met Azure Flash that day. Or C. Him, the only non-adventurer who was almost a complete stranger. The answer was him, no matter how one thought about it. He mentally signed his own death waiver. Just then, Liar approached him, confirming the thoughts in his mind. When he saw their pale expressions, he somehow understood. Liar meant to offer him death, and it went without saying what his next words would be. In his head, he already imagined Liar telling him that he had to be the bait for the sake of the group. However, that wasn't what happened. Liar told him to run away together with Kilfa and Nesca. He and Rolf would keep it busy there. Liar apologized to Rolf, but Rolf told him not to worry because they were longtime friends. Shiro was at a loss for words and he could only mutter their names. Just then, Nesca insisted on fighting too, but Liar told her she was slow and would just be weighing them down. Nesca huffed in annoyance, but then Liar told her that he at least wanted to act cool in front of the woman he loved in the end. He asked her to understand, but this only embarrassed Nesca. Bro made sure to shoot his shot before getting deleted. Suddenly, Liar readied his sword. He told Rolf to prepare healing magic and pray that he wouldn't get killed in one hit. When he went all out, he wanted everyone to just run. Suddenly, Nesca alerted everyone to look behind them. Liar's eyes widened in shock, unable to believe the situation they were in. Just then, birds flew from the nearby trees, signaling the impending danger. To the group's horror, there were 2 murder grizzlies. Double it and give it to the next party. Nesca froze at the sight of the bear roaring at her in fury. Liar alerted Kilfa and Nesca to run, while Rolf reassured him that he and Liar would hold the line. However, Nesca knew it was impossible, and she accepted that they would die that day. As they were on the verge of death, Shiro remembered his grandmother's words. He quickly rummaged through his bag, certain that the item he was looking for was there. Finally, he found it. His grandmother once told him that no matter how dire the situation was, you should never give up. Just then, Shiro took out a bunch of firecrackers from his bag, throwing them at one of the bears. Industrial Revolution moment. The rest of the group was shocked, unable to process what he had just done. Having already dealt with the other bear, Shiro moved on to the next one. He took out a bear repellent spray, telling the massive beast that it should regret ever appearing in front of him. With that, he fired the spray into the bear's eyes. The group was stuck in between 2 murder grizzlies and they accepted their imminent death. Just then, Shiro suddenly stepped forward, a reckless move that immediately alarmed Liar. Without a trace of fear, Shiro locked his gaze onto the massive beast towering over him. Liar urgently asked what he was doing, telling him to hurry up and run away while he still could. Instead of retreating, Shiro forcefully hurled a bundle of firecrackers straight at the bear. Caught completely off guard, the beast staggered, its massive body knocked off balance by the unexpected explosion. The rest of the group could only stare in shock at what they were witnessing. Shiro, however, had already anticipated this reaction, believing the firecrackers would at least make the grizzly flinch and back away. Just then, he called out to the murder grizzly, telling it that it would regret ever appearing in front of him. Suddenly, he fired the bear repellent spray at the other grizzly. The creature let out a pained groan, screaming as its eyes burned from the intense sensation. At that moment, the first grizzly suddenly appeared behind Shiro, prompting Liar to quickly warn him. As the massive beast reached out to strike, Shiro calmly spun around and sprayed the repellent directly into its eyes as well. Bro was so unbothered by the surprise attack. It screamed in pain and now both of the bears were in agony. Shiro was stunned, realizing just how effective the spray was. He wondered if he had just gotten a critical hit. Just then, Liar approached him, asking whether he had just used magic. Shiro quickly clarified that he hadn't, then went on to show Liar the item he had used instead. He explained that it contained a poisonous mist, and that all he had done was spray it into the air. Even after hearing that, Liar still couldn't fully understand how it worked. Without wasting time, Shiro urged everyone to run while they still had the chance to escape. However, Liar stopped him and calmly asked whether the bear's eyes and noses had been covered by the spray. When Shiro replied that that was exactly the point, Liar's expression shifted. He suggested that as adventurers, they couldn't let this chance slip. The moment those words were spoken, the members of Azure Flash immediately understood what needed to be done. This was their chance for revenge. Without a second of hesitation, they launched a relentless barrage of attacks toward the Murder Grizzlies, moving in all at once. Murder Grizzlies, more like murdered grizzlies. Having the upper hand, they successfully defeated the beasts. After that, Liar told everyone that they had to hurry up and dismantle them. Nesca complained that it was too troublesome, which instantly got her into an argument with Liar. Just then, Shiro remembered that Liar mentioned that he liked Nesca. The two were stunned by his comment and they instinctively turned red. Anxious, they pretended not to know what Shiro was talking about. Shiro didn't let the issue go, and he mentioned how Liar said something like, the girl he loved. This man does not read the room. Not wanting to deal with it further, Liar suggested that they focus on cutting up the bear instead. All the various parts taken from the murder grizzlies were clearly worth a great deal, so for that reason, everyone worked carefully as they dismantled the massive beasts. Liar tore off the skin. Nesca extracted the blood into a leather bag and froze it with ice magic, and Kilfa focused on the fangs. Now that the skin was off, next came the claws. At that moment, Kilfa casually asked what they should do with the grizzly's balls. Shiro froze in confusion, clearly not understanding the question at first, until Rolf stepped in to explain that the testicles were actually valuable as a medicinal ingredient. Without hesitation, Rolf told Kilfa to cut them off. Bear got nerfed post-mortem. Hearing this, Shiro was utterly horrified and instinctively clutched his crotch. Not long after that, Liar commented that they were finally finished, noting that they couldn't carry any more materials than they already had. Just then, he told Shiro that he wanted him to hear about something. He apologized because they had to put the quest on hold and return to town the next day. He advised Shiro to sell the materials as soon as possible before they started to rot, pointing out that they were far more valuable than even high-class herbs. Just then, he pointed to one of the grizzly's parts, saying that half of those was his cut. Shiro was surprised that they were giving him that much, but Liar thought it was only natural. They would have been annihilated without that item of his. Liar picked up the bear repellent spray, asking how much it was worth. However, Shiro told him not to mind it because they couldn't put a price on human life after all. Liar was surprised, and he remarked that Shiro was too nice. Suddenly, Kilfa sneaked up behind Shiro. Then she jumped at him, saying that he was a good person and that she loved him. However, Shiro was quick to avoid the surprise hug, so Kilfa ended up crashing into a nearby bush. Her feline reflexes betrayed her. Just then, Nesca told Shiro that he was a good person. Rolf also chimed in, saying that if all merchants in the world were like him, the world would be a better place. Shiro awkwardly laughed, thinking they were all too much. Just then, Shiro told Liar that he understood why he wanted to return to town. He then volunteered to carry the grizzly bear materials for him, which left everyone confused. Liar chuckled and teased Shiro because of his thin hands, and he was about to refuse the offer. However, Shiro suddenly held out his palm, summoning his spatial storage skill. As expected, the group's jaws met the floor. This man was holding endgame loot. Shiro apologized for not telling them sooner, explaining that he possessed the spatial storage skill. Liar told him there was no need to apologize because he saved their lives. After that, Shiro gathered his belongings and urged the group to head back to Ninorich. This suggestion confused Liar, who asked what Shiro was talking about. If Shiro could store the bears using spatial storage, then the obvious next step would be to continue searching for high-class herbs. Shiro was momentarily puzzled by the response, but in the end, he went along with it and continued the adventure with them for the next 2 days. After finding the herbs, they finally went back to town, where Aina greeted Shiro with a huge smile. Liar wondered if she was Shiro's daughter, but Shiro explained that it was nothing like that. She simply helped him out at the store. Wrong genre, pal. Liar then introduced himself to Aina and he was pleased to meet her. Shiro had given Aina the key to the store and had her wait there. After that, they headed to the Silver Moon to finalize the quest. As soon as Liar announced their arrival, they were greeted with an alarming sight. Emile was kneeling on the floor, begging a mysterious man to give her a little more time to get his money. Shiro, on the other hand, wondered if it was supposed to be like that. Most of all, he wondered what it even was. The man brought up that Emile had been saying she would pay it back next time again and again for half a year already. Because of that, he wouldn't allow it again this time. Bro probably wakes up hearing next month in his nightmares. Emil cried hysterically, promising the man that she would somehow have it by next month. As Emil continued to plead with the man, Shiro asked Liar who the man was, to which he replied that he was a materials merchant. Watching the tense exchange drag on, Shiro eventually decided to step in. He approached the man and politely introduced himself as a merchant who conducted business in the town. The man returned the courtesy and introduced himself as well. Shiro then asked if he could hear what the issue was about. Seeing no harm in it, the materials merchant agreed and began explaining the situation. The situation was like this. Gerald was an old acquaintance of the guildmaster, Blotto, who was currently absent or had run away. The guild had insufficient funds, so he lent them 10 gold coins with Silver Moon's guild building as collateral. Gerald presented the contract in question and he asked Emil if she understood. Emil struggled to admit the truth, so Gerald stated it plainly. If he didn't get his money, then the building would become his property. The guild is about to become a Starbucks location. The place, the land included, would barely cover it, but it would probably be enough to pay the debt if they sold it. With that, he told Emil to get the title deed. However, Emil simply shrugged, saying that she didn't want to. Suddenly, Gerald asked why she had such loyalty for Blotto, who had abandoned her. It would probably be better for her if she just let the dead-end guild go. However, Emil replied that it was nothing like loyalty. That place, Silver Moon, was where she, who was scorned just for being a beastman, had found a place she longed for the first time. It was filled with happy and sad memories, but the happy ones outnumbered the sad ones by just a bit. Because of that, it was important to her, and that was why she really didn't want to lose it. She rolled a critical hit on sympathy. Shiro fell silent as he listened to her story, seemingly touched by the part where Emil found a place filled with memories. If he recalled it correctly, it was 5 years ago in summer. Shiro's mother told him that it had already been 2 years since his grandma Mio had disappeared, and she suggested selling the house. Shiro didn't remember all the details, but when he heard those words, he had been begging as if his life depended on it. His head met the floor, asking for the house to be spared. He told them not to sell the house, which was filled with memories of his grandma. He could vividly remember how embarrassing it was to do it in front of so many relatives. Suddenly, Shiro stepped out of the guild without saying anything else. Liar tried calling out to him in the corner, but he kept right on going. This man left like he had to consult the writers. Just then, Gerald told Emil that he respected her personal reasons, but a contract was a contract. Emil knew that, so with a heavy heart she handed him the title deed for Silver Moon's guild building. However, before things could be finalized, Shiro stopped them. Confused, Emil turned to him for an explanation. Just then, Shiro asked if she would buy the item in his hand. Gerald was stunned, seeing that he was holding murder grizzly materials. Judging by the color, it was even a subspecies. Gerald asked if he would allow the materials to be bought by him, but Shiro said no, as it was only for Silver Moon. The merchant went from debt collector to eBay reseller. Emil was puzzled because the guild couldn't pay, so Shiro reassured her that she could pay him anytime. Liar scratched his head, knowing that he had to do something too. He approached Emil, telling her that they had the same amount as Shiro. He suggested buying it off of them, and they would let her pay it another time. Emil stuttered, but she happily took the offer. Just then, Gerald asked Emil to allow him to buy it all. He initially offered 30 coins, but then he changed his mind and offered 32 gold coins for it. Knowing that she had him in a chokehold, she insisted on 36 gold coins. The merchant is sweating like he's on Shark Tank. In the end, after subtracting the guild debt of 10 gold coins, it came to 26 gold coins. In addition, Gerald paid 2 more gold coins for the Grizzlies' balls, so the negotiation ended with a total of 28 gold coins paid. Imagine explaining this purchase to your accountant. With that settled, Gerald excused himself from the group. As he approached the door, he told everyone that he expected some excellent deals next time too. Hearing him say next time made Liar think that he wanted Silver Moon to continue to exist, which clearly showed that Emil had Gerald hanging on by a hair. Suddenly, Emil bowed her head, thanking everyone with utmost gratitude. However, Rolf told her that if she wanted to thank someone, then it should be Shiro. Kilfa agreed, noting that they just did what was natural as adventurers. Just then, Liar asked Emil to process the completion of their request. She wasn't quite amused by it, and she asked if she had to do it at that moment, even with Shiro being present. Shiro was surprised that he shouldn't be there, but Emil felt strongly about it. She believed his business there was done, so she urged him to go home. Suddenly, Liar asked how she was planning on processing a bodyguard request without the escort target. Emil struggled to come up with an answer, so she asked if it wouldn't be fine now that she had confirmed his safety already. However, Liar thought it was a fishy response, and he suspected that she was planning on stinting them on the reward again. Emil panicked, and she denied that there would be any way that she would do that. Finally, Liar calmed down. Since that was the case, he insisted on getting paid instead, and he also apologized for doubting her. He held his hand out to Emil, asking for 30 silver coins. Shiro was surprised by the amount, so Liar explained to him that it was too late to ask for a discount now. Shiro clarified that it wasn't what he meant. He paid 100 silver as the quest fee, but he was wondering if the remaining 70 silver would really be the guild's handling fee. That question hit like a courtroom objection. Liar pondered in thought, and while he was occupied, Emil slowly tried to sneak off. However, he quickly caught her and warned her not to run away. He demanded that she explain in detail. Neska, who had had enough of Emil, took out her staff and said she would incinerate her. Kilfa flashed a menacing smile, saying that she was a little angry too. Emil was horrified, and even more so when the gigantic Rolf loomed over her, saying that she would receive God's punishment. Liar was infuriated as well, and he vowed they wouldn't forgive her this time. Emil shrieked in fear and she ran for her life as she apologized. Bro assembled the Avengers of Debt Collection. Shiro, on the other hand, was glad that he didn't bring Aina along. That was what he truly thought from the bottom of his heart as he saw this new side of Emil. Later that day, Shiro returned home and he greeted Aina as soon as he opened the door. Aina, who was busy cleaning the house, happily welcomed him back. She asked how his adventuring journey went, and Shiro replied that it was an amazing experience. He asked if she wanted to hear about it, and she giddily said yes. Hearing that, Shiro decided to share the incident he had with the Grizzlies, and he even acted it out for dramatic effect. Shiro really said, "Let me demonstrate." After going through all the events one by one, he finally finished recounting his 3-day adventure. Aina listened the entire time with fascination. When he was done, she remarked that he was amazing, especially since he had defeated a murder grizzly. However, Shiro confessed that it wasn't him who defeated it, but the Azure Flash Party. Still counts as experience points. He merely helped a little bit. Still, Aina thought that if he weren't with them, they would have lost. Just then, their conversation was interrupted when someone called for Shiro at the door. When he went out to see who it was, he found that it was Karen. He asked what the matter was, but before he could get an answer, she hugged him tightly without warning. His face slammed into her gigantic breasts and she went on to cry hysterically. This is the weirdest way to die. Having heard that he encountered a murder grizzly, she worriedly asked if he was safe and if he was hurt anywhere. When Shiro, who was still stuck between her breasts, didn't reply, Karen asked what the matter was. She was now suspecting that his throat had been injured. Suddenly, Aina called out to Karen, telling her that Shiro couldn't breathe and that she should let him go. She immediately let go of Shiro and he desperately gasped for air. Just then, Shiro told Karen to relax. Azure Flash protected him, so as she could see, he was fine. Karen finally allowed herself to breathe and she was glad to see that he was okay. She then asked how it was, as she was curious if he had learned anything by traveling together with adventurers. Shiro confirmed that he learned a lot. If he could stock his new products up in time, the people coming for the inspection would surely be surprised by them. The phrase "stock up in time" made Karen chuckle, and she told Shiro that he didn't have to hide it. She knew he had a storage skill other than maybe being in possession of a storage item. Shiro anxiously denied it, and he pretended that he didn't have any idea what she was talking about. Karen laughed, pointing out that he was bad at lying. They had been few, but she had met people with rare skills before, so she could tell with one glance that he had the same smell as them. Shiro was stunned into silence and then inevitably admitted that she was exactly right. At that moment, he realized that a woman's intuition was really something. However, Karen corrected him and said that he had just fallen for her trap, hook, line, and sinker. The part about meeting a few was nothing but a lie. She just guessed it was the case since he stocked such a huge number of matches. Realizing that Karen was betting on the sickle, Shiro's jaw hit the floor in disbelief. Karen, on the other hand, was unapologetic. She told him to take it as practice for bargaining because hagglers definitely wouldn't be hindered by the truth. Shiro accepted that he was tricked, so he told himself to be more careful. Karen is running psychological warfare. Suddenly, Karen urged Shiro to get back on topic. She asked what kind of things he intended to sell now. This piqued Aina's curiosity, so she also said that she wanted to know. To answer their questions, Shiro took his bag to show the item that he intended to sell. He opened it for them to see and they were surprised upon seeing it. Karen was in disbelief, seeing that the item existed too. Shiro proudly shared that his first day of business in 3 days had concluded safely. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. It was Liar, greeting Shiro and asking him if business was doing well. Neska was also with him, but she was quiet as always. Just then, Liar noticed that Shiro had an outstanding knack for lining up products neatly. However, Shiro credited it to Aina, who was the one responsible for setting up the displays for him. After the incident with the murder grizzly, Liar and Neska started dating. As the two of them subtly showed their public display of affection, Shiro secretly hoped that they would explode. The romance side quest is completed. Suddenly, Liar shared that he heard something from Emmy. He then asked Shiro if it was true that a big shot from some guild somewhere was coming to town. When Shiro confirmed that he was right, Liar hoped that it was an upstanding guild if it opened a branch in town. This confused Shiro, so he asked if there were guilds that were not upstanding. Liar said yes, and he added that there were lots of guilds with bad reputations. Some of them were Devil's Trident, Fang of the Venom Dragon, and worst of all, the Labyrinth Marauders. The branding is already a red flag. Just then, Aina mentioned that the latter mentioned guild was the one that the mayor had talked about. The Labyrinth Marauders was the name of the guild. This made Shiro wonder if Karen knew of the reputation of those Labyrinth Marauders, but even Liar wasn't sure of that. It could be that it was only among adventurers that their reputation was horrible. It could also be limited to that area. Shiro, on the other hand, had a guess of his own. This was not a world with phones or social networks, and something like that was probably commonplace. However, the Adventurers Guild with the worst reputation was coming to inspect their place. Shiro could only hope it passed without any incidents. Aina guessed that the inspector guy wasn't going to show up, so she asked Shiro if he thought he got lost. Shiro only thought the inspector was taking his time, even though it was a straight path from the next town over. Karen had been waiting at the town's entrance since yesterday, which made him want the man to come already even more. Karen's camping at the town gate like it's a concert line. Just then the evening bell rang, which meant that Aina could stop for the day. Shiro praised her for the good work, and not long after, she bid him goodbye. After that, he decided to close the shop, though it was a little early. Just as he was locking the door, a woman suddenly approached him, apologizing for disturbing him at that late time. Still, she asked if she could take a look at his items. This is the fantasy version of someone entering a store at 9:59 p.m. Shiro happily agreed to it, and he told her to look as much as she liked. And so the woman browsed the store, where her attention immediately landed on the rumored match. Shiro offered to demonstrate how to use it, and it didn't fail to impress the woman. She heard stories about it, but it really was an amazing item. Suddenly she saw a silver item nearby and she asked what it was. Shiro explained that it was a space blanket, and it was used like a blanket to keep warm. He asked if she wanted to try it, and the woman immediately tested it for herself. She put it over her arms, asking if she was doing it right. This was an item that the adventurers gave big praise for, and it even surprised Karen. The woman remarked that it was amazing and warm despite it being so thin. Just then she took another item and asked what it was. Shiro explained that it was a foldable water bottle, but before he could share more about it, the woman headed for the door. She thanked him for his explanations, but she was in a bit of a hurry, so he would have to excuse her. The woman left without waiting for Shiro, which made him wonder why she was in such a rush. Bro gave a full presentation, and she bought nothing. Several days after that, Aina ran to Shiro's house, screaming as she approached. She reported that it was terrible, which urged Shiro to ask what the matter was. Meanwhile, in town, a man approached Karen and asked if she was the mayor. It turned out to be the inspector guy, who had just arrived in town a little while ago. This was how Shiro found that the man actually showed up for the inspection. The plan was for Karen to first guide him through the town and the marketplace. Finally, she would lead him to her store where they would talk. However, that was no longer the case. It seemed like the plan had changed, and so Shiro immediately rushed to the guild to be present for the inspection. Upon arriving, he saw that Emil and the rest of Azure Flash were there as well. Karen was unamused by his arrival, but she also seemed relieved that he came. Just then, Shiro noticed a man before him, whom he suspected was the inspector. Karen whispered to him that the inspector seemed to be a very moody person, so she wanted him to try not to say anything disagreeable. Moody is the medieval way of saying this guy is toxic. Shiro wondered if something had happened while he was gone, but he merely reassured Karen that he was quite used to abusive language. He wouldn't give in to that, no matter how bad it would get. Karen smiled, and then she introduced Shiro to Gabus, the inspector. She claimed that he was the city's prized merchant. Shiro bowed before Gabus, saying that it was a pleasure to meet him. Aina also introduced herself to Gabus, informing him that she worked at the store. However, Gabus sighed upon hearing them talk. He expected a lot since he heard Shiro was a skilled merchant, but he couldn't believe that his only employee was a brat like Aina. He was quite disappointed to know that Shiro ended up being an immature greenhorn. Gabus started roasting before introductions ended. Shiro faked a smile amid the disrespect, but he promised himself he would punch Gabus if he said that again. Suddenly, Gabus asked what the hell the dusty guild building was. He continued to mock them, and he wondered if subhumans in the boonies couldn't clean properly. He really said subhumans like a racist final boss. Emil was infuriated, and she argued that she cleaned properly every day. Of course, she hid the part that it was all she could do because business was low. This made Gabus erupt in laughter, thinking it was a funny joke. He then asked if she meant to say make a mess. Just then, he told everyone that subhumans who couldn't work were a waste of air. Sensing that Kilfa and Emil were getting offended, Karen stepped in and suggested that Gabus take a look at the items Shiro was selling. Gabus decided to see for himself, and now he finally witnessed the rumored match in action. He blew the fire out, admitting that at least Shiro dealt in some quality goods. Just then, Karen asked what the verdict was, so Gabus gave her the good news. He threw the matchstick on the floor, and then he revealed that the Labyrinth Marauders would open a branch there. Karen was delighted to hear it, while Emil was infuriated that Gabus simply threw the matchstick on her floor. However, Gabus had his conditions. First, the Labyrinth Marauders would be the only guild allowed in town. He asked what the name of the guild was again, and he even insinuated that it was weak. When Emil answered that it was Silver Moon, Gabus insisted that they didn't need it and that they should close it down immediately. He continued, saying that his next condition would be being exempted from taxes. They couldn't make a profit this far out if that wasn't the case, so they would also have to cover the construction cost. As Gabus faced away to yap, Karen did her best to hold down Emil, who so badly wanted to beat up the obese man. This man's ego is as big as his waistline. Just then, Gabus revealed his last condition. He wanted the exclusive right to buy and sell the matches. Shiro kept a straight face, seemingly unamused by what he said. Gabus pointed out that he seemed quite slow on the uptake, and now he questioned if he really was a merchant. Just then he peered closely into Shiro's face, telling him that they would buy up all his matches. That's not negotiation, that's takeover. Karen stepped in, wanting to stop Gabus. He angrily turned to her and asked what she wanted, and he pointed out that he was still talking with the retard. He quickly took that back and instead said that he was talking with the greenhorn. Still, Karen told him that although he would bring a lot of growth to their town, giving him a monopoly on the matches was too much. Gabus guessed that a countryside mayor like her wouldn't understand unless he made it simple, and so he told them to listen. There was a limit to the amount of goods that could be sold from the border town of Ninerich. With that, he asked what they thought would happen if they, who had branches all over the country, would buy up the entire stock. He answered it himself, revealing that they could make so much profit. He insisted that they couldn't even imagine it. Selling to them would mean the same as selling to the entire country. Gabus drooled at the thought of it, and he asked the group if they didn't like money. Shiro acknowledged that it was certainly an attractive proposal, but he refused. In the first place, there was a low limit to how many matches he could stock. Seeing how surprised Gabus was, Karen apologized to him. If those were his demands, she would like him to start negotiations from scratch. Gabus sneered in fury, and then he grabbed a liquor bottle nearby, throwing it on the wall next to Karen. Anger management left the chat. He angrily asked whose sake they thought he even bothered to come that far out in the sticks for. He hated the thought of their measly town where he could only find useless, weak adventurers. Suddenly, Shiro told him to wait. He went on to say that in the eastern forest he could find rare monsters, herbs, and metals. He asked if that was enough value for him to put a branch there. There were already adventurers using their town as their base. This seemed to pique Gabus's interest, but then he ended up laughing his head off. Just then he grabbed Shiro by the collar, calling him ignorant. He pointed at the Azure Flash Party, firmly saying that there were only shitty excuses for adventurers in their town. They were incompetents who only went there because they couldn't compete in the capital or any major cities. Nesca was eager to attack, but Liar, who was just as furious, stopped her. Azure Flash is about to speedrun a homicide. Still, Gabus pressed on, laughing at the thought that they even had any value. After dissing everyone in his sight, Gabus asked Shiro what it would be. If they put a branch there, even their desolate town would prosper. Its future depended on his decision. Shiro said that he needed time to think about it, but Gabus cut him off, saying that he didn't have that much free time. Suddenly, Gabus pointed at Aina and he told Shiro that if he were to deal with him, he could actually employ someone competent instead of that brat. Shiro was stunned and he asked Gabus what he had just said. That sentence activated boss fight music. Gabus smiled, seeing that he was a bit interested. He repeated that they could get him someone better than a useless brat, as their town had nothing but useless brats and dirty subhumans. Before he could even finish what he was saying, Shiro's fist slammed into his face. He angrily screamed at Gabus, calling him a good-for-nothing bastard and warning him to never go there again. The negotiation phase has ended. Before the unexpected knockdown scene occurred, Shiro's thoughts drifted elsewhere. He thought it was bad because it seemed like a countdown to something bad had begun. He remembered this situation because he had experienced it before. It was just like when he quit his black company. He snapped at his boss who was picking on a Kuhai who looked up to him. Shiro getting Vietnam flashbacks from office politics. And so when Gabus kept on calling Aina a brat, Shiro was no longer able to keep his rage inside. He ended up punching Gabus's arrogant face, warning the bastard to never come back. The rest of the group was stunned at the unexpected event, but they were somehow relieved. Karen muttered Shiro's name, but before she could say anything else, he said he hoped Gabus didn't do anything inappropriate to her. Karen was surprised and she tried to deny it, but then her head hung low as she admitted that Gabus had touched her breasts a little. Gabus just added 5 more punches to the combo. Shiro's eyes widened like a predator. Then he went back to Gabus, grabbing him by the hair. Karen pleaded with him to stop already, but he paid her no heed. He pulled Gabus by the hair, dragging him toward the door. Rolf called out to Shiro, asking if he wanted him to help out. Shiro didn't pass on the offer, and together they used his special free-falling move, the pile driver. Bro got slammed into the Shadow Realm. As they continued beating up Gabus, Shiro's thoughts wandered off to his previous life. He remembered it all too well. At the time he decided to quit his job, he used the forbidden special move that led to a legal dispute when he used it on his harassing boss. By the time Shiro was done with Gabus, the poor man was left twitching on the floor. Shiro despised violence, but if anyone said something despicable to his precious employee Aina or took advantage of the always gentle Karen, then he wouldn't just sit up and listen to it. Touched by his monologue, Aina hugged him, crying while she muttered his name. Suddenly, Gabus got up, angrily asking how Shiro dared to do that to him. He gritted his teeth, warning that he wouldn't get away with it. He asked Shiro if he didn't know that he was part of the top brass at Labyrinth Marauders. He got folded and is still acting tough. For doing that, Shiro and the entire town would have them all face his revenge. Karen suddenly stepped in, asking if she should take that as a declaration of war against her city. If that were the case, it would be her duty as mayor to inform Margrave Bashur, who ruled their land. Worried, Gabus tried to explain that it wasn't what he meant. Then, with all his audacity, he tried to plead his case over the monopoly on matches. He even promised to let the whole incident go as water under the bridge if they considered it. This dude just couldn't take a hint. However, Shiro had enough of his foolishness, so he grabbed Gabus by the ear because it seemed like he couldn't hear well. Once again, he told Gabus to listen. He didn't want to make any deals with the labyrinth marauders, and if adventurers like him tried to come to his store, he would kick them out immediately. As if he were a bloodthirsty killer, he asked Gabus if he got it. The poor man shrieked, and he desperately bowed before Shiro. Still, he refused to give up the deal about the matches, and he even offered to buy them at any price. He almost called Shiro a bastard, but he quickly changed his tone into a polite one. That self-correction saved his entire lifespan. However, despite the man's begging, Shiro apologized because he intended to continue selling them retail thereafter. Gabus cursed under his breath, knowing that he had no choice but to forget about it. Suddenly, he turned to Karen, asking if they should talk further about opening a branch in town. Karen cut him off right away, asking if he couldn't tell that this whole deal had already fallen through. Just then, Liar laughed hysterically and pointed at Gabus for being an idiot. He was so greedy that he couldn't get his hands on either deal. He tried to be a mogul and became a meme. Gabus screamed at him to shut up. Then he said that shitty excuses for adventurers like him should keep their mouths shut. Then in a split second, Liar appeared in front of Gabus, lifting him by the collar. He demanded that the bastard repeat what he said as he had been quiet and listening that whole time. Shiro tried to stop Liar, reminding him that violence was no good. Liar was taken aback as Shiro had just done it himself. Still, Liar let Gabus go, thinking that there wasn't any value in beating up scum like him. He kicked the man out of the building, and he told him to run back to his beloved capital. Bro got physically removed from the server. Before Gabus could even plead his case, the door was already shut before him. Despite the encounter being over, Liar still couldn't calm down at all. Rolf felt the same way, and so did Emil, who was still seething in anger. Karen encouraged them to forget about the fool, as there was no need to dirty their hands with him. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Liar angrily marched toward it, thinking that Gabus just didn't learn. Having had enough of it, he decided to use the man as stress relief. However, instead of seeing Gabus's stupid face, they were greeted by the woman who had taken an interest in Shiro's products. She apologized for the disturbance, but she came right away when she heard that the mayor was at the guild. Shiro remembered her, but he kept quiet. Just then, Karen approached the woman and introduced herself as the mayor. She then asked for the woman's name, and she shared that it was Ne Mirage. She was there as a messenger from the guild Fairy's Blessing. Upon hearing that, Lai recalled that it was the largest guild in the country. Karen asked Ne what business she had with her, and Ne replied that it was simple. She came to ask if she would let Fairy's Blessing open a branch in town. That's the cleanest business upgrade. Unable to believe the offer, Shiro asked if she said that Fairy's Blessing truly wanted to open a branch in their town. Emil warned Karen that it was a trap for sure, which disheartened Ne. Ne approached Emil, asking if she was the guild's employee. She then shared that she actually wanted to speak to her. She asked Emil if they could use the guild as a branch of Fairy's Blessing, and she promised that she would get a super pay raise. Ne stretched her hands in the air to show how exactly Emil's salary would increase, which somehow left Emil in awe. She explained that it would multiply at least 5 times over. That number hit harder than the pile driver earlier. Just then, Emil bowed on the floor, screaming that she accepted the offer. From that day onwards, Silver Moon shall be a branch of Fairy's Blessing. Emil clung to Ne's leg, and she begged Karen to accept the offer. She believed that they would never get a chance like that again. Karen pondered for a while, then she turned to Shiro to ask him for his opinion. Shiro didn't give an answer right away and instead suggested that they hear out Ne first. Because of that, Karen suggested continuing the discussion in her office. There, Shiro asked Ne to explain about herself first. They wanted to hear her reason for opening a branch store in town. Ne explained that a few days ago, a party belonging to their guild discovered a map of the continent in a dungeon, seemingly made by an ancient magical civilization. A map of the continent should never have been discovered before, and it was so rare that it had been called the discovery of the century by the guild. Suddenly, the plot became Indiana Jones. However, the important part started on the map that she had. It showed that in the forest east of the town there should be tons of places like ancient kingdoms, labyrinths, and temples. Karen was shocked, and she asked if that was really true. Ne firmly confirmed that it was. And the reason why the labyrinth marauders wanted a branch there was likely because they knew of and wanted to monopolize those ruins. That man really thought he was slick. They tried to force unreasonable terms as usual and got rejected, but Fairy's Blessing wanted to use all their strength in order to conquer the ruins. And then they also thought that the town would make for a suitable base. Shiro asked why that was, and so Ne explained that it was because in their town, the only guild was the Silver Moon. If they could make them into a branch, there would be no need to build a new building. They could also start conquering the ruins immediately. There was also one more reason. In Ninarich, Shiro's store was present. The items in his store were quite wonderful, and she was convinced it would be of great help to them. With that, Ne bowed respectfully, asking for Shiro to open a branch store in their guild. She asked him to consider doing so. Suddenly, Karen asked what conditions Nee was going to demand of the town in exchange for Fairy's blessing opening a branch there. Nee was puzzled when they mentioned the conditions and demands, and she asked what she was talking about. Shiro felt embarrassed to say it, but he revealed everything that Gabus had done to them. Filled with anger, Nee banged her fist on the table, screaming that Gabus was so impudent. Even the messenger is mad. She couldn't believe that he made such demands, even though he was granted permission to open a branch. Shiro agreed with her, and he mentioned that he had even called him an idiot. Karen also added that Gabus sexually harassed her. Nee frowned, unable to believe that the man had the audacity to do something like that. Just then, Nee told them to be at ease because Silver Moon had already accepted her request, so they had no need to build a new guild. However, they wanted lodgings for their guild members to be constructed, and of course they would pay for it. As for the lands where the lodgings would be built, paying tax would go without saying. Suddenly, Karen asked if she had correctly remembered her name to be Nee. She then held out her hand, saying that she would love to have her. Nee's eyes sparkled with awe, and she was grateful for her acceptance. And like that, the dysfunctional Silver Moon became a branch of the country's #1 guild, Fairy's Blessing. It was a great triumph, especially for Emil, whose salary increased by 5 times, from struggling guild to #1 affiliate. Several days later, Shiro and Aina went through their usual days at the store. As a customer left, Shiro called and asked Aina to bring him a box of big matches. However, Aina remained standing, frozen and refusing to face him. Seeing that she was zoned out, Shiro walked up to her and whispered in her ear. Aina immediately snapped out of it and asked if he wanted her to sweep the floor. Shiro said no, and he repeated that he needed the large matches. Hearing that, Aina quickly went to get them for him. Later on, Shiro wondered aloud if they should close the store for the day. Aina, however, seemed completely lost in her own thoughts. She didn't even respond when Shiro asked her to clean up the store. She's in another dimension right now. Noticing that she wasn't listening, Shiro hesitantly called out to her again. Even then, Aina barely reacted. Watching her like that, he couldn't help but realize that she had been unusually absent-minded lately. Concerned, he decided it might be best to ask her about it. Suddenly, Aina approached him, and he asked what it was. Aina opened her mouth to speak, but the words refused to come out. She tried several times, each attempt ending with the same hesitation. Even after gathering her courage, she still struggled to say what was on her mind. Finally, after forcing herself to speak, she asked Shiro if he could lend her some money. That took maximum courage. As she nervously pleaded with him, her hands accidentally knocked over the small tower of coins on the table. The coins scattered across the floor as she hurriedly knelt down, her head lowered in apology. Shiro smiled, then he asked how much she needed. Aina cried, admitting that she was just a bother to him. She apologized, but Shiro gently patted her on the head and told her that it was fine. He assured her that she shouldn't think of herself that way. He understood that it must have taken a great deal of courage for her to ask, and he didn't see her as a bother at all. After a moment, Shiro gently asked if something had happened to her mother. He encouraged Aina to tell him the whole story, explaining that there might be something he could do to help. Suddenly, Liar entered the store, inviting Shiro to go grab some food with him and Azure Flash. Seeing that Aina was crying her eyes out, Liar apologized and asked if he was in the middle of something. Just then, Karen busted into the store, yelling that she had come to get Shiro's opinion about the town's development. However, she saw the situation with Aina, so she decided it would be better to wait for a later day. Liar also guessed that it would be better for them to come again later because it seemed like they came at a bad time. Social awareness kicked in instantly. Meanwhile, Shiro asked Aina what she wanted, and he advised her to disregard what Karen and Liar were saying. Aina wiped her tears, then she told everyone that it was okay for them to stay. Because of that, Shiro suggested that they all listen to her and give her their advice. Liar reassured Aina that they could leave it to them. Rolf was especially good with things like that. Karen also offered to help because it was her duty as mayor to help those who lived there. She would be glad to help. Aina got the whole town backing her. Hearing everyone speak so kindly to her, Aina became even more emotional and began crying again. Shiro also wanted to help her, so he encouraged her to talk. Finally, Aina revealed the devastating news: her mother was ill. Back at their home, Aina's mother lay in bed suffering from a violent cough that refused to stop. When Aina was 4 years old, she lived happily with her mother and father. But then suddenly the town they lived in was burned down in a war. Their house, her favorite toy, and everything they owned turned to ash. It was miserable. Back then, Aina's father searched for any salvageable items in the ruins of their home. He found almost nothing, but he did uncover Aina's favorite toy. Despite the misfortune they faced, Aina couldn't help but smile. When the world is ending but you still have your legendary tier loot. However, this wouldn't be the saddest part of her life. Right after their house was burned down, her father was conscripted as a soldier, which the kingdom insisted was a national duty. Sorry about the house. As a token of our apology, here is a sword. Good luck in the trenches. It took half a year for the war to end. However, 2 more years passed, and her father still hadn't returned. Aina was 6 years old when her mother suggested they move to a different town. Aina refused, thinking it would be terrible if they weren't there when her father came back. When her mother saw her reaction, she couldn't say anything. She could only cry. Before long, the two of them left the town and crossed several borders before finally arriving at Ninarich. When asked why she chose such a remote town, Aina's mother simply replied that it was because war didn't happen there. Deep inside, she knew she didn't want to lose anyone else. However, life in a border town was definitely not easy. In order to let her daughter eat her fill, Aina's mother ate as little as possible. In the second year after they moved to Ninarich, she fell ill. Ninarich, the town where the only thing thinner than the border is the bread slices. She apologized to Aina, but the little girl only blamed herself for letting her mother push herself so unreasonably far. She cried alone, having no one else to confide in. As she was crying her woes away, she suddenly realized that she had to grow up. It would be no good if she didn't. Because of that, she hid her favorite toy away, having decided to give up her childhood to focus on her ailing mother. She stared at her reflection in the mirror and shook off the naive look on her face, taking one good look at her new self. Most kids just hit a growth spurt. Aina hit a financial crisis. After that striking realization, she decided to sell flowers on the streets. She used what few copper coins she had to get permission to sell in the marketplace. From morning to night, she walked around selling flowers. One day, as she went through her usual routine, her life changed all of a sudden. That was when she met Shiro. He not only bought a lot of flowers from her, but he also gave her a job. With that job, she could afford her mother's medicine. Aina thanked the gods as best she could. Her first salary was 10 silver coins, and she had decided how to use it long ago. An adventurer had told her there was a potion that could heal anything. Aina lied and told her mother the potion, which had cost all her money, was a gift from Shiro and asked her to drink it. Trusting her daughter's words, Aina's mother drank the potion without question. But nothing changed at all. Aina fell into despair, plagued by worries about what to do next. Despair is realizing your 10 silver ultimate potion was just a flavored health drink. How could she save her mother from this illness? The answer was money. If she only had more of it, she could take her mother to a large city to get her illness treated. And so one day Aina mustered the courage to speak to Shiro. Before revealing her intentions, she asked God to let Shiro hate her if it meant saving her mother. Finally, she asked Shiro to lend her some money. She said this while fully prepared to be hated or even despised. But Shiro, being the kind soul that he was, only smiled and gave her a gentle pat on the head. This embarrassed Aina, leading her to break into tears. After hearing Aina's backstory, Shiro finally understood the full extent of her mother's situation. Just then, Lyre erupted in anger, smashing his fist into the wall to release his pent-up fury. He angrily demanded to know where Aina had met the adventurer she mentioned, the bastard who had sold a useless potion to an innocent child. He started punching the air in frustration, vowing that if he ever found the man, he'd give him 100 punches. Concerned by his threats, Neska reminded him not to break into other people's houses. The scammer sold a fake potion to a kid. He's about to find out Lyre's fists are 100% authentic. Suddenly, Rolf stepped forward, admitting it was difficult to tell Aina that the potion she had been given could never have cured her mother's disease. Aina was clueless about what this meant, so Rolf explained, healing potions could only ever heal external wounds. While there were other concoctions like cure potions that acted as antidotes, they all had one thing in common. A potion that could heal a chronic illness simply didn't exist. Aina argued that the adventurer had told her it would work. He had promised her mother would get better if she drank it. She insisted it would heal her mother's disease. It pained Rolf to say it as a fellow adventurer, but he told her the truth. She had been tricked. Aina was stunned. She struggled to say anything as tears pooled in her eyes and she gritted her teeth. That scammer really said stonks. Shiro only stared at her, not knowing what to do. Furious, Lyre kicked a nearby stool which shattered a window upon impact. He yelled Rolf's name, informing him that he was going to look for that shitty bastard who had tricked Aina. He said he would leave the rest to Rolf. Neska volunteered to go with Lyre, as did Kilfa. And so the three left in search of the perpetrator. The remaining four, Shiro, Karen, Aina, and Rolf, planned to see Aina's mother. Before leaving, Shiro learned that the disease was called living rot disease. Aina confirmed it, saying that the medicine uncle had mentioned the name. Meanwhile, Karen feared the worst upon hearing the diagnosis. Shiro asked Rolf to explain more about the illness. Rolf shared that it was a disease where a person's limbs would appear to be rotting, ultimately draining the patient's strength. Its cause was unclear, and in addition, most who caught it ended up dying. Sounds like Ninarich needs better healthcare and fewer medicine uncles. Not long after, Aina took the group to see her mother. When they finally arrived at the house, Shiro realized just how far Aina had to walk to come to work every day. Upon opening the door, Aina enthusiastically announced that she was home. She insisted on introducing her friends, pulling them all inside. Aina's mother, Stella, who was unbelievably thin and ill, was surprised by the unannounced visit. Still, she smiled and introduced herself, thanking everyone for taking care of her daughter. Shiro, on the other hand, insisted it was Aina who was taking care of him. Suddenly, Stella apologized for lying down, as she thought it was rude to her guests. She did her best to sit up to greet them. Shiro frantically told her she didn't need to get up and advised her to keep resting. She felt uneasy being in front of guests, but even Aina told her to lie down. Just then, Stella noticed Karen's presence and asked who she was. Aina proudly revealed that she was the mayor, which surprised Stella. She was intrigued and wondered why the mayor would visit their humble home. Rolf explained that the mayor simply wished to pay a visit after hearing that Aina's mother was unwell. Stella finally understood Karen's reasons but still apologized for causing her trouble. However, Karen said there was no need for apologies. If anything, she should be the one apologizing. Despite being the mayor, she felt she had done nothing to help an ill citizen. She told Stella she was terribly sorry for it. First honest politician we've ever seen. Stella was grateful to Karen, especially since the mayor had accepted her with open arms even though she had come from a different place. Hearing that made Karen smile in relief. Stella chuckled, pointing out that Aina had even become friends with the mayor. Aina, on the other hand, hadn't even imagined such a thing would happen. In fact, she had made many friends, not just the mayor but Shiro, Rolf, and many more. She went on to mention the people not present, including Lyre, Kilfa, and Neska, describing them all as amazing adventurers. Aina introducing her friends like she's showing off her Pokemon collection. Stella thought her daughter was very fortunate to have so many friends, and Aina agreed. Seeing the proud look on her daughter's face, Stella smiled and said it made her happy. Suddenly, Aina asked if her mother had eaten breakfast yet, as she wanted to make Nash soup for Shiro and the others. Stella apologized, thinking she should have been the one to make it but was too weak to do so. However, Aina reassured her that it was okay because she liked to cook. She immediately left to draw water from the river, and Rolf volunteered to help her. While she was away, the room fell quiet for a moment. Stella faced Karen and said she was terribly sorry for what she was about to ask. She wanted her to step outside for a moment because there was something she wanted to discuss privately with Shiro. Karen left promptly. When they were finally alone, Shiro asked what Stella wanted to talk about. She had one request for him, and it was about Aina. She asked him to take care of her daughter after she died. Stella's request is basically a soul-binding contract that Shiro can't skip. Shiro was stunned upon hearing Stella's favor. He couldn't even begin to process it. Stella continued, apologizing for springing it on him so suddenly, but she knew she didn't have much time left. She asked if Shiro had heard about her disease from Aina, and Shiro confirmed that he had. Stella asked, curious if Aina had been crying when she mentioned it. Shiro shared that Aina did cry back then, which Stella had already predicted. Stella noted that Aina was always pushing herself too hard for her mother's sake. It had been hard for Stella, not being able to do anything despite being her mother. However, what was worse was that Aina forced herself to smile in front of her to keep her from worrying in her sickbed. Oh yes, the classic smiling through pain Olympics. Lately, however, it had been a little different. Only when talking about her new life was Aina truly smiling happily, just as she used to long ago. Stella had asked her about it once, and Aina answered that it was because she had met a kind older brother who happened to be Shiro. Stella admitted she understood her daughter's reason because Shiro resembled someone she knew, Aina's father. When he first entered the house, Stella was actually very surprised. For a moment she thought her husband had come back. Shiro felt sorry for the resemblance, but Stella reassured him and apologized for making it seem like a burden. She admitted that in truth she was happy. Shiro just found out he's been a substitute father this whole time without a single tax benefit. She could scarcely remember how her husband looked, but thanks to Shiro she managed to recall his face clearly. Because of that, she believed she would be able to find him right away on the other side. Shiro was stunned to hear her mention the afterlife and asked what she meant. Stella clarified that she was talking about her body. She didn't know how much time she had left. She gathered all her strength to stand on her feet. Though she trembled, she bravely acknowledged how brazen her request was. She begged Shiro to take in Aina when she died, worried because the girl was such a crybaby. Shiro came over to check on a sick employee and left with a permanent +1 to his party size. Tears pooled in Stella's eyes as she thought about her daughter, and she begged Shiro to accept her favor. Overwhelmed by emotion, Stella lost her balance and almost fell. Shiro managed to catch her just in time. He was surprised by the sudden contact, as was Stella. After ensuring she was okay, Shiro gently placed her back on the bed. Once she was comfortable, Shiro prefaced his next words by saying he was sorry if this sounded rude, then he asked if he could touch her legs for a moment. Stella was flustered but allowed it. Stella, I'm ready to die. Shiro, cool, but first let me check your calves for a second. She sat up and slowly lowered her legs to the floor. Shiro pinched them lightly, making Stella grunt a bit. Shiro was silent for a moment, then muttered, it's just as I thought. Stella was confused, jokingly wondering if he was talking about liking her legs. Shiro quickly retorted that it wasn't that at all. It was that he happened to know the cause and the cure for living rot disease. Stella was stunned. Did you just say cure? She asked. Shiro explained that his uncle had suffered from far worse symptoms than Stella but was now as lively as ever. Yeah, he's running marathons now. He firmly claimed that he would cure her. Tears rolled down Stella's face at the thought of recovering. She gripped the hem of her dress, admitting that she truly didn't want to die and leave her little girl alone. Shiro reassured her that he wouldn't let that happen and that she would be able to live with Aina for a long time. Suddenly, Karen entered the room, wondering if they were done talking. Aina and Rolf also returned from the river, happily announcing their arrival. However, upon seeing the suspicious scene, they were instantly puzzled. Shiro was kneeling before Stella while firmly holding her hands, and she was crying. It didn't help that her legs were still positioned on the floor as they entered. Karen and Rolf glared at him with killer auras, making Shiro's spirit practically evaporate from his body. Now he wondered how on earth he was going to prove his innocence. He went from legendary healer to local creep in the span of one door creek. It was backbreakingly hard to make an excuse, especially with Karen staring at him like she was about to end him that instant. If Stella hadn't cleared up the misunderstanding, he couldn't have known what would happen. Shiro shuddered just thinking about it. After clarifying everything, he shared with everyone that what they called the living rot disease was known as beriberi in his hometown. Seeing the confusion on their faces, Shiro went on to explain that beriberi was a disease caused by a lack of nutrients. It is a terrifying ailment that paralyzes one's limbs once it has progressed far enough, but it is very easy to cure. All they had to do was ingest the deficient vitamin. When the world thinks you're cursed by a demon but you just need a bowl of brown rice and a Flintstones gummy, Karen stared at Shiro with suspicion, unable to believe he was telling the truth. Just then Aina stepped forward, asking if the medicine that could heal her mother actually existed. Shiro smiled, confirming that it did. After that gathering, he opened a portal to return to the modern world. When he arrived home, he prayed before his grandmother's altar. At that moment, he recalled how she had told him to help anyone in trouble he might encounter. With that, Shiro decided to stock up on supplies. Without wasting a moment, he used the equal exchange skill. After gathering the things he needed, he returned to Ninarich. He visited Ina's house and handed Stella a jar of vitamins. He told her to take them even if they looked off, as they would heal the living rot disease. Stella was worried about the medicine being expensive, but Shiro reassured her that it wasn't. It was buy one get one free at Walgreens. Stella tried to argue, but Shiro cut her off, saying he planned on retrieving proper compensation later. Just then he looked at Ina, saying her smile was enough. When he first came to Ninarich, Ina had helped him out a great deal, and now it was his turn. With that, he advised Stella to take the medicine without guilt. Touched by his immense kindness, Stella could only mutter his name while tearing up. She then held his hand, promising she would take the medicine. 1 month passed, and as Ina and Shiro visited Stella, they were stunned by the scene before them. Stella was standing, seemingly doing much better. Stella shared that she had previously felt so weak it was a problem, but now she was recovering. Ina asked if they could sleep beside each other again just like before. Stella confirmed they would, promising her daughter they would sleep together every day from then on. Nothing heals a terminal illness quite like the promise of a month-long sleepover. Overwhelmed with emotion, Ina ran into her mother's arms, sobbing. Stella cried as well, apologizing for making her daughter worry. This time for sure they would stay together. Seeing that they needed this moment for themselves, Shiro slowly exited and closed the door. He could finally tell his grandma that he had helped someone. The next day, after long hours of working, Shiro relaxed on his balcony with a cold drink. He remarked that it was yet another great day, complemented by the pretty evening sky. Ina approached, thanking him again for the vitamin supplements. Because of them, her mother had completely recovered. Ina talked with her mother so much they barely slept, but it felt nice because it made her so happy. She also shared that her mother had made her nash soup, filled with all kinds of ingredients. Stella's nash soup must have some serious buffs if it turned a medical crisis into a staring contest marathon. Suddenly, Ina presented some flowers to Shiro, saying she had picked them with her mother. After handing the gift to him, she continued to share new memories. When they had a staring match the other day, Stella made a funny face and Ina replicated it for Shiro. Seeing how full her spirit was, Shiro felt fulfilled. The Silver Moon had officially joined Fairy's Blessing as one of their branches. This also meant that Azure Flash was now working under Fairy's Blessing, and strong adventurers were showing up one after another to explore the Great Forest. To top it off, Shiro had made close to 50 million yen in the past 2 months. At that rate, he could actually retire early after working hard for a year. He basked in that thought on his peaceful balcony. When your side hustle in another dimension pays better than a decade in a corporate office. Shiro felt so at ease that he didn't even sense Karen staring at him from behind. She suddenly asked what was coming soon, which genuinely shocked him. She sat beside him, casually greeting him with a good evening. She pointed out that it was a calm night, disregarding that she had almost made Shiro's heart stop. She cheekily apologized, then noticed his drink. Shiro explained it was alcohol from his hometown and offered her a taste. Karen immediately took him up on it. As soon as she drank it, she praised his good taste. This made Shiro laugh because it meant she was praising the alcohol, not him. Karen realized he was right and decided she must praise him more. Shiro playfully shared that he was the kind of guy who responded well to praise, which made Karen decide to give him a pat on the head. Without warning, she pulled his head onto her lap, patting it forcefully. Shiro panicked and asked her to stop, but Karen wanted to tease him more. She whispered that he should just be an obedient boy and let himself be petted. The political leader of the town has 0 boundary settings after 2 drinks. Shiro groaned, seeing how obviously drunk she was. Just then Karen fell silent and stared into the horizon. She thanked Shiro for coming to the town. Shiro was stunned and looked up at her with bewildered eyes. Karen told him that if there was anything she could do for him, he shouldn't hesitate to ask. Shiro quickly sat up straight, saying there was no need because he just did what he could. Karen smiled, remarking that he was just like the heroes the bards sang about. Shiro told her to stop, he was just a money-hungry bastard. However, he admitted he grew up with a grandmother who told him to help those in trouble. Karen remarked that he had a wonderful grandmother and asked for her name. Shiro answered, Arasugawa Mio. Karen thought the name was familiar, then it hit her. Could Shiro be the grandson of the immortal witch Arasu? She forcefully shook him for an answer, and Shiro was floored that she knew his granny. Karen explained that there was not a single person on the continent who wouldn't know her, though very few had met her in person. Karen and Arisu had met during the Harvest Festival just last year. She had appeared in town, getting drunk and dancing. Arisu appearing at a festival last year just to get drunk and show off a star sword is peak grandma behavior. Hearing that it happened last year, Shiro pieced together that the place where his granny disappeared 7 years ago was indeed Rufuardio. She really had been in Ninarich last year. Karen remembered how the immortal witch had shown them the magic star sword Melkipson made from star fragments. Shiro asked Karen to pause. He needed time to process this. This amount of information boggled his drunken brain. He recalled his grandmother's writings about a witch in the world of Rufuardio 80 years ago. Then he remembered asking his grandmother about a celebrity on one of her posters, and she had told him the name was Mel Gibson. Grandma, is that Braveheart? Are we really doing this? Karen finally realized why Shiro kept bringing out mysterious items no one had ever seen. She asked if he saw his grandmother often, but Shiro revealed he hadn't seen her in 7 years. He stepped to the edge of his balcony and screamed into the night that he couldn't believe his grandmother was still alive. His voice echoed through the mountains and he was shocked when the sound shot right back at him. After his conversation with Karen, Shiro returned to his grandmother's house. There, he stared at her altar, still in disbelief that she was alive. As he observed her picture, he thought about how she simply never tried to be understood by others, not when she was posing with double peace signs like that. Shiro sighed, hoping she would visit the upcoming Harvest Festival. It's hard to have a somber moment at an altar when the deceased is hitting you with the Instagram influencer special. A day earlier, Karen had learned that Arisu the Immortal was Shiro's grandmother and that she had disappeared without telling him anything. Karen understood that Shiro wanted to look for her right away, but she suggested waiting in Ninarich first, as the witch had appeared at last year's festival. Shiro was intrigued. He considered staying for the event since Karen seemed confident. Additionally, this year marked the big 120th anniversary, and Karen, as the mayor, wanted to make it a true spectacle. There were still about 2 months until the festival. Karen told Shiro she could really use his help, and since he loved festivals, she didn't have to ask twice. Shiro brainstormed ideas for a stall, noting there would be plenty of food. He considered a goldfish scooping stall, but those fish didn't seem to live in the area. He thought about target shooting, but people would likely show up with professional bows or throwing knives. Lastly, he thought about a string lottery scam, but the name alone made it a no-go. That's literally in the name, Shiro. Maybe don't. At that moment, Shiro realized that creating a non-food stall was surprisingly difficult. He scratched his head, forcing himself to dig through his childhood memories. That very word, memories, gave him a brilliant idea. He brought tons of cameras to the shop, each one a different model. Aina was astonished by the sight and asked what they were. Shiro explained they were called cameras and were the wonderful new products he planned to introduce. Aina struggled to pronounce the foreign word, clearly unable to grasp the concept. Seeing this, Shiro decided it would be faster to show her. He asked Aina to look toward him and snapped her photo. A photo was immediately printed from the camera and he presented it to her. Aina was shocked, unable to believe her image was on the paper. She frantically asked if she had been shrunk and trapped inside. Aina's less worried about her good side and more worried about her 2D side. Shiro chuckled, explaining that the camera was like a magic item that could draw pictures of people and scenery in the blink of an eye. He suggested they take more pictures. He asked Aina to smile and she struck various poses. After seeing the prints, Aina was still in awe. She took the camera next and Shiro guided her through the process. She asked if she simply had to click the button and Shiro confirmed it. He struck a pose and Aina focused on taking the best shot possible. When she handed him the print, Shiro praised it for being perfect. Hyped up, Aina asked to take many more pictures of him. Shiro didn't need much convincing. He began posing like a supermodel. After dozens of photos, Shiro finally called it a day. Aina pointed at one of the devices, asking for its specific name. Shiro answered that it was a Polaroid camera. Later, Shiro playfully poked Aina to make her face him, then ambushed her with a surprise photo. Aina was annoyed, claiming her face looked weird in the shot. Moments later, she got her revenge, snapping a surprise photo of Shiro and laughing. The real magic isn't the camera. It's Aina realizing she can now blackmail the boss with physical evidence. She asked how the photo turned out, but the result surprised Shiro in a way he didn't expect. The photo was uncannily similar to the one on his grandma's altar. His face held the same shadow of his grandmother's expression, the double peace sign. He unintentionally muttered the observation in a way that sounded like a haiku. By my face there is a shadow, of grandmother, called double peace sign. Shiro is the first person in history to be roasted by a haiku that he wrote himself. Just then Stella entered the shop and thanked Shiro for looking after Aina. Shiro asked how their new house was, wondering if she was tired from the move. Stella admitted she was a little tired but thanked him for his help. Currently, Stella and Aina were living in company housing Shiro had rented for them, just a 10-minute walk from the store. Suddenly, Aina teased her mother, telling Shiro that Stella was actually quite bad at cleaning up. Stella didn't deny it, admitting she was ashamed, though she reminded Aina they had agreed not to tell anyone. "Girl, you were fighting for your life last week. The dust bunnies can wait." Shiro reassured them that if they ever needed a hand they shouldn't hesitate to ask. Aina hesitated before finishing her thought. It turned out she knew Shiro was also bad at cleaning. Shiro goofily scratched his head, admitting his own shame. Aina smiled, saying she would see him tomorrow. Shiro thanked her for her help, bid her goodbye and told Stella to take care as well. After the successful collaboration, the Silver Moon Adventurers Guild was now the Ninarich branch of Fairy's Blessing. The first time Shiro opened those doors, the only thing that echoed through the building was Emil's sobbing. But now it was bustling with life, filled with different adventurers from around the nation. One of the adventurers reported to her comrades that they had finished searching the northeast, but they didn't find any ruins. Some were back from exploring the southeast, and they also had information about the monsters they ran into. Some adventurers found rivers, and they told the others that there was a good camping spot 3 days east. As Shiro entered the halls of the brand new guild, he realized that the days when it was in a slump felt so distant now. In just 2 months they turned into the busiest guild in the Guillarm Kingdom. As the guild got busier by the minute, Emil caught sight of Shiro, and she called out to him. Shiro noticed her calling him, and so he walked toward the counter to greet her. Suddenly, Emil smirked, having a good guess of his purpose for visiting at a time like that. She peered her head closer, suggesting that he came to see her. It could be that, or he may have felt like giving an expensive gift. Shiro swiftly backed away and shunned the idea. He came because he promised to have dinner with everyone from Azure Flash. However, Emil was already convinced that he came for her. She claimed that she was fully prepared to become his wife at any time since he guaranteed that she could live her whole life in super luxury. Emil was deep into her fantasy, imagining that she would fly on a high-class dragon and throw down money from the sky. Suddenly, she slowly unbuttoned her shirt, telling Shiro that he could do whatever he wanted with her. As he could see, she was quite the devoted type. Alarmed, Shiro screamed for her to stop unbuttoning her shirt all of a sudden. He quickly freaked out over what he said, so he reminded her to do her job. She unbuttoned her shirt as a devoted type. "Most people just bring a resume, Emil." Emil, being determined, crawled over the counter to pounce on Shiro. In complete coincidence, she was just about to take a break and she suggested that it was a sign of fate. She slowly trapped Shiro between her arms, suggesting that they drink into the night together. Crawling over the counter is less fate and more National Geographic Predator special. Shiro quickly intercepted her creepy hands, wholeheartedly refusing the invitation. He shouldn't have anything to do with women who drank the night away, that was his grandma's will. As they continued to wrestle each other, Shiro told Emil that he had just recently learned that his grandma was alive. Emil angrily asked what he was rambling about because she didn't get his point at all. Just then, Shiro firmly pressed her hand, making her feel some type of way. She told him that if he grasped her hands that passionately, then it must mean he's interested in her offer. Shiro, however, bluntly replied that he was trying to push her back so she wouldn't get dragged. Still, Emil tried to pucker her lips to kiss him, insisting that no often meant yes. Emil's spine-chilling lips slowly crept toward Shiro, and he panicked after seeing how dangerously close they were getting. He was so freaked out because Emil started acting like an octopus. Just then, a feline presence witnessed Shiro's dilemma. It was Kilfa. She immediately kicked Emil away, sending her straight into a wine barrel. Kilfa asked Shiro if he was safe, but he could only mutter his savior's name in relief. Later on, everyone gathered in the bar inside the guild. There, Shiro sat with the members of Azure Flash, but he was still quite traumatized by Emil's octopus assault. He cried to Kilfa, thanking her for saving him. She then gave him some reassuring pats on the head, comforting him with the fact that rabbit folk simply go into heat as the full moon approaches. Emil argued that she wasn't in heat, but Nesca still pointed out that she was forcing Shiro and that didn't make for a healthy relationship. Rolf chimed in, adding that it was as though the unplucked fruit called Shiro was about to be forcefully harvested. Emil agreed that she came close, but she was unbothered by what she did and just went on to take a bite of her food. Suddenly everyone called her out for joining them for the meal, but Emil only reasoned that she didn't like being left out. Emil joined the meal like she didn't just try to commit a felony on the guild counter. Suddenly, the group heard a patron scream the word asshole, which suggested that a fight was about to break out. Nearby, a ripped-looking adventurer called Mojito Conhead asked his enemy Wise Whipman what he just said to him. He tauntingly asked Wise if he wanted to fight, as he had just gotten one. However, Wise acted nonchalantly, simply saying, "Good grief. It was the duty of the wise to discipline morons after all." Triggered by his comment, Mojito stood up and urged Wise to get the fight started. Mojito stood up. The IQ of the room dropped by 20 points, but the entertainment value went up by 100. The spectators immediately started placing bets. Some put 5 pieces of silver on the Mohawk guy, and some put 10 pieces on the masked bastard. Sensing the impending trouble, Shiro stood up to stop the fight. However, Liar advised him to leave it alone. For adventurers, fighting like that was like a greeting, but it could also be because everyone was frustrated. Shiro was confused about why they would be frustrated, so Liar explained that adventurers in the guild were elites from all over the place, and they came to find the ruins. In other words, they were all first-class veterans. But as Shiro could see, it had already been 2 months since the place became Fairy's Blessing, and they haven't found as much as the in ruins yet. Shiro watched the adventurers battle each other, and he finally understood why they were so upset. To make matters worse, there was no entertainment, and they were in the boonies, so they had nowhere to blow off steam. There really wasn't anything they would call entertainment in Ninerich. Elite veterans sitting in the boonies with no Wi-Fi and no ruins is a recipe for a 5-star riot. Just then Emil appeared from under the table and she went directly toward Shiro. He anxiously asked what she wanted, but he warned her not to unbutton her shirt again. However, Emil knew that she shouldn't do that in front of everyone. More importantly, when Liar said entertainment, he meant doing that. Shiro seemed confused, so Emil pointed out how dull he was. She meant a perverted shop, of course. Liar called Emil an idiot, clarifying that it wasn't what he meant. Emil chuckled, asking why he panicked like that. Before Liar could reason it out, Neska stepped on his foot with her shoe's heel, making him scream in pure agony. Neska blamed him for saying something so perverted, but Liar argued that it wasn't him who mentioned it, but Emil. In the first place, he had never even gone to a brothel before. Liar made the grave mistake of saying that word, which led to him receiving another heel attack from Neska. The word brothel is apparently a trigger for Neska's heel of justice skill. Meanwhile, the fighting adventurers finally declared a winner. Mojito sat on top of the poor Wise, punching the light out of him without mercy. Just then someone entered the bar, wondering what was up with all that noise. To their surprise, it was the guildmaster, named Mirage. She angrily stood before the adventurers, reminding them that there wouldn't be any people fighting in her guild. The adventurers froze, and they instantly composed themselves, honoring Nei's words. After that, Nei approached Shiro, chuckling as she mentioned how she showed him something unsightly. Shiro could only laugh nervously, though he was amazed by her leadership. Suddenly, Nei noticed Emil's ears peeking out from under the table, so she called her. Emil refused to show herself, so Nei confronted her, asking why she didn't stop them despite being present. Emil's eyes started to water in fear, and she struggled to come up with an answer. However, Nei smiled like a psycho, telling her that she wanted no excuses. She dragged the poor Emil by her feet, leading her to beg Shiro to help her, his future wife. Suddenly, Shiro finds the floor tile very interesting. She apologized to Nei as she was being taken away, and she pleaded to be punished rather than receive a pay cut. No one dared to intervene, so Emil just screamed her lungs out. When they were finally alone, Liar told Shiro that they had something to tell him. While they were searching the forest for ruins, they found a rare flower. Shiro was intrigued, so Liar went on to share everything else that happened a week ago. After hearing the full story, Shiro finally understood, and he agreed to join Liar and the team on a trip. Liar asked if he really meant it, and Shiro confirmed it as long as they made sure to protect him from monsters. Liar reassured him that with all the intense training they had done at the training grounds, they were nothing like they were before. With that, everyone at the table raised their glasses together. The wind rustled through the air, carrying with it a scattering of delicate petals against the bright sky. Shiro stared at the flower before him, in awe of how beautiful it was. But he wasn't surprised, they were flowers after all. These were no ordinary plants. They were Apsara, and they only bloomed near clear water. Shiro, Kilfa, and Neska sprawled out in a field filled with Apsara flowers, their weary bodies finally finding rest. Just then, Liar appeared, advising them not to sleep there. He was quite disappointed at Shiro for joining the girls, so Shiro quickly apologized, reasoning that his legs were just all worn out from walking for half a day. Liar crossed his arms in annoyance, reminding them that they had to pluck the Apsara flowers before the sun set. They could rest as much as they wanted afterward. 1 week earlier, Azure Flash found the flower called Apsara when searching for the ruins. They were rare ingredients used to make high-ranking recovery potions, but on their way back they had already wilted. Shiro's basically a grocery delivery driver for the elite. Apsara flowers seemed to wilt only a few hours after getting plucked, which discouraged the Azure Flash party. Neither carrying them in water nor keeping them at a constant temperature with ice magic worked, and they believed there was no way for them to deliver them to the apothecary in time. Then, just as they were about to give up, Liar realized that Shiro might just have the skills for the task. He was right. One of the skills Shiro showed them was spatial storage, which allowed him to carry around whatever was in there without it weighing anything. It was even more of a cheat skill, since it also stopped the flow of time of what he carried. It's not just storage, it's a freshness-guaranteed Tupperware from the gods. Not long after, Shiro and Azure Flash had finally gathered quite a lot of Apsara flowers, and Liar decided it should be enough. Just then Liar groaned, realizing that Kilfa had been sleeping the whole time. Suddenly, Kilfa's ears perked up and she informed the others that enemies were approaching. A swarm of flyshell bugs suddenly flew toward them, alarming the group. Shiro freaked out over how big they were, and to make matters worse, there were 17 of them. Liar quickly warned Shiro not to move and to keep his voice down. Shiro followed his advice, but then he noticed something odd. The flyshell bugs had slashes all over their bodies, suggesting that they were hurt. Nesca identified the injuries as windcutter wounds, and judging from the blood clotting, they probably fought each other. They did half the job already. Suddenly, Liar cursed aloud, realizing that the flyshell bugs had noticed them. He immediately turned to Rolf, telling him to protect Shiro. He asked Nesca to start chanting, and she quickly got right into it. She summoned a rune from her staff, and with it she used the fire arrow spell. A ball of fire erupted from the rune, firing directly at the flyshell bugs. Meanwhile, Rolf alerted Shiro to get behind him. Kilfa jumped into the fight, helping Nesca by darting her daggers at the bugs. To Shiro's shock, the daggers easily bounced off the flyshell bugs' armor-like bodies. Kilfa, who had no daggers left, was now defenseless against their ferocious foes. Still, she smirked, signaling Nesca to pull off the next part of the strategy. Nesca focused, summoning a firebolt from her magical staff. In a split second, numerous fireballs emerged, heading toward the bugs with immense speed. This attack managed to deal some serious damage, and it killed some of the flyshell bugs. Shiro was surprised upon witnessing this, as he had just noticed that the bugs were weak against fire. In that case, he rushed forward to the front lines, making Rolf panic behind him. Rolf tried to stop Shiro, but he dashed forward without fear. He thought that a bear spray wouldn't work on the flyshell bugs, so he decided to use something different. He brought out a bottle of gas and lit up a lighter, making gigantic flames erupt from it. This makeshift flamethrower might just save them from the perils of the flyshell bugs. Nothing says isekai innovation like a gas bottle and a prayer. Liar was left stunned when he witnessed what Shiro had done, as it actually seemed like he was a magician. Without wasting time, Shiro signaled Rolf to move on to the next phase of their plan. Rolf immediately sprang into action. With swift, decisive movements, he cut down the remaining flyshell bugs that had survived the flamethrower. His blade carved through them one after another, steadily reducing their numbers. Liar quickly joined in as well, helping eliminate the remaining bugs while calling out to his teammates. He praised their performance and urged them to keep up the momentum. The battle continued as the group worked in sync, each of them playing to their strengths. Little by little, they overwhelmed the swarm until only 6 bugs remained. In the midst of it all, Shiro paused for a brief moment. Watching everyone fight so seamlessly, he couldn't help but realize just how strong they had become. A faint smirk formed on his face, thinking that they truly got stronger through training, as they mentioned. Suddenly, Nesca let out a distressed sound, causing Shiro to look her way in concern. She was trapped, and multiple flyshell bugs were heading toward her at the same time. Shiro quickly informed the others that the bugs were after Nesca. He aimed the gas bottle toward her, but it was no good because the flyshell bugs were too close to her. He couldn't use it without hurting Nesca. Shiro cursed, knowing that he couldn't do anything about it. Friendly fire is not the move. Nesca tried her best to fend off the bugs despite being outnumbered. Liar ran to her rescue, but before he could reach her, Shiro threw himself before her, pushing her aside. Liar and Rolf screamed Shiro's name, but it was too late. A flyshell bug was already aiming itself at him. It strangled Shiro by the neck, causing him to grasp for air. Liar screamed for him to jump into the river, so Shiro mustered all his strength to follow his advice. He managed to get to the water, forcing the flyshell bug to let go of him. Now Shiro struggled to keep himself afloat against the river's currents. Just as he was on the verge of death, Nesca called upon the spirit of water to grant Shiro the boon of water. She finally cast the spell on Shiro, and it guided him through the river. Still, Liar was filled with panic. He yelled to Shiro that they would follow the riverbank. At the moment, he couldn't do anything but let Shiro float to safety. He vowed that they would definitely find him and that he only had to wait. Later on, Shiro slowly regained his consciousness, but his vision was still blurry. He fluttered his eyes open, wondering if Azure Flash had come to save him. Shiro's vision was blurry. To be fair, he just went through a bug fight and a washing machine cycle. Suddenly, an unfamiliar face loomed over him, telling him to get a grip. It was a girl, asking him if he could hear her. Shiro didn't respond, but instead he sat up and coughed out the water from his system. The girl was relieved, seeing that he was alive after all. Shiro's body collapsed to the ground from exhaustion, but he kept his head up and asked the girl who she was. The girl stared at him with bewilderment, wondering if he had never seen a fairy before. Waking up to a fairy is much better than waking up to a meal trying to unbutton her shirt again. Shiro quickly got up on his feet only to find a small fairy hovering before him. It was his first time seeing one, so he asked if she was that kind of fairy. The little fairy felt awkward all of a sudden, so she told Shiro not to stare at her like that because it was embarrassing her. Shiro was surprised by her reaction, but he quickly apologized. Just then, the fairy asked if there wasn't something he should be saying before being fascinated by her. Shiro didn't know what she meant by this, so he guessed she wanted him to say it was nice to meet her. The fairy got annoyed by his answer and bluntly told him he was wrong. She hinted that she brought him ashore, and if she hadn't saved him, he would have plunged down the waterfall and become fish food. She asked how he ended up getting swept away by the river, and she sarcastically wondered if it was a hobby. Shiro said no, and he hesitated to reveal the true cause of the incident. Shiro hesitated to tell the truth. Yeah, I got strangled by a bug and did a cannonball. Isn't exactly hero material. He ultimately told her everything, and the fairy understood that he jumped into the river to flee from a monster. She suddenly erupted with laughter, calling Shiro a weakling. She then asked where he came from, so Shiro answered that he was from Ninarich, a town west of the forest. The fairy stuttered as she repeated the word, asking if it was a human town. Just then she suggested being brought back with him to Ninarich. When Shiro asked why, the fairy suddenly blushed, saying that it was no good. Shiro wondered if she had an acquaintance in Ninarich, and she confirmed it, adding that it was a male human. She remembered him to be taller than Shiro, and he was kind of a weak-looking beanstalk. He laughed happily, and his hair and eyes were light blue like the sky. She asked if Shiro knew him, but he reminded her not to assume that he knew every human just because they belonged to the same species. He at least wanted the fairy to reveal the man's name. The fairy paused for a moment, realizing that she didn't know it. He was the only human she had met back then, so she just called him Hume. He told her that he came to the forest to hunt monsters, which suggested that he was a hunter or an adventurer. A sky-blue beanstalk who hunts monsters? Either he's a legendary hero or he's wearing a very questionable tracksuit. Suddenly Shiro pointed out that meeting in the forest sounded kind of romantic, which led him to ask if he and the fairy were lovers. This embarrassed the fairy, so she bonked him on the head and called him stupid. She shot down the idea and firmly said that there was no way for a human and a fairy to be lovers. She and the human were just friends or something like that. She smiled and reiterated what she said, and this somehow convinced Shiro that they actually were best friends. Bro rebranded the situation instantly. The fairy lit up, agreeing that it was the right term she agreed with. Finally, Shiro understood the fairy. Just then he asked if she was pretty familiar with the forest, and the fairy proudly said yes. She was born and raised in the Jujina forest after all. Shiro then proposed a deal. He would take her to Ninarich, but she had to take him to the western part of the forest. The fairy was stunned that he would actually take her to Ninarich, so she immediately told him that he could count on her. She promised to lead him to the western part of the forest, and she even vowed to protect him until they got there. To prove that she could actually be his guardian, she boasted her windcutter skill to Shiro. Her powers cut through the woods, creating a strong gust of wind that uprooted the nearby trees from the ground. She asked if it was amazing, but Shiro was far too stunned to even react. He stuttered and agreed that it was, but seeing the damage that she had done to the trees, he hinted that she might have overdone it. The fairy admitted that she was pretty bad at controlling her magic powers, but it didn't bother her because it was strong. Just earlier, a group of flyshell bugs tried to catch her, so she blew them away. Hearing that, Shiro realized that the flyshell bugs' injuries were caused by her. Shiro realized those flyshell bugs were already traumatized. He wasn't fighting monsters, he was fighting survivors. Before setting off to the northern part of the woods, Shiro introduced himself to the fairy, and he said it was nice to meet her. Since they had agreed on a deal, he believed getting acquainted was necessary. The fairy chuckled when she learned his name, thinking that it was quite strange. Just then she shook Shiro's finger, and she introduced herself as Patty Fall. Since she would be guiding him, she wanted to be called leader. However, she noticed that it didn't feel quite right, so she insisted on being called boss instead. Shiro agreed without hesitation, and he called her his boss out loud. This amused Patty, so she told him to say it one more time. Shiro humored her a little and obeyed her command, which made Patty feel giddy inside. Just then, Shiro talked in a weird way, as if he was a dummy with only a few brain cells. He asked Patty that if she liked it, he could act like a smooch. Patty got freaked out and asked what was up with his weird way of speaking, so Shiro explained that he was just speaking like a smooching henchman. Patty hated the idea and protested against it, and at the moment she forbade the smooch. Shiro suggested a gangster way of speaking instead, but Patty also forbade it. Wanting to annoy her further, Shiro spoke like an eloquent nobleman, but Patty also didn't like that either. Patty wanted an underling, but she accidentally adopted a theater major. Not long after, the two had to stop and make camp because the sun had already set. As they cozied up near the fire, Patty asked Shiro if he wanted to go back to his friends. Shiro thought it was only natural because they were his friends. They might even be searching for him at that moment. Patty understood, then she fell silent for a moment. Suddenly she hopped on his head, announcing that she had made up her mind. She would also help him find his friends. Shiro was surprised, and he asked if she would really do that. Patty quickly looked away and acted tough, reminding him that she was his boss after all. Just then she cleared her throat and she asked him if he was hungry. Since Shiro was her underling, she would give him something special. She started rummaging for the gift she was about to give. What Shiro witnessed shocked him. Just like him, Patty had the spatial storage skill. Seeing the shocked look on his face, Patty asked what was wrong and if he was not hungry at all. Nothing humbles an isekai protagonist like a 6-inch fairy having the same tier S ability. Patty casually reached into her spatial storage and pulled out an apple, taking a bite as if it were the most normal thing in the world. To her, using such a rare skill clearly wasn't a big deal. She glanced at Shiro and asked what was wrong, wondering if it was his first time seeing something like spatial storage. Then, as if it needed no further explanation, she casually added that all fairies seemed to have skills like that for some reason. It was not like spatial storage was rare. Most importantly, she wanted to talk about the mead she made. She told Shiro it would heat him right up, so she urged him to drink it. Shiro wasted no time and chugged the container, and it was tasty as he expected. Patty laughed and said she knew that, and she told him to drink as much as he liked. Shiro chugged a legendary artifact just to get over a cold. This is the ultimate flex. Just then she told Shiro that she would stand watch for the night so he should go to sleep once he finished drinking. Slightly embarrassed, she admitted that it was the boss's orders. Shiro repeated the word boss in a playful tone, which made Patty quickly turn back, visibly annoyed as she asked what he wanted. But instead of teasing her further, Shiro simply thanked her. That caught Patty off guard, leaving her just a little flustered. The next day, Patty informed Shiro that there were tons of other species other than fairies in the Jagina forest. There were goblins, orcs, terrifying ogres, and way over in the distance there was an elf village. When she got close to their village once, their barrier surprised her. Later on in the middle of their journey, Shiro asked if they could take a small break. Patty was in disbelief that he wanted to rest again, but she decided it couldn't be helped. She allowed Shiro to rest just for a little while. As Shiro sat under a tree, Patty went exploring. She found a babuna flower, but its nectar tasted weird. She mistook it for another flower once, and she babbled on about her experience. Hearing everything she had to say, Shiro realized that she just kept spouting stuff he didn't even think adventurers knew. Turns out, if you live in the woods, you learn stuff that isn't in the wiki. It seemed that there was once a country known as Jagina there, way before Patty was even born. However, it had been a very long time since that country collapsed, and it seemed that the place was just known as the Jagina Forest now. Shiro wondered if it was a country active in the age of ancient magic, but Patty wouldn't know about that because it was from before she was born. Suddenly, Patty sensed something approaching, so she warned Shiro about it. He was confused for a moment, but Patty didn't explain further and only told him to hide. Elsewhere, the Azure Flash Party searched the woods for Shiro. They yelled into the vast forest, calling out his name. The group yelled at the top of their lungs, telling Shiro to reply if he could hear them. Liar was starting to panic, wondering if he had fallen down the waterfall and died. Tears fell down his worried face as he screamed that he wouldn't accept it. Nesca irritably hit him with her staff, telling him not to say something like that. Liar apologized. Then he smiled at Nesca, asking if she really thought Shiro was alive. She reassured him that it was okay, as she was pretty sure that he was alive. Elsewhere, Kilfa was being kidnapped by a random raven, but she screamed that Shiro was definitely alive. Getting kidnapped by a raven is the most Kilfa thing to happen in the history of the series. Later on, the Azure Flash Party went closer and closer to Shiro's location. He could hear their voices calling out his name, so he slowly got up. Patty called him an idiot and asked why he was getting up, so he explained to her that the people calling for him were his important friends. He told her that it was okay because they were his companions. Patty only stared at him with bewilderment, seemingly confused about the word he just mentioned. Just then, Shiro screamed to the Azure Flash members, informing them about his whereabouts. Liar quickly heard his call, and he wondered if it was Shiro. The other members pointed in the direction of the voice, while some of them wondered where Kilfa was. Meanwhile, Kilfa was helpless against the raven that had taken her captive. Just then, she spotted Shiro from below, and she excitedly called out to him. Shiro looked up and saw her, concerned about her current state. Having had enough of the raven, Kilfa kicked it with all her might, forcing it to let go of her. She successfully escaped the raven's clutches, but now she was falling from the sky and heading directly at Shiro. She screamed his name in a panic, and she inevitably landed her butt on his face. A loud crash was heard from far away, catching Azure Flash's attention. Shiro was in a lot of pain, but Kilfa had no care for it. She was already crying her eyes out, thinking that he had died. He was alive until about 5 seconds ago before you fell from the stratosphere. She got on top of him and hugged him tightly, promising that she would never leave him again. Shiro only smiled, letting Kilfa express her feelings. Not long after, the Azure Flash members tracked the sounds that led them to Shiro. They immediately bowed an apology upon seeing him, but Shiro found no need for that and asked them to raise their heads. Still, Liar hung his head low, saying how sorry he was. He was supposed to protect him after all. Nesca also felt guilty for what happened, so she kept her head low as well. Shiro had saved her life for the second time, and she would definitely repay him. Nesca's guilt is so heavy she's basically becoming a permanent part of the forest floor. Shiro was silent for a moment, feeling awkward over the situation. Just then, he reassured everyone that in the end he was safe and had reunited with them. It was all that mattered to him. Liar wanted to argue that it wasn't that simple, but Shiro cut him off, playfully asking if he didn't see him as a companion of Azure Flash. Liar stuttered, quickly countering that it wasn't like that. Kilfa chimed in and agreed that Shiro was their companion. Then she pointed out that Liar was wrong. This made Liar groan in annoyance, and he told her to give him a break. Just then, Rolf told Shiro that it was amazing that he made it all by himself. This reminded Shiro about Patty, and he revealed to everyone that he was actually rescued by her. He invited her to join him, and he volunteered to introduce her. Upon seeing the fairy, everyone gasped in unison. Just then, Shiro introduced his life's savior, the fairy boss, Patty. Liar stuttered, asking Shiro if he was for real. Nesca stepped forward, asking Shiro to explain. Fairies were so rare that they were also known as the illusory race, and they were supposed to almost never show themselves to people. Shiro was surprised, so he asked Patty if that was true. Patty peeked from behind the tree, explaining that they were forbidden by law from even leaving their village. She suddenly hid behind Shiro's head, still feeling shy in the party's presence. Meanwhile, Shiro finally understood everything. Since the guild's name was Fairy's Blessing, he thought one could find them everywhere. Just then Patty asked why they had to bless humans, but Shiro had no idea. He guessed some fairy somewhere wanted to start blessing people. Just then Nesca asked Shiro if he didn't know. Shiro was clueless about what she was asking, which somehow confirmed Nesca's speculation. And so she explained to him that Fairy's Blessing's namesake was the alcohol said to only be brewed by fairies, the legendary Fairy's Mead. Shiro quickly recognized it, and he asked Patty if they were talking about the mead she gave him. Patty got excited and she confirmed he was right. Everyone was stunned, seemingly having one thought in mind. Nesca suddenly interrogated Shiro, asking if he had drunk the fairy's mead. The look on her face isn't concern, it's the look of someone who just realized her friend accidentally drank her retirement fund. Liar, still in disbelief, asked Shiro if he was being for real. On the other hand, Nesca asked if he truly drank the fairy's mead. They were talking about the fairy's mead, which was said to be so expensive that one could buy a castle for just a single cup of it. According to the guild's documents, the last time it was put up for auction was about 200 years ago. Shiro was stunned, stuttering as he asked if it was really that expensive. Shiro stuttering about the price is the sound of a man realizing he just peed away a literal kingdom. Suddenly Patty intervened, saying that she only let Shiro taste it as an exception because he was her underling. Liar was intrigued to hear this, so Shiro explained everything that happened. After hearing the entire story, the others finally understood. Still, they were surprised that he was saved by a fairy. Just then Liar turned to Patty, thanking her for saving his friend. It might not be much, but as a way of thanks, he wanted to help her in case there was anything they could do for her. Shiro remembered that Patty was looking for that one human, so he asked Liar if he could help her find someone. Liar asked who, so Patty described the person she was looking for. He had blue eyes and hair, but she didn't know anything else. Hearing that, Kilfa promised that they would help her. But for now, since they had safely reunited, they focused on returning to Ninarich. Not long after, Patty finally saw Ninarich from afar. She was extremely excited, as it was her first time seeing a human village. Rolf corrected her, saying that it was a city and not a village. They called their settlements differently depending on their size. This surprised Patty, but she got the idea. Just then she told Shiro to head right into the city. This made Liar erupt in laughter, and he teased Shiro for having a tough life as an underling. As they made their way in, Patty suddenly noticed someone standing in the middle of the road. It was Aina, and she looked like she was barely holding herself together, as if she might burst into tears at any moment. She called out to Shiro, who asked her why she was there. She didn't answer, and instead she ran straight toward him and threw herself into his arms, breaking down as she clung to him. Through her sobs, she could only manage to call his name over and over again. Shiro could only stare at her, stunned at her sudden greeting. Aina turned Shiro into a human tissue by crying into his arms for an hour. Suddenly Stella approached, expressing how relieved she was that he had found his way home. After reuniting with Aina and Stella, the rest of Azure Flash finally parted ways with Shiro. As they left, Stella explained to Shiro that Aina, who had just slept from exhaustion, couldn't sleep the whole night because she was so worried about him. Shiro asked if Stella was able to sleep at least, but even she wasn't able to. Just then she told Shiro that she couldn't carry Aina much further. However, she chose to hold on to her despite being tired. Shiro understood, but he reminded Stella to tell him when she reached her limit. Stella chuckled, saying that there was no way she would do that. She wouldn't give Aina to him as she was her mother after all. Thanks, Shiro, but you don't have the parental back strength perk yet. Not long after, they finally reached Stella and Aina's house. Just as Shiro was about to leave, Stella recalled that she had forgotten something. She smiled and welcomed him home, which left a smile on Shiro's face. Later on, Shiro entered his house, and upon exploring it, Patty expressed how amazed she was at how big it was. Shiro asked what kind of houses fairies lived in, and Patty shared that they made their houses in trees so that monsters wouldn't attack them. Just then she asked Shiro if he hadn't forgotten. Shiro said no, and he asked to confirm if she was talking about her friend. It was a small town, so he was sure they would find him straight away. Wanting to reassure Patty, he told her that they would search for him tomorrow. Suddenly, Shiro asked if making the mead was really that tiresome. However, Patty revealed that it was pretty easy. As long as she had honey, everything would be fine. Still, there was no such thing as free honey, and it was super difficult to get some. Just the other day, she was assaulted by a huge swarm of bees, and she barely made it out with her life. Before she could finish speaking, Shiro presented her with a jar of honey, asking if it was the right kind. Patty confirmed that it was exactly like that, and she commended Shiro for finding some. Her eyes suddenly widened upon seeing just how huge the jar was, and she asked if it was real. Shiro confirmed it, adding that it was 100% pure honey, straight from the beekeeper. Patty wanted to see if it was authentic, so she tasted it for herself. She was in disbelief, and she asked what exactly it was because it was so good. Just then she proudly told Shiro that she could make an extra fine mead if she used it. Shiro just solved a legendary quest with a trip to the pantry. Shiro smiled and asked if she would really do that. However, before she could work on it, he told her to sleep for today. He had slept on the ground for so long that his body was aching all over. It didn't take long for Shiro to collapse on the couch. Patty slept as well, making herself comfortable on top of his head. The next morning, Ina reported for work, and she slowly woke Shiro. Shiro was surprised to see her, and he asked why she was there when it was the store's day off. Ina is the CEO of coming into work early just to make sure the boss isn't dead. Suddenly, she presented a little lunchbox for him, telling him that her mother had tasked her to bring it to him. Shiro stretched his body, acknowledging Ina. Just then, Ina peered closer to Shiro's head, asking who the little girl was. Shiro offered to introduce the little fairy, whom he introduced as his boss, Patty. Ina's eyes sparkled with pure awe, wondering if Patty was like the fairies in her picture books. Patty asked Shiro who the kid was, and he briefly explained that she worked at his store. Suddenly, Shiro remembered something that he wanted to tell Ina. It was about the man with blue hair and eyes. Unfortunately, she knew no one who fit the description. This disappointed Patty, but Shiro kept her hopes up, reminding her that there was no way for him and Ina to know the faces of everyone in town. But since the town was small, he was sure they would find him by asking around. This lifted Patty's spirits, and she asked if they would really find him. To get right into it, Shiro suggested searching at that very moment. Ina also volunteered to help, so Patty took her up on it. Overwhelmed with the amount of support she was getting, Patty bolted into the sky, expressing her joy. Before they headed out, Shiro mentioned that they had to find a good way to hide Patty. Ina had the perfect solution for it, and she suggested it to Shiro. Not long after, Patty cruised through the town, perfectly concealed inside Ina's backpack. With that, they started the search for her long-lost friend. Shiro and the girls wandered around town, trying to track down Patty's human friend. One by one, Shiro stopped the people he came across, asking if they had ever seen someone wearing a specific necklace. Despite all his efforts, no one could give him the answer he needed. Even the skewer seller had no clue though. To be fair, the man only seemed interested in selling more skewers to Shiro. The skewer guy said, "ITK, but you hungry though?" Priorities. The woman at the government office didn't remember seeing the necklace either, but she mentioned that if Shiro at least knew the person's name, she might be able to help investigate. One merchant wasn't familiar with the necklace as well, and he had never seen anyone matching the description come to his store. Shiro even approached the crook who sold the face medicine to Ina, but the man brushed him off, clearly not wanting to deal with questions. After many failed attempts, Shiro could only stare at the necklace's picture with disappointment. After countless failed attempts, Shiro could only stare down at the printed picture of the necklace with disappointment. They had already asked 27 people, and yet they still hadn't gotten a single clue. Exhausted, the group decided to rest beneath the shade of a large tree while they tried to think things through. Ina suspected that Patty's friend might not actually live in Nidarich, but Patty insisted that he did because that was what he told her himself. The only lead they had was the necklace that matched Shiro's. Shiro tried to stay positive and happily pointed out that making a print of the necklace with the camera he brought the other day had turned out to be useful after all. Just then, someone suddenly called out to him, causing Patty to quickly hide inside Ina's bag. It was Karen, and she looked visibly worried. She had heard that Shiro went on another trip with Azure Flash, and she told him not to make her worry too much. Shiro immediately felt guilty and apologized. Karen gently told him not to apologize, then patted him on the head, reminding him that what mattered most was that he returned safe and sound. Shiro instantly blushed from the unexpected touch, and Ina innocently pointed it out without hesitation. Panicking, Shiro awkwardly claimed that it was only because the weather was hot. That excuse was cooked from the start. Desperate to change the subject, he quickly showed Karen the necklace and asked if she had ever seen it before. She took a good look at the necklace, then her eyes narrowed. She had seen it before, but she couldn't remember where. Unable to give an answer right away, she reassured Shiro and Ina that she would come find them once she remembered. Shiro asked if she would really do that, and Karen promised him she would. After all, she owed him so much that she could never hope to repay him. While the two talked, Patty quietly peeked out from inside Ina's bag, curiously observing who Karen was. A moment later, Karen excused herself, saying that she had business at the guild. Shiro tilted his head, wondering what kind of business she had with Emil. However, Karen clarified that she wasn't meeting with Emil at all. She paused for a brief moment before revealing, with a dangerous calmness in her voice, that she was going to deal with the people who put her dear friend in danger, Azure Flash. A terrifying aura surrounded Karen as she spoke, making Shiro panic. He desperately tried to stop her before she did something outrageous, hurriedly explaining that everything had been his own fault. Karen simply dismissed his concerns and walked away anyway. He accidentally triggered a side quest war. Shiro became so tense over the situation that he didn't even realize he was tightly gripping Patty inside his palm. When Patty finally managed to break free, she angrily slammed her fists against his head, screaming that it was a meteor attack. Still, Shiro remained far too worried about Lyre and the others, silently hoping they could somehow escape Karen safely. Not long after, Ina shyly mentioned that she wanted to try sleeping together with Patty later that night. Shiro immediately turned toward his boss, asking what she thought about the idea. Patty looked at Ina, then back at Shiro. After a long pause, she finally gave in, saying that there was no helping Ina. She would make an exception, but only for that one night. With that settled, Ina happily headed home with Patty safely hidden inside her bag. Upon arriving, she nervously told her mother that she wanted to show her something and asked her to keep it a secret. Stella looked surprised at first, but she smiled warmly and promised that she would. Excitedly, Ina opened her bag. Stella meanwhile anxiously braced herself, wondering if her daughter had brought home a lizard or a frog. She carefully peeked inside the bag, only for her eyes to widen in shock when she found a tiny fairy staring directly back at her. Ina really brought home a magical being in a bag like it's a goldfish from the fair. Patty curiously looked up and asked if Stella was Ina's mother, pointing out that they had the same face and eye color. Stella could only stutter while forcing a stiff smile, her head practically spinning from disbelief. Seeing her reaction made Ina slightly worried. Later that night, Patty made herself comfortable in Ina's home. She plopped onto the bed, happily saying that it was her first time seeing such a soft bed. Stella, who was carrying a tray of warm tea, happily observed Patty and Ina. Just then, she gave Patty a huge cup of fruit tea, which was given to her by Shiro. She then sat on the bed, asking Patty about the human man she had mentioned at dinner. Ina got curious, and now she wanted to hear about it too. Patty felt a little embarrassed, but she agreed to share it just once. It all started when she first left her village. That night, the forest was cloaked in darkness, illuminated only by the light of the two moons hanging overhead. Suddenly, an arrow flew through the air and struck a nearby tree, narrowly missing a horned rabbit below it. The rabbit casually hopped away unharmed while the hunter responsible for the shot collapsed to his knees in exhaustion. The horned rabbit just hopped away like a skill issue. Honestly, Patty thought he was acting like a kid, so she ended up laughing at him. She was watching him while almost bursting from laughter, but since he was crying so much, she thought about lending him a hand. Using her windcutter attack, Patty struck down the horned rabbit in a single blow. The hunter stared at the fallen creature in complete amazement before slowly turning toward Patty. In wonder, he asked if she was a fairy. On that fateful night, Patty met the mysterious human who eventually became her friend. The hunter tore into the horned rabbit meat while crying and going, "Delicious, delicious." At first, Patty thought there was something wrong with human taste buds, but when she asked, the hunter pondered if it hadn't been about 10 days since he last had a proper meal. The man smiled at her, thanking her for saving him. He asked for her name, but before Patty could reveal it, she suddenly remembered the unpleasant experiences she had with humans. Because of that, she promised to reveal it once the man became a fully fledged hunter. Patty really said, "I'll give you my handle once you hit 10k followers as a hunter." And so from that day onward, the forest became their training ground. It was vast, lively, and constantly shifting with movement. Every day the hunter chased after creatures fast enough to escape him, while the tiny fairy hovered above watching over his progress. In the beginning, his arrows missed almost every moving target. The beasts of the forest slipped through his grasp with ease, vanishing deeper into the woods while Patty laughed at his failures from above. Still, the hunter refused to give up. Days slowly turned into relentless practice, and over time, his aim gradually improved. His arrows began striking their targets more consistently, and little by little, he became a proper hunter. One day, he finally managed to defeat a ferocious wolf on his own. Proud of himself, the hunter turned toward Patty and asked if he had grown stronger. Then, with a grin on his face, he reminded her that it was finally time for her to tell him her name. Patty smirked and admitted that he was right. She finally agreed to reveal it. However, before she could say another word, the voices inside her head suddenly returned. They whispered the same painful thoughts as before, telling her that nobody wanted her. Patty visibly froze. The hunter quickly noticed the strange look on her face and called out to her in concern. Realizing she was acting strange, Patty immediately shrugged it off and jokingly told him that she would just tell him next time instead. The hunter fell silent for a moment, clearly disappointed, but in the end he respected Patty's wishes and didn't press her any further. Patty recalled those moments as she sat on Ina's lap, woefully mentioning that it was the last time she saw him. They were friends, drawn together by both being loners, though she guessed he called them alone together. That was why she had to tell him her name the next time she met him. She had to ask him for his name as well. Just then, Patty noticed that she had been talking for too long, so she apologized to Ina and Stella for boring them with her story. Suddenly, a huge drop of water fell on her head, making her frantic. Anxious about what was happening, she asked if the roof was leaking. When she looked up, she realized that it had been Ina's crying. With tears welling in her eyes, Ina reassured Patty that they would definitely find her friend. Patty, who was far too touched by her kindness, could only mutter her name. 2 hours earlier, Shiro had just gotten back home using the portal. He casually stepped onto his balcony, noting that it had been so long since he had taken a bath at home. It was so great, and now he planned to make it even better by enjoying the sunset in Ninerich. However, before he could bask in relaxation, Lyre suddenly called out to him from below. Shiro immediately went down to meet him, but upon seeing him face to face, he noticed something alarming. His cheek was clearly swollen. Shiro worriedly asked what had happened to him, but Lyre assured him that it was nothing important. It all happened when Karen confronted him about bringing Shiro into the forest. Liar had no intentions of apologizing, but if she felt like it, she could give him a good slap. But Karen wasn't one to take it lightly. What he didn't expect, however, was that Karen's slap would feel powerful enough to knock his soul straight into another dimension. Shiro just wanted a bath, and now he's hearing about his friend's near-death experience by hand-to-face combat. After recalling the traumatic experience, Liar quickly told Shiro not to worry about it anymore. Instead, he invited him to drink at the guild bar that night. He warned him that Emil would also be there, but Shiro thought it sounded good regardless. Later that evening, the guild bar buzzed with laughter and noise as adventurers gathered to unwind after another long day. Around the table, Shiro and the others settled into their seats with drinks already in hand. Together, they raised their mugs and shouted a loud cheer that echoed throughout the lively bar. The girls happily enjoyed their drinks, so Shiro immediately gulped down his own ale to try it himself. Almost instantly, his face stiffened. He's acting like he just drank straight Windex. Liar quickly noticed his uncertain reaction and asked what was wrong. Nay guessed that the ale simply didn't suit Shiro's taste, and Shiro awkwardly admitted that she was right. He apologized for it, but Nay didn't mind. In reality, she didn't find the ale delicious either, after all. Shiro was surprised to hear it, but Nay confirmed it, though she didn't usually say it out loud. There was a limit to what kind of alcohol one could drink in the borderlands. Several adventurers had complained and asked if they couldn't prepare some slightly tastier drinks, but factoring in the import costs was a problem. Kilfa started to daydream about having some wine or cider, and she gushed over the thought of it. She knew it was sour and probably didn't taste good, but it still smelled nice. Neska agreed, noting that she didn't ask for luxuries. The whole guild is basically trauma bonding over how bad their drinks are. Shiro was curious about it, especially how they mentioned it was sour and wasn't that tasty. Liar was quick to notice his reaction, so he asked Shiro if he hadn't tried drinking wine at his age. That or a successful merchant like him only had a taste for the expensive wine that nobles would drink. Everyone stared back at him without saying a word, clearly stunned by what they heard. Shiro continued, sharing with everyone that the wine came in 3 variants: red wine, white wine, and pink rosé wine. Now that he had come to think of it, he had heard that orange wine had become popular recently. Also, there are many different variants of each of those wines. There are all kinds of tastes too, ranging from sweet to bitter, both mild ones easy to drink and ones with deep and complex flavors. There are also all kinds of price levels, from wine so cheap a child could buy it with their allowance to ones more expensive than a whole house. There are people so into wine that they pair every meal with a different wine. Though personally, Shiro admitted that he preferred sake over wine. Shiro really started a TED Talk on wine in a medieval dive bar. He then launched into another explanation, talking about Jinjo sake, Junmai sake, and Honjo sake, completely forgetting where he was as he enthusiastically rambled on. By the time he finally stopped talking, he noticed something terrifying. The entire bar was staring at him. Even the adventurers who had been fistfighting moments earlier had stopped just to listen. Shiro fell silent, but a giant adventurer loomed over him, urging him to continue his story. Feeling anxious, Shiro shared with everyone that his hometown trades a lot, so it was easy to get one's hands on all kinds of alcohol. Everyone stared at Shiro with their eyes glistening, seemingly wanting him to say the one thing they had all been waiting for. Shiro pondered for a moment, knowing that this was quite sudden. Suddenly, saliva dripped from the side of his mouth as he realized that this was an immense business opportunity. If it went well, he would be hitting not 2 but 3 birds with one stone. With newfound determination, Shiro stood up from his seat, immediately drawing everyone's attention. Then with confidence, he told the entire bar to come back in 3 days, because after that he would personally treat everyone to alcohol from his hometown. Shiro's really out here trying to be the Jesus of craft beer. Shiro reached up and adjusted his tie, tightening it neatly against his collar with practiced ease. As he combed his hair back, he confidently said that he was going to be different from his usual self that night. Someone check his search history for how to be an alpha. More specifically, he was in disguise. Aina, dressed in formal attire as Shiro, pointed out that he looked very cool. Shiro chuckled and returned the compliment. Stella agreed with Aina as well, and Shiro told her she looked great too, practically like she was screaming, "I'm ready for work!" "Sir, that's just corporate burnout." For the event, Shiro had built a makeshift counter inside the guild bar, assembled from plywood and stacked wooden boxes. Just then, Liar entered the room, congratulating everyone for the job well done. With a wink, he asked if the lovely ladies helped. Shiro confirmed he was right, though Aina insisted on participating. He was a bit hesitant about it. Knowing that an 8-year-old in a bar was really iffy, Aina refused to yield, so she suggested bringing her mother along. In the end, Shiro said that it was fine as long as Stella agreed. Not long after, Neska and Kilfer reported that they were ready. Neska had chilled the bottled drinks using her ice magic, and Shiro thanked them both sincerely. He had promised them each a bottle of anything they wanted in exchange for their help, and they had gladly accepted. Kilfa chose fruit wine, while Neska went with chocolate liqueur. Just then, Shiro asked Aina if there was anything she wanted, so she pondered for a second, clearly overwhelmed with choices. After a short moment, she decided on having grape juice. A sudden wave of impatience swept through the waiting crowd as some of the patrons called out, asking if the drinks were ready yet. They were practically desperate for the promised alcohol. Suddenly, Shiro announced to everyone that the party in honor of all their hard work was about to begin. Overtaken by utter joy and excitement, everyone cheered in unison. Shiro started with a speech thanking everyone for all their hard work searching the forest every day. He introduced himself as Shiro Amata, the owner of the Shiro store. On that day, he thanked everyone for risking their lives looking for the ruins. So he wanted to offer a selection of the alcohol available at his store as a modest encouragement. One adventurer couldn't believe that the options before them were just selections. He thought Shiro was kidding, as this would make him a real big shot. Shiro continued, announcing to everyone that they had also prepared a variety of snacks that go well with alcohol, which he hoped everyone would enjoy. The people were too amused by everything they were hearing that they started to believe the rumors of Shiro being an alchemist. Suddenly, a buff adventurer screamed that he didn't care anymore. He was just tired of that shitty ale, and he wanted nothing but the tasty booze. To excite the crowd even more, Shiro announced that everything that day was his treat. He encouraged everyone to feel free and drunk, as if they were going to bankrupt him. Careful, Shiro, that crowd looks like they've been drinking battery acid for a month. This hyped up the crowd, making them throw their fists in the air simultaneously. Internally, Shiro felt a spike of anxiety. He had spent around 3 million yen on alcohol, but he trusted the investment would pay off. Before the drinks were served, Shiro invited Nei Mirage for a short speech. Nei thanked everyone and told them to enjoy themselves, but also reminded them not to let drinking interfere with their work the next day. The crowd answered with louder cheers, obviously unable to contain their excitement anymore. The moment Shiro served the first glass, the crowd surged forward in chaos, almost trampling him. In an instant, Nei slammed her foot down, releasing a pressure that froze everyone in place. With a chilling smile, she asked if they wanted her to end the whole thing short. Shiro was filled with relief, and he commended the guildmaster for intervening. Horrified by Nei's threat, everyone got into an organized line. The adventurers really went from rioting to preschool lineup in 3 seconds. Liar was the first in line, and when he was asked what he wanted, he pointed to a nearby bottle. He asked what it was, and Shiro explained to him that it was a drink called beer, which he recommended. Curious, Liar decided to try it out. Aina then shared with Liar that if he added the lime and squeezed its juice into the beer, it would become even more delicious. Liar was intrigued by the concept, so he did just that and tasted the beer. As soon as Liar drank it, the fresh flavor slid down his throat with ease. His eyes glistened with excitement, unable to figure out what was with it. It was bubbly and light, but the fruit juice made it so delicious. He gulped down the entire mug while the rest of the adventurers stared at him with a mix of awe and envy. He slammed the mug on the counter as soon as he was done, claiming that it was so good. He even believed that it could taste even better with a pinch of salt in it. Liar really took a sip of a Corona and thought he found the fountain of youth. The adventurers got so hyped up with his reaction that they wanted the same order for themselves as well. When they finally had their shares, they exclaimed that it was delicious and so good. Stella and Aina could barely keep up, but they did their best to collaborate to get the whole thing going. Aina is literally 8 years old and she's the MVP of the night shift. The orders kept piling up and the adventurers tasted every option there was. As the event grew more and more successful, Shiro was relieved to see that they were taking the new alcohol well. Just then he called the next person in line. It was an old scarred dwarf, demanding the strongest booze that they had. The other adventurers were stunned upon seeing the person before the counter. It was Erdos the Indestructible, one of the 16 heroes. Shiro, unaware of the legend before him, simply introduced a bottle of his strongest booze. He recommended Spiritus, famous for being so strong that it feels like one is on fire. Erdos was confused when Shiro gave him a tiny shot glass, so he asked what the deal was with its size. His nerves popped in pure spite, accusing Shiro of treating him like a kid despite him being the Erdos, a 200-year-old dwarf. Shiro's expression fell flat, but he instantly redeemed himself, explaining that it wasn't his intention. It was just that Spiritus was so strong, even a small amount would have him stumbling on his feet. It was 96% alcohol after all. At that point, you aren't drinking, you're just disinfecting your regrets. Erdos angrily asked if he was trying to humiliate him, as he had never gotten drunk from booze once in his entire life. Shiro asked him to calm down, and he carefully informed him that if he drank too much he would die. Erdos, now more furious than ever, finally understood what this measly boy was trying to tell him. Without warning, he tossed the shot glass away, urging Shiro to go outside and settle the fight he wished for. Shiro was taken aback, wondering what could have made him realize that. Suddenly, someone calmly called out to Erdos. It was Rolf. He smiled and introduced himself as a priest serving the god of the sky, Florine. He went on to introduce himself as Rolf Foss Michel. Erdos scoffed in irritation, baffled to see a priest trying to persuade him. He glared at Shiro, claiming that the boy had hurt the pride of the dwarves. Booze was the very blood of the dwarves, who were raised on a keg of ale instead of a baby bottle. They could never count such a pitiful amount as having a drink. Rolf agreed that he was right to be angry, but he asked Erdos to consider something. Erdos was intrigued, so he allowed Rolf to expound on the offer. Rolf explained that priests could not only heal poisons but also intoxication with the holy spell Cure. So in the unlikely event that Erdos gets so drunk he couldn't stand, he could use cure on him. Rolf asked Shiro and Erdos for their opinion and they both agreed to it. Erdos instantly assumed a square stance, scoffing at the thought of him stumbling on his feet. Wanting to prove everyone wrong, he screamed for them not to make him laugh. The ancient dragon, the demon lord, the thousand-year golem, the no-life king, and more ferocious foes, none of them had ever knocked him off his feet. Spiritus said bet. That was Erdos, and he had exchanged blows with all kinds of monsters. After hearing him enumerate the endless list of monsters he had vanquished, the adventurers stared with awe, knowing they were all the legendary kind. As expected of one of the 16 heroes, he truly had an amazing spirit. Not just that, but his body was amazing too. Bro's built like a tank from World War II. Driven by spite, Erdos demanded Shiro hand over the booze, and should he stumble, then he would fulfill any request Shiro had from him. Anxious, Shiro asked what would happen if he stayed upright. In the instance that he did, then he would drink for free for the rest of time. With that, he told Shiro to fill his cup to the brim. Not having any other choice, Shiro poured Spiritus into his cup. Erdos smirked, saying he would take Shiro up on that bet. Before gulping down the drink, he took a good sniff of it and admitted that it certainly smelled intensely of alcohol. It stung his nose more than any alcohol he had tried so far. Eager to taste it, Erdos poured the drink into his mouth, barely touching the rim of his cup. Everyone stared intensely, waiting to see his reaction. He finished the whole thing in no time, stunning everyone around him. Shiro in particular worriedly asked if he was for real. Erdos let out a loud burp, then he admitted that it warmed his belly somewhat fiercely. He suddenly slammed the cup on the counter, wiping his beard as he asked Shiro if he looked drunk to him. The crowd kept silent while Shiro scratched his head. It appeared to be his loss. Erdos burst into laughter, finally seeing that Shiro got it now. From now on, the boy would let him drink as much as he wanted for free. The legendary dwarf was unable to contain his joy, laughing as loud as he possibly could. Then, out of nowhere, he slipped and crashed onto the floor, unable to move due to drunkenness. Worried, Shiro called out to him in concern. The legendary dwarf fell harder than a crypto coin in a bear market. After Erdos recovered from alcohol poisoning, Shiro reminded him about what he said earlier. He was only supposed to drink a little at once. He would have been a goner if it weren't for Rolf's spell. He didn't know if Erdos was a hero or whatever, but it seemed that his actions disrespected the alcohol. Erdos didn't dare speak, merely uttering a few groans here and there. Shiro's out here lecturing a 200-year-old hero like a disappointed dad after prom night. One of the adventurers stared in disbelief, claiming that he had never seen Erdos look that dejected before. Another muttered that nobody could have expected the legendary hero's first defeat to come from alcohol of all things. They tried remembering the name of the drink that took him down, but none of them could pronounce it properly. One suggested calling it Hero Slayer, and the other immediately agreed it was a great name. It didn't take long for the Hero Slayer to become a phenomenon that swept across the nation. The adventurers calling it Hero Slayer is peak marketing. Later that night, the guild bar was practically overflowing with unconscious adventurers sprawled across the floor, completely defeated by the alcohol. Neska happily admitted that it was her first time tasting alcohol that delicious, while Kilfa excitedly talked about wanting to share some with her mom and dad back home. Meanwhile, Lyre approached Shiro, though he struggled to speak properly because of his non-stop hiccups. Between hiccups, he asked if Shiro was really okay with giving away so much alcohol for free. Shiro confessed that it was terribly expensive, but it was a cheap price to pay to enslave the adventurers. Lyre was impressed, but he had already expected this of a shrewd businessman. Shiro really said, "The first dose is free, now you belong to the Shiro store." Beyond mere money-making, Shiro also believed that his product would serve as stress relief for the adventurers. After all, Aina will help deliver the goods to the store. In awe by his way of thinking, Kilfa suddenly snuck up behind him and slammed a heavy hand against his back, praising him for being such a good guy. Shiro immediately cried out in pain, but Kilfa only laughed, insisting that she hadn't even hit him that hard. Watching the interaction, Lyre smiled knowingly. Deep down, he understood that Shiro had another reason for gathering all the adventurers in one place that night. He then pointed at a nearby box, mentioning that there were fairy wings sticking out of it. Realizing he had been caught, Shiro picked up the box and called out to his boss, asking whether she had spotted her friend. Patty remained hidden inside, sulking quietly because her friend never showed up. Seeing her like that, Shiro began to suspect that Patty's friend might not have been an adventurer after all. Patty suddenly apologized because Shiro had to go so far for someone like her. Shiro felt disheartened for her, but he couldn't find the right words to console her. In the end, the days passed, but they never found Patty's friend. They walked around asking about the necklace countless times, and they even put up posters listing his features. After pouring in all their efforts, Patty started to believe that he had left Ninarich. Shiro explained to her that humans live in many more places than Ninarich, and Aina agreed with him, noting that there were more than 20 places out there. In fact, it was much more than that. Shiro's trying to explain the world, and Aina's coming in with the most iPad kid facts ever. This made matters worse for Patty, as she had no idea how to search all those places. Just then, Karen entered the store, calling out to Shiro. She was carrying a mysterious box in her hand, and she claimed to know the person he was looking for. She tried looking at home after he showed her the necklace a while ago. Suddenly, she opened the box and revealed the necklace that matched Shiro's. Karen revealed that the necklace belonged to her great-great-grandfather, the first mayor of Ninarich. Aina asked what a great-great-grandfather was, so Shiro explained that it was simply a grandfather's grandfather. Karen asked why in the world he was looking for her great-great-grandfather, but before he could answer, Patty cut in saying that she asked them to. Karen couldn't believe it, she was seeing a fairy. She asked Shiro what was going on, so he ended up explaining the whole thing to her. Shortly after, Karen finally understood that her great-great-grandfather knew a fairy, though it still seemed hard to believe. Patty asked where the man was now, but this only confused Karen. Patty clarified that she wanted to know where he was, and she assumed Karen would have known because she was somehow his family. At first, Karen didn't understand what she was saying, but then things finally made sense, and so she asked Patty how long a fairy's lifespan was. Patty explained that fairies live for about 3,000 years, though she herself was only 300 years old. Shiro was stunned, but he kept silent, already knowing what this meant. Karen revealed to Patty that humans don't even live for 100 years, which meant that the man she was looking for was already dead. The truth broke Patty so badly that it made her weak to her knees. Karen clarified it further, saying that the man had been gone for a long time. Patty, where is he? Karen, in a coffin, bestie. It's been 100 years. Patty was still in disbelief. Suddenly, memories of her being shunned away by humans and fairies alike started resurfacing in her mind. She remembered how no one wanted her and how the other fairies wished for the elders to banish her. Patty was overwhelmed by sadness, and she was convinced that nobody cared about her. Even her parents hated her, and they probably didn't care if she died. That was why she broke the rules and left the village on a pitch-dark night with no moon. But then she met her human friend, and it was the first time that anyone looked at her so kindly. It was also the first time that anyone thanked her or even spoke to her with a smile on their lips. For the first time someone played with her, though they had also fought several times as well. But for the first time she knew that someone was out there who would do anything to save her. Back then her friend made matching necklaces with the pretty stones that she gave him. He literally just regifted her own property. He made that very necklace just so they could match. He wanted it to become proof of their friendship, which was a concept very unfamiliar to Patty. The man explained to her that it would make them remember each other even if they were far apart. She could think of it as a magic item. Patty couldn't believe it, as it was the first time that someone gave her a present. The man told her that they were now best friends, but this was unfamiliar to Patty as well, especially when he mentioned best. The man further explained to her that best friends were closer than just friends, which meant they meant a lot to each other. Patty cried back then. She never had a friend before, but then she skipped the friend step and went straight to a best friend. Patty really did a speedrun from stranger to best friend because she didn't know the rules. The man worriedly pointed out that she was crying, so Patty quickly played it cool and denied it. For the first time, she cried tears of joy. Just then, the man mentioned that it was about time for her to tell him her name. Patty decided to reveal it then, but for the first time there was someone she didn't want to lose. And somehow she felt that if she told him her name, she would never see him again. Fearing the thought of it, she insisted on telling each other's names the next time they would meet. She felt like those happy days would come to an end, so she tried to prolong it. The man simply smiled at her, saying that he looked forward to it. Needing a moment to breathe, Patty stepped out onto the balcony of Shiro's house, still struggling to process the reality that her friend was gone. The only place that ever felt like she belonged was next to him, and yet she lost him. Behind her, Shiro and Aina could only softly call her name, still shaken by everything that had happened. Aina gently asked what she planned to do next, wondering if she would return to the fairy village. Patty quietly answered that she had no place to return to anymore. She didn't say it outright at first, but she had already been cast out. After a brief silence, Patty revealed the crest on her stomach, drawing Shiro's attention. He asked what it meant, and she explained that it was believed to be a cursed mark that could summon disasters. It was the reason she had wished she had never been born countless times, the same reason even her parents abandoned her. But somehow they at least still let her stay in the village until recently. But now a huge swarm of flyshell bugs started nesting in the forest, and they outnumbered the fairies by several thousand. Patty, you're not cursed, you're just in a bad neighborhood. And so they started preying on the fairies. Shiro was shocked, realizing just how big of a problem it was. Patty continued, explaining that once flyshell bugs start nesting, their numbers increase dramatically. They're going to devour anything for miles around. As expected, the blame fell on Patty. They thought that if only she weren't there, none of that would have happened. The village really blamed a 4-inch fairy for a bug infestation. They need to touch grass. Shiro erupted in anger, saying that it was just a bad excuse. He believed that Patty had nothing to do with why the bugs nested there. Patty smirked, knowing full well because she had the curse. Her name was given by the chief Patty Falulu, which in the fairy tongue meant the one who tears off fate. But even though he gave her a name filled with the wish for her to win over the curse, he had chosen to exile her and brand her as the cursed one. Patty smiled sarcastically as she thought of how laughable her life had been. But then she met Shiro in the forest. She rescued a drowning idiot human since he thought he would repay her by finding her friend. In the end, Patty became the bigger idiot. Hearing this, Aina was overwhelmed with emotion and burst into tears. Patty quickly rushed to comfort her, telling her not to cry or she might start crying too. True to her words, her own composure cracked and she ended up crying alongside Aina. Shiro could only watch the scene unfold awkwardly, completely unsure of what to do. Just then he stepped forward, asking if he could cut to the chase. He asked Patty if she wanted to rescue the other fairies, and she immediately said yes. Shiro asked if she was sure, reminding her that they had cast her out despite being her kin. Patty's spirits dropped when he mentioned that she owed the chief for naming her after all, and her dad and mom were in the village as well. They might hate her, but they were still her parents, and that was why she wanted to save them. Patty, you can literally buy a baby name book for $10. Don't do this. In that case, Shiro decided to help in saving the fairies. Patty's eyes widened in disbelief, asking if he could really do that. Shiro smiled, reassuring her that he would. In unison, Patty and Aina begged Shiro to save everyone. With that, everything was settled. Shiro immediately got into action and urged the girls to start the mission right away. They headed right into the Adventurers Guild. Once there, whispers spread quickly through the room as adventurers caught wind of Shiro's risky proposal to eliminate the flyshell bug nest. Nay listened carefully to his request, but after a brief pause, she regretfully stated she could not approve it. When Shiro asked why, she bluntly answered that the plan was 200% impossible. Aina and Patty were dismayed, and they called out to Shiro for answers. Nay recalled that he mentioned a flyshell bug nest, and in that case it would be a grand military-scale operation so large they would need at least half of all the members of the guild. Shiro was taken aback, realizing that it was pretty expensive. Nay added that it wasn't all, they would also lose manpower. As he knew, most adventurers in Ninarich were preoccupied searching for ruins. It would be a different matter if the flyshell bug nest was close to Ninarich. They've literally prioritized shiny rocks over a genocide. Shiro acknowledged that she was right. Nay in turn calmly asked him not to think ill of her before turning to leave and go back to work. Suddenly Shiro stopped her, wondering if it could be a deal instead of a request. Nay was curious about it, so Shiro decided to just show her what he meant. Without another word, Shiro raised his hand and summoned a massive portal behind him. Nay's eyes widened, though she seemed to already suspect what she was seeing. Shiro confirmed that it was the spatial storage skill. This was what he was offering. Once Fairy's Blessing discovered the ruins, he would use this skill to support them all. He was sure that would more than make up for the time they would lose hunting the flyshell bugs. He anxiously asked Nay for her thoughts, and she considered the offer and admitted it was undeniably attractive. Shiro allowed himself a brief moment of relief, until Nay raised her own hand. She suddenly opened her palm, manifesting the very same spatial storage skill out of thin air. She also had a magic item enchanted with spatial storage magic. Nay shut him down so hard he's going to need a cure spell for that burn. Shiro was stunned, and even more so when Nay mentioned that she could carry about 3 carriages worth with it. Aina began to tear up, realizing the deal that could save the fairies was slipping away. She hated having to accept it, but Nei ultimately confirmed once more that she still could not approve Shiro's proposal. Before the tension could settle, the guild doors suddenly opened. A voice called out, asking Shiro if he was in trouble. It was none other than Erdos. Erdos looked over at Shiro, asking if the boy had found himself in trouble. Shiro immediately stepped forward, apologizing for making a ruckus before revealing that he would really like the flyshell bug's nest in the eastern forest to be exterminated, restating the exact plea that had just been rejected by the guild. He explained that he would really like the flyshell bug's nest in the eastern forest to be exterminated. For a moment, Erdos did not speak. His wide eyes locked onto Shiro, weighing the request. Then, breaking the agonizing tension, Erdos threw his arm out in a grand gesture, declaring firmly that he would take the request. Shiro, on the other hand, was quite surprised by what Erdos said. Confused, he asked the warrior why he would do such a thing, to which Erdos asked if he had completely forgotten about something. Seeing the blank look on his face, Erdos boldly reminded him that they had made a bet, leaving a faint memory of a chaotic, drunken night flashing through Shiro's mind. Shiro finally remembered, exclaiming in sudden realization while Erdos scoffed, amused that the boy had truly forgotten all about it. Drunk promises always come back like unpaid debt. The conversation then shifted back to the harsh reality of their situation. Shiro pointed out that Nei had just said grand exterminations were completely impossible. Erdos merely twitched in annoyance at the mention of the guild's rules. With a confident grunt, Erdos hefted his massive battle axe over his shoulder, completely unfazed by the restriction, while Shiro watched him in absolute awe. He warned everyone in the room not to lump him in with the young'uns, for he alone was more than enough for a mere flyshell bug's nest. That ego got platinum rank too. Just then, a voice suddenly broke through the conversation. It was Lyre, accompanied by the rest of Azure Flash. Lyre stepped forward with a confident smile, declaring that they would help out as well, which prompted Shiro to call out to him in relief. Kilfa, in her cat form, jumped toward Shiro in excitement, but Nei's voice completely distracted him from catching her. Nei firmly drew her sword, declaring that it was against the guild's rules to accept a quest not mediated by the guild, and strictly stating that she could not overlook this. Erdos quickly stepped forward, bluntly telling her that she had it all wrong, which left Nei completely shocked. Meanwhile, Lyre relaxed with his hands behind his head, smugly agreeing with Erdos. Liar then explained that the old guy Erdos was just paying up for a bet he made, while Kilfa teased that he had collapsed like a house of cards. This prompted an irritated Erdos to angrily yell for him to cut that out. Liar leaned in close to Nay, adding that they were just helping out their pal, and that it wasn't like they were getting a reward or anything. Nesca raised her finger with a swift motion, pointing out that it doesn't qualify as a request if there's no reward. Kilfa then leaned in with a bright, cheerful smile, adding that of course they would help out if their friend was in trouble. Hearing all of this support, Shiro looked on with tears welling up in his eyes, quietly uttering a heartfelt, "Everyone." Shiro then thanked them while his companion suggested that they should all drink to celebrate once it was over. Suddenly, a large, muscular adventurer reacted in total shock, loudly asking if they were perhaps talking about that delicious alcohol. Another adventurer could only look on in silent disbelief while Shiro smirked subtly, whispering a little secret. Shiro smiled as he let slip that among the alcohol he would prepare for the celebration, there might just be some fairy mead included, casually mentioning that he just so happened to have some. The revelation instantly struck two nearby adventurers with absolute shock, leaving them wide-eyed and completely stunned. The large, muscular adventurer practically lost his mind, stammering in disbelief to ask if it was for real and if Shiro really got fairy mead, the absolute legendary drink. Another adventurer immediately pumped his fist, shouting that they should help out with the flyshell bugs and get some, while others chimed in right away, declaring they would join in too. Even a masked adventurer and a beastman could only sigh in resignation, muttering that they guessed they would help as well. Fairy mead got these dudes tweaking. Seeing the entire room rally behind the reward, Nay panicked, yelling out that they couldn't do this, and firmly ordering the guild members to look for the ruins instead. Nay fiercely pointed a finger forward, shouting that there was also no proof the fairy mead Shiro had was the real thing. Shiro could only look on in absolute shock, while Patty, who was inside Aina's bag, firmly yelled that it was real. Suddenly, Patty flew out of the bag with an aggressive whoosh, completely stunning the adventurers on the guild floor as they watched in total confusion. In pure annoyance, she firmly declared that she made Shiro's mead herself, making it real. This is the strongest product endorsement. Shiro, on the other hand, could only look up at the ceiling in complete despair, wondering why his boss had just shown herself. Nay looked on in total bewilderment, unable to believe that she was seeing an actual fairy. Wanting an explanation, she looked over at Shiro, demanding to know what the meaning of this was. Shiro could only close his eyes and let out a heavy, defeated sigh. He then looked toward the crowd, explaining that this fairy was his boss Patty, and that she was actually the one who wanted the flyshell bug's nest gone. He continued, stating that she wanted to save her companions, and emphasizing that it was her only desire. As the other adventurers listened intently, Shiro clenched his fist tightly, admitting that he was just a merchant and couldn't deal with monsters or whatever. With a final plea, he looked directly at Nay, stating that was why. Bro said, "I'm built different, just not for combat." Shiro bowed his head deeply, offering a desperate plea for them to do it to save the fairies. Patty, floating nearby, could only watch with tears streaming down her face, quietly stammering Shiro's name in emotional shock. Aina then stepped forward alongside Shiro, bowing her head as she begged them to save Patty's family. Watching the display, Patty panicked in the background, adding that if they dealt with the flyshell bugs, she would make some mead for each and every one of them. As the desperate pleas grew louder, Patty bowed completely to the floor, begging Nay. Meanwhile, Nay looked down at her with a tense, conflicted expression as the little fairy pleaded for her family to be saved. Just then, she let out a heavy sigh, raising a hand to her head as she muttered how cruel it was of Shiro, complaining that he was making her look like the villain. Finally, breaking under the immense pressure, Nay threw her arm out wide to command the entire room. With her authority as the guildmaster, she loudly ordered every bronze rank adventurer and above to suit up and set out immediately. Guildmaster got emotionally jumped. The sun cast its warm rays over the dense canopy of the woods as the declaration echoed that their mission was the subjugation of flyshell bugs. A large, diverse army of guild members moved in unison, working together as they pushed deep inside the eastern forest, also known as Jigana Forest. As the grueling march finally brought them to their destination, Shiro let out heavy, exhausted breaths, asking if they were finally there. Suddenly, Patty threw her arms out wide, loudly pointing at an ancient stone structure containing the flyshell bug nest. She then explained that because of that nest, the fairies couldn't leave their homes. Meanwhile, some small fairies hiding near the rocks whimpered quietly that they were so hungry. Gazing upon the hidden structure, Shiro cautiously looked toward Lyre, wondering if that could maybe be the site they were searching for. Just then, Shiro dropped the maybe, realizing that he was right after all. This was exactly what the guild was looking for. The ruins from an ancient magic civilization. Stunned by the possibilities, Lyre looked over at Shiro, noticing that they had the same thought. Patty chimed in, explaining that their village chief had told her that it used to be a cave, but that long ago a species they didn't know made that edifice. Nay suddenly broke a sweat, pointing out that it was a wondrous surprise that all the stars aligned. Shortly after, Nay gathered the adventurers around a map to lay out the strategy, announcing their plan. She explained that in order to minimize casualties, they would split into 3 groups. The 6 mithril ranks would launch a surprise attack on her signal, while the 17 gold ranks would stand by the exit and take care of any flyshell bugs coming out. Meanwhile, the remaining 53 adventurers ranked silver or below would hunt down any that made it through. She called it the flyshell bug destruction plan, where they wouldn't dare miss a single one. As Nay smoothly continued the briefing, she mentioned the 1 platinum rank Erdos, who would stay in reserve in case of emergency. However, before she could even finish her sentence, Shiro notified her that Erdos was already charging in alone. This man is pure impulse. Nay was left in utter shock, knowing that she couldn't stop the stubborn dwarf. Seeing Erdos charge forward, the other adventurers pumped their fists, shouting that they couldn't fall behind, while Nay could only call out for them to wait. She let out a heavy sigh, wondering why she had so many hot-blooded idiots in her guild. With the formation instantly breaking, Lyre took charge of a new plan, ordering Azure Flash to stay behind and defend Shiro and the rest. Rolf nodded, reassuring Lyre that he could leave it to them. Meanwhile, Nay shouted that she had a new plan, to follow Erdos and destroy all the nesting flyshell bugs. Erdos charged blindly into the ruins with a thunderous scream, throwing himself straight at the flyshell bugs. All around him, blades clashed and magic surged as the rest of the guild engaged the creatures with intense ferocity. Outside, Shiro looked down at his watch anxiously, sweating as he muttered that it had been 2 hours. He nervously wondered if everyone was okay inside the ruins. Just then, Nay jogged out of the forest toward them, which somehow relieved Shiro. Shiro immediately ran forward to meet her, worriedly asking how it went and if the battle was over. Before she could answer, a loud, booming laugh echoed from the top of a nearby cliff, where a familiar figure stood proudly. Erdos roared with absolute confidence, shouting out to ask just who they thought he was. He slung his massive axe over his shoulder, proudly bragging that the battle barely served as a morning workout. Man clocked in and ended the ecosystem. Nay smiled gently alongside the warrior, explaining that Erdos practically took them all out alone, while Erdos smugly added that he personally confirmed there wasn't a single one left. Stunned by his raw power, Shiro marveled at how amazing it was, considering there were thousands of them. Lyre, on the other hand, awkwardly smiled and agreed that Erdos was truly unbelievable. Just then, Shiro curiously asked if the flyshell bugs had a queen or something, wondering if there was a final boss to the swarm. Erdos was surprised to hear that the creatures even had a queen, but he was sure that he had killed it if there was. He then shrugged the thought aside, mentioning that he was hungry and was wondering if they had any meat or booze. Meanwhile, Shiro looked over at Patty, asking her if the situation was great for her, to which she hesitantly agreed. Shiro suggested telling the fairies in the cave about it, as they had already taken out all the flyshell bugs. However, Patty remained hesitant, seemingly bothered by something she had kept from Shiro. Suddenly, she felt a ringing pain in her ear, hearing a telepathic cry of someone pleading to be saved. She anxiously asked Shiro if he heard it, but it was obvious that he didn't. Patty fell silent for a moment, torn about what to do. Then, without warning, she bolted into the air with an alarmed gasp, shouting that she would be right back. That fairy got the emergency Discord ping. Stunned by her sudden departure, Shiro immediately ran after her, calling out a hasty apology to Lyre and telling him they would be right back. Lyre could only watch in absolute shock, sweating as he yelled out his name in frustration. Meanwhile, in another part of the woods, a small fairy frantically fled for her life, panting with a tired huff as she desperately tried to escape. She looked back in absolute terror as a massive, monstrous flyshell bug lunged out from the shadows directly behind her. Crashing down with a violent thud, the creature snapped its razor-sharp jaws wide open, threatening to swallow her whole. Trapped in its terrifying grip, the poor fairy screamed out in pure agony, crying as she desperately begged for somebody to help her. Patty suddenly appeared, screaming for the monster to stop. She threw her hands forward to cast a spell, shouting for the creature to take her wind-cut attack. However, she suddenly gasped in sheer panic as she realized that she couldn't fire because the attack would hit the captured fairy too. With her magic useless, Patty bravely rushed directly at the massive flyshell bug, landing right on its back with a heavy smack, angrily ordering it to let the little fairy go. However, the giant insect violently swatted Patty away with a massive slam, sending her flying through the air. She really thought she was built for that. Meanwhile, Shiro ran desperately through the clearing, screaming out for his boss. Just in the nick of time, Kilfa came dashing out of the brush with a strong leap, confidently declaring that she knew the weak spot. She jumped directly onto the flying monster's back, slicing into it with a quick slash, while Neska stood ready on the ground below, her magic circle shining brightly as she prepared to finish it off. She then unleashed a powerful spell through her glowing magic circle, aiming directly at the monster. The frozen projectiles completely shattered the massive flyshell bug in midair, finally releasing the abducted fairy. As she unconsciously fell from the skies, Patty immediately swooped down to catch her, asking if she was okay. The fairy was too dazed to reply, and she was only able to release a small groan. Running out into the clearing, Shiro called out a cheerful thank you to Kilfa and Nesca. However, the relief was short-lived as more massive bugs suddenly swarmed the clearing. While fighting off the massive creatures, Lyre called out to Shiro and Patty asking if they were okay. Seeing the threat they were dealing with, Shiro called out to Lyre in concern. Lyre swung his sword wildly at the new wave of giant pests, admitting that the situation was bad because there were still tons of flyshell bugs swarming out of the nest. Shocked by the sudden news, Shiro could only let out a panicked, "What?" Down on the ground, the remaining guild members scrambled into defensive positions, ready to take on the flyshell bugs. Nay looked around in absolute shock, demanding to know what was going on since they should have taken out all the flyshell bugs in the nest already. Meanwhile, an exhausted adventurer frantically called out to Nay, informing her that the nest had an escape route deep inside, but they didn't notice it earlier because the bodies were blocking it. This whole raid had zero map awareness. Overwhelmed by the situation, Nay grit her teeth in frustration, muttering what a blunder it was and that she wasn't qualified to lead the guild. Meanwhile, Patty broke a sweat, noting that at this rate they would make it to the cave where everyone lived. Refusing to let that happen, Shiro called out to Patty, asking her if she could use that skill. Just then, Lyre anxiously cursed as he sliced through the flyshell bugs, complaining that there was no end to them. Standing in the background, Shiro suddenly held up a can of gas and a lighter, prompting a sweating Lyre to look back in total shock and wonder what on earth he was doing. Shiro held his makeshift weapon steady, telling Patty to ready up and match his timing. Patty quickly positioned herself behind the can of gas, telling Shiro that she understood clearly. Combining their powers, they paired her windcutter magic with his makeshift flamethrower, unleashing a combined attack named Makeshift Flame Tornado. The devastating wave of fire completely tore across the landscape, engulfing the remaining swarms of flyshell bugs in roaring flames. The blazing vortex tore upward with a powerful strike, sending the fried bugs scattering as they shrieked in agonizing pain. Shiro broke a sweat in disbelief, nervously noting that it was working great, though it was way more powerful than he originally anticipated. This man is one Red Bull away from making napalm. He added a quiet sigh of relief, thinking to himself how glad he was that they aimed it at the sky. Down below, Lyre chuckled nervously at the display, wondering if Shiro had been a great mage all along. However, before he could finish his sentence, Nesca frantically pointed up into the brush, yelling for Lyre to look. Lyre broke a sweat, stuttering in disbelief that what he was seeing couldn't be serious. Nesca's face went entirely pale as she stammered out that it must be the Flyshell Queen, while Kilfa sweated in sheer disbelief, wondering if the creature was too huge. Realizing they were in deep trouble, Shiro frantically called out to Patty, asking if she could use the skill again. Determined, Patty thrust her hand forward, reassuring him that she could hold on for one more shot. Meanwhile, Rolf screamed that the queen was attacking, proving just how dire the situation was. The massive Flyshell Queen lunged downward with an overwhelming sense of dread, its colossal jaws split wide open and ready to crush everything in its path. Shiro broke a sweat in absolute panic, cursing as the beast dashed forward. Floating just behind him, Patty looked on with a completely stunned expression, seemingly frozen like Shiro. Suddenly, a booming voice echoed over the battlefield, declaring, "True justice!" Erdos walked into the scene, channeling an immense surge of electrical energy. With a roaring battle cry, he unleashed the devastating spell, shouting, "Thunderbolt!" A massive blinding torrent of lightning rained down from above, striking the Flyshell Queen dead on and sending violent electrical currents tearing through its giant body. The massive Flyshell Queen let out a weak grunt before crashing heavily into the forest floor. It disintegrated into smoke and shattered fragments, completely defeated. Meanwhile, Erdos landed nearby with a heavy thud, apologizing to Shiro for making him wait. He waited for the queen just for aura farming. Still stunned from the narrow escape, Shiro stammered out his immense gratitude to Erdos. But the warrior argued that it was nothing to thank him for because he merely repaid his debt. Just then, Erdos hoisted his weapon up on his arm, grinning as he explained that it had been a while since he got to go all out with the magic war axe, Seagull, which he got from the Immortal Witch. That's the most Uncle Core weapon name I've ever heard. Shiro scratched his chin in deep thought, seemingly curious about the Immortal Witch that Erdos had mentioned. Just then, he turned to the warrior, asking if the axe had anything to do with true justice. Erdos confirmed it, explaining that Seagull could use true justice magic twice a day. Realizing the truth, Shiro looked upward with a sweat drop, thinking to himself that he knew it. He recalled that apart from Mel Gibson, his grandma was also a huge fan of Steven Seagal, picturing an action hero matching the description in his mind. Erdos then leaned in with a sharp stare, intensely asking how Shiro knew about it. Shiro nervously smiled, attempting to reveal the truth to the mighty warrior. However, before he could even say anything else, Erdos pointed out that he was the grandchild of Heiress Igawamio, and now that he knew about it, the resemblance became more obvious. Meanwhile, Patty watched the conversation from the side when someone suddenly called out her name, asking her what was going on. When Patty turned to see who it was, she realized that it was a familiar face. It was the fairy chief. Just then, a joyful crowd of tiny fairies fluttered about with bright smiles, filling the forest clearing with cheerful chattering. Lyre stared in total astonishment, unable to believe that there were so many fairies. Kilfa gleefully chimed in with a wide grin, gushing that they were so small and cute, while Nesca admired the scene, noting what an amazing sight it truly was. This looks like Tinkerbell's gated community. Just then, the village chief called out to Patty, instantly making the atmosphere tense. The elf chief stared down with a menacing glare, asking why she had returned after her banishment, and why the humans were hunting the flyshell bugs. Patty trembled under his intense gaze, stammering out a defensive reply. Just then, she tightly shut her eyes, nervously shouting that it was just a coincidence. She was banished from the village, so she didn't need to tell him anything. Breaking the standoff, the chief calmly called out her name. Just then, Shiro bravely stepped forward to bridge the gap, introducing himself and sharing that his life was saved by Patty. He then firmly explained their presence to the elf leader, stating that they came to eradicate the flyshell bugs and save the village at the request of his life savior. The chief finally understood the whole situation, muttering in deep irony that they were saved by Patty, the cursed one. Stunned by his choice of words, Nesca repeated the word in total confusion. Patty quickly stepped in to clarify, pointing out that the chief was talking about the unique geometric mark on her stomach. It was known among fairies as the sign that invites disaster. Imagine getting cancelled for your birthmark. Nesca took a good look at the symbol, recognizing it as a sign known in the Mages Guild as the crest. It only appears on those born with great amounts of mana, a sign of the chosen one. Though it was also true that the powerful mana was often too much to control, and it ran wild. That was why it was also said that those marked by it would have a life of misfortune. However, that was only a long time ago. One can learn to control it if they thoroughly study magic from the basics, and those who learn to control that incredible mana become great wizards known as sorcerers. Nesca continued her explanation while the tiny fairies fluttered around in the background, pointing out that it seemed some races in remote parts still misunderstood and discriminated against the mark. She firmly asserted that the crest was not something to be shunned, but rather, it was more like a gift of good and proof of one's excellence. She fact-checked the entire village. Hearing this, the chief broke into a nervous sweat, his eyes wide in sheer disbelief as he stammered that there was no way. He couldn't believe that their legends were mistaken. Turning her attention directly to the young fairy, Nesca kindly offered her support, stating that she learned everything from the basics up at the Institution of Magical Arts and could teach Patty everything if she wanted. Patty looked back at her with wide, stunned eyes, completely touched by the gesture. Nesca encouraged the young fairy, noting that if a crest holder like her learned to command mana at will, she would surely be of great help to the fairies. Overwhelmed by the sudden revelation, the chief looked down in deep regret, apologizing for all the hardship she had suffered. He revealed a deeper bond, stating that he wanted to apologize not just as the chief, but as her grandfather. Imagine finding out your op is your grandpa. Patty gasped in absolute shock, her eyes wide in disbelief. Dropping to his knees, the elderly elf bowed his head completely to the ground, expressing how sorry he was. Patty rushed forward in a panic, crying out for his grandpa to stop it. She then knelt down right in front of him, gently taking his hands into her own. She reassured him that if she had never been banished, she would never have met Shiro, and she wouldn't have been able to save the village. That was why it was a good thing and the right choice. That's elite-level emotional gymnastics. Patty looked at the gathered crowd of elves and fairies who were watching her with expressions of deep remorse and sadness. Tears streamed down her face, but she forced a tearful smile, addressing her gramps and everyone around her. She reassured them that none of them had made a mistake or anything. Later that day, Patty and the adventurers returned to the guild, where Shiro asked Patty if she was truly going home. With a bittersweet smile, Patty said yes, recalling that her grandfather had begged her, as the chief of fairies, to come back to the village. Ina burst into tears, crying out that she wanted to stay with Patty. "Bro, she's not dead, she's moving." Patty watched her with a softened expression before turning back toward Shiro, teasingly pointing out that if she stayed with humans who just die right away, she would only end up all alone again. Patty also reminded them that she only really came to town to find that guy. Shiro nodded in agreement while Patty thanked him for the hospitality. Just then, Karen came running toward Shiro, telling him to wait. She held out a sealed envelope, explaining that she had found it while going through her ancestors' stuff. It seemed to be addressed to a friend of her great-great-grandfather's, which meant that it had a good chance of being for Patty. This package had generational lag. Shiro muttered Patty's name in disbelief while she merely stood there all frozen. Patty stared down at the sealed paper, her eyes hidden in shadow as she softly asked Shiro to open it. In the letter, Patty's friend wrote that it had been a long time since they last saw each other. It had been so very long since the day he promised they would meet again, and countless seasons had passed. The thin and weak arms she had mocked him for so often had grown even thinner and weaker now, making him wonder if she would tease him yet again if she saw him in that state. Even walking had grown difficult for him, but he really wanted to run around the forest with her again, just like back then. A wave of intense emotion washed over Patty as she read the contents of the letter. Tears welled up and streamed down her face, her eyes wide with heartbreak and sorrow as she clutched the parchment tightly in her hand. Yet she continued reading the letter, where her friend talked about something he had heard from an elven acquaintance of his, that fairies actually lived much longer lives than humans. As the letter went on, Patty's friend revealed that he actually got her to tell him her name, the one who tears off fate, Patty Falulu. He praised her wonderful name, which he had said many times while writing the letter. He had never told her his name, so he went on to introduce himself in the letter. His name was Aaron Sankareka. Aaron thanked Patty for meeting him, and he sent her his best regards. Patty could only break out in tears imagining the reunion that he never had with him. This went from goofy fairy arc to depression. Patty stared at the paper as the final words of the letter came to a close. Best regards, your friend, Aaron Sankareka. Karen lowered the parchment, her voice gentle as she pointed out that it was all the letter said. After hearing what her great-great-grandfather had to say, it seemed that Patty had helped him out a lot. Patty looked down with a soft, tearful smile, slowly processing everything she had learned about her late human friend Aaron. Thinking about it now, she was quite amused that Aaron knew her name all along, proving just how amazing he actually was. Memories of their time together flashed through her mind once more, making the moment more bittersweet. Looking back on the bond they shared, she smiled gently and knew in her heart that she was that guy's one and only friend, and Aaron was Aaron's one and only friend. Just then, Patty realized that Aaron eventually went on to find someone he fell in love with, adding that his many kids and grandkids must have been constantly flocking around him as well. Shiro offered a warm, understanding smile, softly agreeing with a quiet, yeah. Overwhelmed by the realization of the full life her friend had lived, Patty began tearing up, relieved that Aaron was happy. Knowing that her friend lived well, she was genuinely happy for him as well. Seeing her vulnerability, Shiro gently told her that while the lives of humans may be short, time ultimately means nothing between true friends and how they feel about them. Talk no jutsu never misses. The comforting reassurance continued as Shiro told her that Aaron would continue living on in her heart for as long as she lived. Patty let out a shaky sob, rubbing her watery eyes as she agreed with him. Meanwhile, Karen watched her with deep empathy, completely moved by her raw emotion. Breaking the heavy atmosphere, Shiro asked Patty a little favor, wishing for her to keep Aina and him in her thoughts as well. Just then, he began rummaging around in his pocket, telling her to take a look at what he had. He proudly presented a photograph capturing a bright, joyful moment between him, Aina, and Patty. Shiro smiled down at the photo, confidently stating that anyone seeing it would think they were not merely friends, but best friends. Shiro came prepared for the feels. Patty stared at the image in a stunned daze, slowly processing the profound gesture. Meanwhile, Aina broke out into a tearful smile, agreeing that Patty was her best friend. The heartfelt support expanded to the rest of the guild as the others stepped forward to offer their own comfort. Lyre playfully flashed a wink, agreeing that Aina was 100% right. Kilfa chimed in, adding that they were overjoyed to have her around, much more that she was a fairy. Stepping closer to Patty, Neska gently shared that she understood how Patty felt, explaining that she also had elf blood in her veins and would live way longer than humans. But even then, she was not afraid of loving Lyre because she carved every precious second they spent together deep into her heart. Lyre was touched by what Neska said, but he could only mutter her name. Girl really snuck in a love confession mid-therapy session. Neska stood firmly by her choice, stating that it was just the decision she made. Just then, she turned to Patty, asking her for her thoughts. Patty, with tears still streaming down her face, revealed that she wasn't nervous or anything. She declared that she wouldn't go back to the village yet, loudly pointing out that her grandfather never actually specified when she had to return. Patty said technically he didn't give a deadline. She then listed her excuses, smiling brightly as she noted that Neska had promised to teach her how to control her mana, and she simply couldn't leave a crybaby like Aina alone. Patty confidently told everyone that time passes differently for them after all. Then she smugly added that she would first go back after she had finished making Shiro's tombstone. Shiro's sweat dropped with an awkward smile, chuckling as he told her not to kill him off like that. Damn, she planned his funeral already. Ecstatic to hear that her friend was staying, Aina lunged forward with open arms, hugging Patty while screaming out her name. Caught off guard by the sudden gesture, Patty told her not to hug her so suddenly. And so, the curtain closed on Patty's adventure. Before they knew it, 2 months had passed, and the day of the Harvest Festival had finally arrived. Since Shiro promised Karen to help make the Harvest Festival a big hit, he made Ina a photographer with the camera. Meanwhile, he accompanied Karen at an auction. Standing before a massive cheering crowd, Shiro enthusiastically announced that the auction was officially open. He served as the energetic auctioneer, dynamically presenting a bottle of Spiritus, a legendary booze known as the Hero Killer, that famously took down a well-known hero crowned as the strongest. He turned alcohol into NFT rarity. The crowd erupted in excitement as a gentleman with a mustache successfully placed the winning bid, with the announcer shouting that it was just bought for only 44 silver. Shiro hyped up the crowd by announcing the final product of the day. He held up a large gourd and dynamically declared that fairy mead was officially up for auction, describing it as a mythical drink that only those who received a fairy's blessing could drink. The crowd erupted into amazed cheers as Shiro introduced the producer, a true artisan, and the recently appointed ambassador of tourism in Ninorich, Patty Falulu. Wearing a small sign that read, "Ambassador of Tourism," a deeply embarrassed and stiff Patty floated forward, nervously stammering that it was nice to meet everyone. She became the mascot against her will. Shiro, on the other hand, told the crowd to give her a hearty applause, causing everyone to erupt in pure cheer. The bidding frenzy commenced as the highly appraised delicacy started at an initial price of 1 gold. The crowd instantly went wild with bids, rapidly escalating from 3 gold to 6 to 9 and suddenly skyrocketing up to 12 gold. Later on, the group relaxed on a park bench to count their earnings, with Shiro leaning back contentedly and noting that they sure made a huge haul. Karen covered her face in a mix of amusement and embarrassment, admitting that even she couldn't keep a straight face with that crazy amount of money, which had reached a whopping 50 gold. Patty peeked over the back of the bench as Shiro chuckled at Karen's funny reaction, playfully teasing her while pointing out that it was a good thing Ninorich made bank. Karen then looked out toward the peaceful horizon, agreeing with him and crediting him for the successful event. She thanked Shiro, but he argued that he only set up a few things. Furthermore, it was Patty who made the fairy mead. Suddenly remembering something, Patty perked up and flew down between them, announcing that she had something she had been wanting to ask them. The peaceful atmosphere quickly evaporated as Patty leaned back, curiously asking if they weren't going to have kids soon. Shiro's jaw dropped in absolute shock, his eyes wide as he asked what she was saying. Karen's face instantly flushed bright red, a heavy sweat drop forming on her forehead as she frantically told Patty that she and Shiro were not in that kind of relationship. Completely unfazed by their panic, Patty innocently continued her thought, explaining that Stella had told her that humans get reborn or something like that. If Karen had kids, they might be Aaron's rebirth. Patty woke up and chose breeding propaganda. Shiro and Karen scrambled to explain biology to the clueless fairy. Shiro blurted out that having children isn't that simple, explaining that humans have to go through a certain ritual multiple times beforehand. Karen frantically chimed in, waving her hands as she added that children are born as a result of many trials between a man and a woman who love each other very much. This sex ed class is failing. Completely losing her patience with their stuttering excuses, Patty flared her wings and screamed for them to shut up. Stomping her foot, she bossily commanded them to just shut up and make some kids for her on boss's orders. Shiro could only sweat drop in disbelief, muttering that it was an unreasonable case of power harassment. Breaking up the chaotic argument, Ina and Stella came running over, with Ina waving her arms and calling out to Shiro, asking if the auction was over. Shiro confirmed that they were indeed done, asking Ina if her job as a photographer went well. Ina happily confirmed it and added that they had a lot of customers. Later that night, Shiro suggested taking a group photo with everyone together, an idea that Ina happily supported. That night, there were no lights but lanterns. The dark town was illuminated by a gentle shine, which was the place that Aaron made, the small town named Ninorich. Bringing the celebration to a perfect close, Shiro held the camera up to his eye, telling everyone that he was now about to take the picture. He busily adjusted his shot, calling out to Karen to scooch a little to the right. Next, he called out to Patty, gently reminding her to pose normally. However, right as he was focusing the lens, a shadowy figure stepped up nearby, softly calling out to Shiro and asking if it was him. Shiro froze, his eyes widening as he lowered the camera in surprise. Looking toward the mysterious woman, he asked who she was. The stranger, her face still obscured by shadows, chuckled over the fact that he didn't recognize her. Shiro awkwardly rubbed the back of his neck, trying to place her face while admitting that he couldn't really remember. Wanting to have the answers, he curiously asked if they had met somewhere before. Just then, the woman fully stepped into the warm glow of the festival's floating lanterns. Revealing a youthful yet elegant appearance, she smiled confidently up at Shiro and revealed that she was his grandma. Nah, this is the most anime grandma reveal ever. A while ago, Shiro discovered that his grandma was not only alive, but would definitely show up at the Harvest Festival. Even after he started his merchant life, Reuniting with her had been his dearest wish. It had been 2 months since he was told about it. And so, as he waited for the festival, he was attacked by flyshell bugs on a quest with Azure Flash. And by chance, he met the fairy, Patty Falulu. That meeting became incredibly important to him. So much happened, and soon enough, the Harvest Festival came before he knew it. And right when he was enjoying the eve of the Harvest Festival with everyone, she appeared, his grandma. Stunned by the revelation, Shiro expressed confusion, asking the woman before him what she just said. The woman smiled, repeatedly saying that she was his grandma. Aina stepped in, curiously asking who the woman was. Before Shiro could answer, the woman replied that she was Shiro's grandma. Aina could only stare blankly, murmuring that she looked far too young to be a grandmother. The woman then leaned right up against a completely frozen, wide-eyed Shiro, winking and sticking her tongue out as she proudly flashed a double peace sign. She challenged Aina to look closer, asking if she could see the family resemblance. Recognition of that exact double peace sign pose sent a jolt of panic through Shiro. Unable to believe what he was seeing, Shiro aggressively pushed back and yelled that she definitely was not his grandmother. Bro saw the pose and got PTSD flashbacks. Shiro frantically insisted that his grandma was supposed to be over 80 years old. A bona fide babasama, not a young and high-class girl like the woman before him. There was absolutely no way. The chaotic scene was interrupted when Karen gasped in recognition, respectfully calling out the name Arisu-sama. Arisu turned away from Shiro to greet her, asking the mayor if she had been doing well. Clasping her hands together politely, Karen enthusiastically responded that the Harvest Festival had been a huge success that year. She added that it was all thanks to having Shiro there to help her. Hearing this, Arisu glanced back under the festive lights, and a knowing, slightly mischievous smile crossed her face as she mused that her Shiro had helped her out. She then looked at Shiro and noted that he had grown into a fine man, adding that seeing him now made it entirely worth bringing him to all those festivals ever since he was little. Shiro hesitantly stammered, asking if she was really his grandma, to which Arisu calmly reiterated that she was. Still deeply skeptical, Shiro decided to test her identity with a highly specific question. He narrowed his eyes, pointed a finger, and demanded to know what her favorite movie was. Without a single moment of hesitation, she looked directly back at him and answered, "Lethal Weapon." Shiro pressed further, demanding to know her second favorite movie. Arisu pondered for a moment, noting that she wanted to say Braveheart, but decided to go with Mad Max instead. Sweat dropping at the incredibly accurate answers, Shiro nervously asked who her favorite actor was. She smiled and stated that it was Mel Sama, of course, referring to Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson got dragged into family verification. Shiro stood entirely speechless, his face blank with shock as the sheer accuracy of her answers settled in. Arisu sighed gently, closing her eyes as she lamented how wary of a person he had become, which made her feel incredibly sad. To completely shatter any remaining doubt, she brought up an embarrassing childhood memory. She asked him if he remembered when he was 7 years old, recalling a specific time on the way home from the movies when he wet himself, forcing her to change his clothes. Shiro's face flushed with pure panic as he screamed for her to stop bringing up such mortifying details. Shiro just got hit with archived memories. There were more important things to talk about, like how she had been alive all this time. He stood with his hands curled tightly, demanding to know why she had just disappeared without telling him anything. Arisu offered a gentle, bittersweet smile, softly apologizing and asking him not to look so sad. Just then, Patty chimed in, asking who the human woman was because she could feel an incredible amount of mana from her. Karen turned to her with a smug look, offering to introduce the little fairy to Arisu. She then declared to Patty and the gathering crowd that Arisu was a living legend, the immortal witch, Arisu Gawamio. The dramatic proclamation instantly sent shockwaves through the immediate area. Nearby festival goers immediately froze, their eyes widening in disbelief as one man gasped aloud, frantically asking if someone had just mentioned the immortal witch. The news spread like wildfire through the festival grounds. One bystander couldn't believe that Arisu would appear there as well, while another man pushed his way aggressively past other attendees, shouting that he wanted to greet the Great Witch as the official representative of the Baildor's family. One announcement and the whole server crashed. Realizing that her public announcement had caused an absolute uproar, Arisu sarcastically pointed out that Karen seemed to have raised her voice a little too much. Karen broke into a nervous sweat, frantically bowing her head and apologizing to Arisu. Arisu, however, remained completely unbothered by the sudden influx of attention, calmly turning her head to reassure the anxious mayor that she was entirely used to it. Yet, as the crowd grew increasingly frantic around them, Arisu looked down and remarked that it seemed she wouldn't be able to peacefully enjoy the rest of the festival anymore. Suddenly, a brilliant, intricate magic circle materialized and began glowing beneath her feet. From it, she drew a massive, glowing sword, stunning the entire crowd. One onlooker pointed a trembling finger in disbelief, recognizing the legendary weapon as the Magic Star Sword. Mel Gibson. Meanwhile, Arisu held the blade steady and coldly stated that she was not there to deal with them. This was supposed to be a quiet reunion with her cute grandson. Swirling her massive weapon through the air, Arisu unleashed a powerful spell that completely enveloped the festival grounds. Mystical, glowing butterflies began to flutter through the air as a massive magical circle spun behind her silhouette. The surrounding townspeople could only watch in stunned silence as the sleep-inducing magic took effect, leaving them dazed and frozen in place. Meanwhile, Arisu offered a final parting phrase, softly telling them to have a nice dream. The festival grounds fell completely silent as Arisu's magic took hold. Townspeople collapsed onto the ground one after another, completely knocked out by the spell. Aina looked on with heavy, drowsy eyes before she too drifted off into a deep slumber. Everyone just got put in airplane mode. Shiro scanned the surroundings in utter shock, frantically demanding to know what she had just done. Arisu merely smiled back at him, calmly dismissing his panic by claiming that it was just a little illusion. She then turned her full attention back to him, noting that it was time to move on to the next step. Before Shiro could even process her words, Arisu wrapped her arms tightly around him, catching him completely off guard. Caught off guard, Shiro panicked and yelled, asking what she was doing. However, Arisu only ignored his protests and told him that it was time to do it. That sentence should be illegal in every timeline. Shiro frantically questioned what she meant by that. So Arisu simply looked upward with a smug grin, asking if it wasn't obvious, as a swirling dark portal materialized in the night sky right above them. Without warning, Arisu tightly gripped her grandson and loudly declared that they were going home. Before Shiro could break free, the magical gravity took hold, and the two launched straight up into the air toward the swirling spatial rift. Shiro could only let out a terrified, echoing scream, begging his grandmother to wait as they vanished into the portal.